A sprawling city gleams below the mountains, hiding its rot behind glass. And one towering office block becomes the stage for a very bad mistake. Because Taesun, Waryong's second-in-command, is already framed as the problem, while some nervous suit starts questioning him. Like authority ever saved fools. Then the prosecutor reveals a warrant. From Incheon. As if paperwork mattered here. Taesun laughs off the formality, roasting the weak and calling out the abuse. He even spells out the corruption, smugly reducing their high-minded lecture to power games. The glasses-wearing prosecutor doubles down, demanding cooperation and pretending law still bends fear. Taesun only grins wider, convinced rotten institutions can't survive his stare. And the old man gets brushed aside, because new blood always learns the hard way. Kang Baryun drops the politeness, introducing himself like paperwork can save anyone, but the smugness in that car already knows his mood is a problem, not a warning. Then the blonde driver needles the silence, guessing some daytime humiliation forced this visit, and his brown-suited companion kills the vibe, calling it a terrible day. Obviously, which is adorable, because that one careless remark earns a lethal reply from Baryun. And in the next beat, the whole car gets turned into a fireball. So much for bravado. Smoke and sparks swallow the road, while the blonde fool panics over Jaeho's condition, because Jaeho is barely responding, and the driver finally sounds like he understands consequences. Then the brown-haired man snaps awake to the horror, screaming Jaeho's name in disbelief. As the wreck burns brighter, Baryun's warning lands like a verdict nobody can appeal. Trapped in the wreck, the wounded man begs his brother to survive, while the blonde idiot suddenly realizes the driver's seat is turning into a coffin, and Baryun's little visit somehow became a roadside nightmare, courtesy of one explosive mistake. Inside the burning car, the blonde one reads the faces and instantly knows this was no accident. Then the survivor's grip tightens on Jaeho's hand, screaming for revenge like grief needs paperwork, and the blast's aftermath leaves the whole thing looking less like a crash, more like a verdict. Later, the scene shifts to a pristine hospital building, absurdly calm for such a disaster, where a patient finally wakes up, staring at the ceiling like death tried and failed. He lies there wondering what miracle dragged him back, and whether this place is even real. Then a nurse rolls in with that professional calm, because apparently survival still needs service. Baryun barely manages a plea for water, already fried from whatever wrecked him. Then a startled woman catches the wake-up, because miracles always arrive, looking underdressed. She bolts for the doctor, turning a quiet ward into panic with one glance, while Baryun starts questioning his own body, insulted that it stayed this skinny, and the ceiling offers no answers. Only the humiliating fact has been out for months, until footsteps snap the room back to life, meaning the professionals finally showed up, with the doctor checking if Kang Baryun is awake. As if that wasn't obvious enough, Baryun's own hands confirm the absurdity, untouched and unscarred like a blank page, but the second he shifts, the staff panics and warns him that movement is dangerous, because something sharp has already found his side, and the room just got ugly. Even now, he's still staring at his own face, baffled by the comeback, and the prosecutor beside him practically short-circuits hearing Kang Baryun's name, because waking up like this is already rude. But waking up demanding freedom is legendary. While the ward settles into that eerie, expensive silence only hospitals can fake, then the doctor arrives to apologize, casually admitting Baryun's been gone for ages, and Baryun smugly confirms he's awake, only to hear his body nearly got ruined. So the doctor starts probing the accident, expecting scraps, not a total blank, but Baryun remembers nothing, which is hilarious considering the fall he survived. Even the doctor warns the memory may crawl back later, along with trauma, because apparently his grand accident was simply plummeting from a high-rise. The doctor coolly explains Baryun survived after slamming a roadside tree first, then tumbling onto the sidewalk, which somehow softened that disaster. But the prosecutor's narrowed stare screams he's hiding a whole second story, because falling from a high-rise is not exactly a normal accident. Now is it? And Baryun pushes for honesty, acting brave while still tied to that hospital bed, until the doctor reveals another detective visited while he was unconscious, and that absurd detail spirals into suspicion, because they even called it suicide, with Prosecutor Kang standing there looking like the rumor just slapped him silly, as he wonders if someone really tried to murder him, and the evidence bites back, because the note exists, and the whole accident story is collapsing fast. Someone carefully tried to erase Prosecutor Kang, because this wasn't random, and the hospital bed warning lands like a polite insult to his ego, while a watcher in the doorway keeps the whole room feeling suspicious. So Baryun decides the first priority is finding his own body. Apparently, since the crash left him in a wheelchair and nowhere near the ICU, then he drags out Taesun's name, testing whether the staff is sweating, and the room freezes. because that name clearly carries ugly history, as the doctor admits a friend said Taeson was there too, which makes the nurse look ready to faint. Like this gossip just grew teeth, and the truth finally drops. He survived only on a ventilator. Baryun was barely hanging on, then slipped fully beyond consciousness, and by yesterday morning, the man everyone buried was already gone. Meanwhile, the crash aftermath turned his hospital bed into a wheelchair parade, and his first nasty test was dragging Taeson's name into the silence, which sent the room into instant panic, because that ICU rumor had teeth. Then Taeson's funeral photo appeared, making the whole place look deliciously doomed. The polished shoes at the memorial only deepened the stink of hidden violence, while Baryun, still shameless, mocked the ceremony with that face-obsessed attitude. That corpse-soft body had survived countless crises, and fights never scared him. So when a hand landed on his shoulder, he finally looked genuinely stunned. A stranger grabs Baryun mid-conversation, and the room instantly smells trouble, because that cheap suit belongs to nobody innocent. Just pressure closing in fast, then Baryun panics over Jaeho, and the other man's face says disaster, while he snaps back about Jaeho being gone, completely ruining the hopeful act. Then the funeral truth lands. And suddenly this whole scene turns hilariously tragic, because even Jaeho's name carries smoke, fire, and one miserable month of survival, as the memorial admits Taeson's death, making Baryun's questions look painfully late, and the flowers, incense, and polished grief all point to a gangster's farewell, while everyone remembers Taeson as the kind of thug worth respecting, apparently, until the final reveal. He burned alive saving Jaeho, then clung to oxygen. At the wake, Taeson's ghosted reputation still dominates, and Baryun hears the insult. The prosecutor gets corrected for his casual tone, because he started it first. So the smug routine continues, with both men acting familiar like old enemies. Then the funeral truth lands hard, and the accident suddenly feels orchestrated. Baryun vows revenge on that bastard, looking far less confident than before. The black-haired man coolly warns against recklessness. While Baryun keeps spiraling, Taeson's death is confirmed, and the enraged ally starts screaming murder. Baryun begs for Hyung's return, desperate enough to do anything at all. Taeson's salvation of Beomjin surfaces too, twisting grief into a dangerous hope. Back at the table, Baryun's interference earns one last glare, hilariously late. The smug reunion starts with a suited stranger baiting Beomjin, acting way too familiar. Then Taeson finally drops his name, and the room instantly regrets breathing. Baryun's face crumples into rage, because apparently dead men love bad timing. He lunges forward, all panic and pride, like that ever ends well. And now the joke lands ugly, with Taeson blocking him and snapping the name back. The prosecutor doubles down, demanding no weapons, as if manners matter now. Taeson answers with that cold brotherly menace, controlling the room like it's his again. Baryun spills the history, whining about being haunted since childhood. Classic emotional damage. He can't even process the idea that Taeson is really his Hyung. Then Taeson shrugs off the miracle, admitting he woke up already trapped in this body. Taeson's apology drops like a knife, and Jaeho's crash suddenly feels personal, while Baryun, still in that hospital gown, gets told the rescue failed spectacularly. Then the black-haired revenge junkie insists on handling things himself, because subtlety is dead, and Taeson calmly redirects him back to the organization. Like ownership never changed, Baryun pushes back, whining that going without Hyung is unbearable, which is honestly pathetic. Then he admits Director Park is exactly the face he hates seeing. So wow. Priorities. Taeson doubles down on the plan, demanding a replacement while he hunts this in his body, because he needs eyes and ears inside Hwaryong to expose whoever tried killing him. Baryun finally straightens up, accepting the role with a smug little promise, and the patient arrives on cue, ready to walk straight into another disaster. In the hospital corridor, Taeson's return lands like a ghost with better tailoring, and Baryun nearly loses his cool, blurting his worry the second he sees him, while Taeson plays clueless, acting like he just stepped out for air, not death, which only makes the prosecutor's shock funnier, because that few minutes excuse is garbage. Then Baryun noses the air, suspects drinking, and instantly sounds like a disappointed parent, so Taeson shrugs it off, admitting he lingered at a hospital, of all places, after helping mourners at a funeral home, because apparently dead men need networking too. Baryun then spirals into sarcasm, mocking the endless scolding and demanding the culprit's name, but Taeson coolly reminds him the chairman worried, even visiting during the coma, and that final family talk leaves Baryun trapped, because blood ties hit harder than pride. Taeson drops that old family nickname act, like death was just a quick nap, and Baryun gets handed a fresh phone and emergency credit, because apparently miracles come with perks. Then Taesan waves off the fuss, sounding bored enough to dismiss the whole hallway, while Baryun fumes over the situation, exhausted by the endless mess and its timing, because this is still the same hospital room where he expected answers, not resurrection, and there sits the phone like a tiny black omen, carrying more secrets than comfort. Taesan sizes him up, mocking the weak little frame with disgustingly smooth confidence, then accepts the arrangement anyway, because beggars, dead men, and prosecutors can all be picky later, before promising to use Baryun's body and follow the thread behind the death, and Baryun, stunned, realizes this corpse-level ally is now his worst possible lifeline. Taesan acts like the funeral was routine, because apparently death is just paperwork. Then Baryun gets grilled about work, and the association's takeover starts smelling ugly, while the city redevelopment deal hangs over everything like a very expensive threat, and the real headache is the association, wrecked because Director Park snatched too many people, so when Baryun hints there's one suspicious thread, Taesan's calm turns razor sharp, and that little "oh" reaction says he's already clocked the mess behind the curtain, because the drugs are the core problem, a filthy package no one can pretend is clean, and Baryun finally admits the accident came after a private meeting with Chairman Lee Woongbei, where Director Park Jung-sung tried selling the chairman a drug deal, real classy disaster, and of course Baryun opposed it immediately, only for the chairman to call it impossible. Baryun's hospital room hunch lands first, and the chairman's backing already smells strategic, because approval is one thing, but aggressive pushing screams a deal with teeth, not manners. Still, Baryun doubts it, sweating through denial like the chairman could never be that rotten. Then Taesan's memorial looms in his mind, and the accident starts looking absurdly convenient. That's when Park Jung-sung's shadow enters the story, wearing guilt like a cheap cologne, while Baryun connects the crash, the drugs, and that smug chairman into one filthy triangle. Down in the hospital, the staff admit the passenger is being booked for manslaughter, but prosecutors still label it a drowsy driving accident, because apparently paperwork loves pretending, with prison talk, weak connections, and a dead Hyung shaping the verdict already. And that is exactly why Baryun's suspicions keep tightening around the whole chain. Doesn't look like hell lasts long, and somebody already died, so Baryun starts chasing the mastermind, even if prison delays the fun, because if that rotten setup fails, crushing the target gets easier, and Taesan's presence hits him like a cursed memory from nowhere. Then he asks who dug up Prosecutor Kang, only to hear secrets, including his absurdly powerful background as a Chaebol heir. Wow. Which means he's basically an enemy of Chairman Joss' legitimate heirs, especially with the dead eldest son, inheritance, panic, and family tension, since those remaining children fear Baryun could wreck their succession games, so he stares back, stunned by the phrase representation inheritance. Baryun drops the killer twist. The dead father's share passes to children, and instantly the room fills with faceless suits, because greed always loves a loophole. Then the inheritance math gets uglier, with the eldest son gone and succession wobbling, so the smart granddaughter suddenly matters, drawing praise for working with Prosecutor Kang, which makes her alliance look like a power move in the family's nasty succession war, and that partnership turns the second son's camp into suspects with dirt on their shoes, while Baryun, still in hospital silk, pieces together the suspects narrowing like a trap. Then he files everything on Kang, acting way too calm for a man holding a loaded scandal. The burner phone changes hands next, file included, like a classy little bribery farewell, and the bored patient finally checks the evidence, because now somebody's whole family is sweating. Kang Baryun's file surfaces first, and it already screams troublesome prosecutor, while some smug pretty boy casually smirks, acting like everything's a joke, until he spots Han Yoonju in the paperwork, and suddenly the room tightens, because this is that actress from his childhood, the one he never forgot, who debuted young, became a star, then vanished right when Taesan entered middle school. Her disappearance leaves only rumors and luggage, the kind that travel faster than truth, and one ugly whisper says she became Chairman Joss' mistress, which is convenient nonsense, until Baryun starts linking that face to the chairman's family and old shadows, with the whole Hanjong director circle looking a little too clean for comfort. Then a car blasts past the tower below, like the scandal just got legs. In the car, Baryun's discharge already reeks of bigger trouble, because he claims the hospital cleared him and the escort duty starts now. Outside the apartment tower, they discover someone beat them here, and the hallway gossip says the place was trashed from floor to floor. Baryun's neat little cleanup turns sinister when he seals the scene anyway. Then he and the chairman's man sift through theft, insisting nothing obvious is missing, but the living room suddenly feels staged, like a quiet crime museum, while Baryun drops the act and decides has Prosecutor Kang now, which somehow means distance, burner phones, and way too much confidence, because this partnership is already dirty enough to need shadows. Bae-ryun plays the recovered patient, swearing his healing is moving embarrassingly smoothly, then doubles down like a cocky survivor, refusing to look like easy prey anymore, and the chairman's aide accepts it, ordering quiet surveillance, burner distance, and company eyes, while Bae-ryun thanks him with that tired little half-smirk, already acting like Prosecutor Kang. Outside the apartment tower, someone has clearly beaten them there, and the place feels staged, because the front man's bravado meets a housekeeper's ice-cold glare, which is somehow hilarious. Then the elegant woman inside draws attention, tripping the gossip wires with a single question, as the housekeeper panics, shielding her from the doorway and ordering her back in, fast, and the woman's worried face only deepens the mystery, now that she's been spotted, because this whole residence is hiding more than bloodstains, and Bae-ryun knows it. At the doorway, the masked beauty acts warm, but keeps secrets, and Bae-ryun's sharp glance catches the weird timing before anything else does, because this sunset-colored silence screams old history, not some cute reunion. Then the hospital memory hits, with a motherly figure refusing abandonment. As if that's obvious, Bae-ryun talks big, insisting adulthood and career make him untouchable. Cute little rookie logic, but mom's worry keeps landing harder, until he finally softens and checks on her. Then she calls his name, and his hand snaps up like instinct-remembered pain, while her speech turns into a brutal pep talk about becoming unforgettable and feared. Bae-ryun wakes from that nightmare drenched in dread, staring like reality just tackled him, and before he can breathe, the bed becomes chaos, proving dreams hate him. Bae-ryun wakes shaking, and that nightmare clearly wasn't just a dream, because the hallway door keeps buzzing like reality refuses to be polite. His phone screen says morning, but his nerves say disaster, and even the question of who's calling already smells suspicious. Then a mysterious woman appears, looking far too familiar for comfort. As Bae-ryun reaches for the lock, trying not to unravel completely, she steps in with that infuriatingly warm smile, acting like family, while he freezes, stunned, because the welcome feels way too intimate. Then the embrace lands, and suddenly the mystery gets embarrassingly personal, until the name drops. Jo Hyunyoung, the dead eldest son's daughter. Bae-ryun finally answers Nuna, and the room instantly turns dangerously domestic, while she apologizes for the delay, then casually warns about Grandpa catching her. Her smile gets suspiciously soft, as if corporate succession is just family gossip, and Bae-ryun stands there blankly, already trapped in a déjà vu he hates. Then the dream girl memory hits, because apparently his subconscious has terrible timing, and he starts wondering whether Prosecutor Kang has become her personal fate, but the next thought says they are nowhere near close enough for that mess. So she shifts gears, offering his favorite cookies like bribery wrapped in kindness, and he sits there like a statue, wondering if childish snacks are her strategy. Even her rushed invitation feels loaded, because this family sweetness is pure trouble. Bae-ryun sits there stiffly, still recovering, while this strange home-cooked hospitality closes in, and before he can overthink it, the cookie disappears into his mouth like bait, which sends him freezing up, because apparently one bite just rewired his entire brain. Then the woman asks after his condition, softening the room like she owns the mood, and he practically announces that this tastes like Prosecutor Kang's favorite bribe, so subtle, while she keeps smiling, calling this reunion comfortable and way too familiar for comfort. Then she admits nobody expects much from them, but she wants to stun everyone anyway, and Bae-ryun catches himself wondering if she is trying the classic friendship trap, right when he spots her framed like a memory, poking at his prosecutor obsession. Until time slips by, she panics, and the visit ends with another almost normal lie. Jo Hyunyoung wraps the visit with a sugary goodbye, and Bae-ryun, the moment she's gone, he drops like his body forgot loyalty altogether. Then the hospital room turns into a private workout dungeon, because apparently, even bare feet and sweat can't stop this man from rebuilding himself fast. By the time he's towel drying, Bae-ryun looks carved out of pure spite, and that smug little smile says he's already plotting his comeback. With his wardrobe laid out like a royal deployment for tomorrow's grind, every folded suit and belt screaming that this prosecutor routine is no accident, then the polished version of Bae-ryun stands ready, adjusting himself like a man who's about to make somebody ask if he's a prosecutor or celebrity. Bae-ryun's reinstatement lands like a polite threat, because even congratulations sound tactical, and Criminal Division 3 is already the destination, where his report becomes priority 1. The elevator ride-up feels silent and surgical, like a man entering a battlefield, and at room 501, he decides minimum talk, maximum caution, because office politics bite. The door handle turns, and his arrival finally reaches the building's hidden nerve center. Inside, the prosecution floor is busy enough to look normal, which is always suspicious, Then a staffer recognizes him with way too much warmth. Still shocked he survived the crash, Baryun stays composed, confirms he is fine, and asks for the chief with zero hesitation. The knock answers first, a tiny declaration that the comeback tour just got official, and when he steps in, the room gets its cleanest nightmare. "Hello, Chief." Criminal Division 3 Chief Jang Jinho greets Baryun, already acting pleasantly smug, then immediately pushes the "you look healthier" routine. Like that's subtle. Baryun takes the seat, apologizes for the worry, and keeps his face unreadable, while everyone quietly blames depression, overload, and skipped medication for his absence. Jinho keeps selling the company man sympathy act, then pretends Baryun's talent matters, but Baryun snaps back that prosecutors and thugs call it a company. Same circus. And the office remembers An So Young had it rough too. So the mood gets heavier. Jinho carefully says the leave was for health reasons, warning him to watch his mouth, because Baryun has already reached the 506 interrogation room, and the target is set, where he finally confirms this is Jang Jinho's office, and the welcome turns icy. The hallway gets awkward fast when Seo Dongwook corners Kang Baron, pretending this reunion is charming, but Baryun's ice-cold stare makes that fake warmth collapse, and the older colleague suddenly sounds offended. From above, the whole exchange looks petty and delicious, like office politics wearing expensive suits, because Dongwook cannot believe Baryun spoke too casually, as if respect is optional these days. So Baryun apologizes without blinking, the kind of apology that fixes nothing and says everything. Then Dongwook leans in with that smug little hand on the shoulder, acting like a reunion victim, while Baryun stands there unreadable, hearing the lecture about work, obedience, and his miraculous return, and for a second the corridor feels like a trap, until Baryun coolly accepts the sermon, only to cut it off by moving toward the office door, ending the performance on his own terms, and Dongwook, still grinning, watches him enter, muttering that old habits really do die hard. The hallway opens on Baryun's return, and the driver immediately tests him, but Baryun answers with a bow so polite it feels like a knife. Then Dongwook circles in, calling out team leader Lee Hungriel, while the driver explains Taeson is just a meddlesome shield for Baryun, and Baryun finally requests a private word, reclaiming the office tone, as Dongwook tries the classic concern routine, all fake warmth and no spine. Baryun shrugs off the accident, admitting a missing stretch of memory, then casually says he forgot everything, turning the whole building silent, and that secret becomes his excuse for staying sharp at reinstatement, while the driver smugly suggests rest, pretending pity is wisdom. Baryun brushes off the fallout, claiming that answer is not really an option, then corners the logic of the scene, asking if he ever looked suicidal, and when the old man evidence gets shaky, he swats the whole theory aside, forcing everyone to notice his own surroundings, because something here smells off. So the messy prosecutor case gets recast as possible setup, not suicide, and Baryun presses harder, asking how much memory actually vanished, before admitting most of it is gone, including work, which is wildly inconvenient. So he uses office silence as cover, while the investigation drifts back to headquarters, where a polite trainee prosecutor appears, finally giving the newbie his face, and Jinho seals the intro, handing Baryun prosecutor Choi like backup. That's the face of a prosecutor who looks way too young, yet those eyes still carry enough weight to make excuses look stupid, and the office chatter quickly turns his age into a punchline, because surviving as a prosecutor with that look sounds miserable, but Baryun cuts straight through the small talk, refusing the usual friendly act, and his attitude basically says, save the buddy routine for somebody else, which leaves the smug coworker frozen, suddenly realizing this kid bites. Then Jinho drops the name Choi Jinwoo, handing Baren a trainee, and Baryun answers with the kind of awkward caution that screams trouble, while the old man in the room just watches this mess get colder. Baryun turns the office scolding into a quiet legal flex, and the room stiffens, because his fake humility only sharpens the lesson, and the newbie gets sized up fast. Then paperwork floods the desk, the kind that says disaster management, not casual busy work, but Baryun studies the mess like it's a joke, admitting even he can't untangle it, until the door opens and the polished newcomer appears, all neat suit and obedient charm, and that entrance lands harder than expected, because Baryun instantly recognizes the replacement, while Jang Jinho plays host with that smug executive confidence, like this is normal, and Jo Hyunyoung's calm arrival only makes the whole office feel suspiciously expensive. From above, the handoff looks tidy, but everyone knows this case is anything but, because Baryun already owns the pile, and the rest are just catching up. Baryun stares at the paperwork pile, already knowing this mess is ridiculous. Then the hospital woman spots his missing glasses and politely pokes the sore wound. He shrugs off recovery talk, saying work's about to get inconvenient again, and the office approves it like that's a normal way to live. By the desk, fresh files and orders stack up like disaster wearing a tie, while footsteps echo through the hallway. Announcing another day of political babysitting, the woman walks in briskly, carrying that tired, overworked professionalism, and 3 days earlier, she was already hunting for Prosecutor Kang. Then 2 days earlier, the same question got the same evasive answer, and 1 day ago, her patience cracked as he was still out in the field. The hospital woman storms in, scolding Baryun for roaming before full recovery, then demands to know whether Prosecutor Kang is even here, like he vanished, and the front desk casually confirms he is inside, which helps nobody much, while the office atmosphere keeps humming, all paperwork and orders piling up, like disaster dressed in a tie. Pretending this is a normal workday, Barone stands there with that deadpan pressure, and Dongwook instantly loses his swagger. As a hand reaches for the phone, the room buzzes with awkward panic. Dongwook's eyes narrow in pure dread, finally realizing who he mocked. Then the woman checks whether he slept well, sounding almost suspiciously polite, and Baryun coolly roasts him, saying she arrived just now while he was out cold. Baryun hands over the case records, casually expecting the lead to catch up, and the annoyed colleague immediately mutters about the nuisance, while pretending he is busy. Then the moment Baryun snaps back, her confidence evaporates, because smug people always fold fastest, before a cap-wearing visitor barges in with another robbery update, dragging work into the spotlight, and Baryun's department chief steps up. Grinning like this chaos is somehow a team-building exercise, the report lands on the desk, and the answer is basically a polished deal with it later. Then the assigned task gets brought up again, as if nobody in this office understands rest. So Barine reads the file in silence, looking far too calm for a man surrounded by paperwork, while the chief praises his competence and pushes forward, because of course he does. By the end, Baryun, the chief, and the woman all freeze in that lovely office tension. Inside Criminal Division 3, Barune demands the file, and the room tightens. The female prosecutor admits most cases were handed to him, while majors went elsewhere. Then even the rookie trainee gets tossed into his wake. Courtesy of office favoritism, Baryun's glare lands cleanly, and her confidence evaporates almost immediately. Outside, the smug office chatter turns into sunset gossip about this troublesome man. While two men cruise through the city, worrying Prosecutor An might notice too much, one plans to stay vague, because honesty might expose his scheme to kill Kang. The other prefers delays and secrecy, like criminals suddenly discovered consequences. Meanwhile, a radio call requests backup near Yeonsu Dae's world, which screams bad news, and the driver's panic proves the situation nearby is already spiraling hard. They've boxed the apartment in, while evidence gets torched inside, and the so-called hideout is just another internet gambling pit, allegedly run by Park Jung-sung, that king of respectable criminal nonsense, whose smug driver still acts like the place is a casual drive. But Baryun is already heading there, and that grin says trouble. With backup ordered in, the building suddenly becomes a legal siege, yet the hired men at the door keep pretending resistance is clever, until Baryun's flat answer lands and their confidence starts leaking, leaving one guy sweating through his bravado, calling him a bastard, while Baryun calmly asks about the warrant, because of course he does. The smug crew keeps stalling, but Baryun's patience is already sharpening, because legal niceties mean nothing to men who worship chaos, and the first idiot learns that talking big is not immunity. So when Baryun grabs his collar, the room's bravado folds immediately, leaving the poor clown dangling like a suit full of bad decisions, before he gets launched across the hallway in glorious embarrassment, while another guy screams for his brother, staring at the wreckage, and then Baryun finally introduces himself as Incheon's prosecutor, which makes the door crew freeze, suddenly remembering law exists, and the whole entrance snaps into motion, clearing a path fast. The building erupts into panic, and Baryun's arrival already smells like trouble, because the so-called guards fail to stop him, getting folded by legal pressure, while the door crew scrambles to delay entry, suddenly remembering consequences exist, and Baryun answers their noise with one clean hit, sending arrogance flying. His glare stays colder than the corridor, which is impressive, honestly, for a prosecutor, as he crushes the nearest thug and orders the crowbar, turning their confidence stupid. Outside, desperate hands beg for time, but the apartment is already lost. Then the smug face of the instigator finally cracks, realizing the joke is on him, because Baryun is done playing nice, and the apology is way too late. With one twist of the knob, the whole scheme gets dragged into daylight. Baryun's glare lands first, and the hallway instantly feels doomed. Then his fist hits the door, making cowardice finally move. The blonde accomplice panics, begging someone to erase the hard drive, but Baryun is already inside, and their timing is hilariously dead. The prosecutor cuts in with icy authority, halting the cleanup stunt. While the blonde idiot stares like trouble just learned his name, Baryun answers with a brutal chase, sending the bastard fleeing. He pins the panic on the railing, mocking any escape fantasy. The suited intruder freezes as Baryun closes the distance, fists ready, because on the third floor, even jumping just means a worse landing. Cornered on the balcony, the blonde idiot panics and begs for the hard drive, but Baryun is already there, and the cleanup plan dies instantly, embarrassingly. The prosecutor cuts in with icy authority, and the coward nearly folds. One wrong step later, the suit-clad fool ends up dangling over empty space. Baryun catches the wrist, and that smug escape fantasy collapses fast. Then the grip tightens, because even panic gets arrested by better reflexes. With one cold stare, Baryun turns the man's arm into leverage. The driver screams for help, while Baryun keeps him pinned, helplessly trembling. He drags the bastard upright and warns him to stay still. Idiot. With evidence secured, the whole rooftop farce finally belongs to Baryun. Even the background noise flinches when Kang Baryun's injury gets noticed, and the beanie-clad informant instantly regrets opening his mouth that casually, because Baryun treats a busted arm like a minor inconvenience, not drama, so the poor guy can only stare, sweating through his own confidence. By nightfall, the office glow returns, but nothing about Baryun softens, especially not around An So-young, who's already seeing how relentless he is, since has been wandering around doing nothing, until today finally forced words, and that little confession lands like a brick, because nobody buys innocence here. Even An So-young pauses, sensing Baryun's arm is hiding something ugly, while he plays it off, smiling like pain is just another work accessory. He starts sweating immediately, promising to explain everything before reality bites, and she shuts that excuse down, grilling him over the supposed assault, because prosecutors using violence is messy. Even when the warrant nearly landed anyway, Baryun shrugs it off as paperwork drama, insisting the arrest beat the paperwork, while the investigation rolls on under a bright sky, like nothing ever happened. Back at Jang Jinho's office, the chief welcomes the report, all business, and Baryun downplays his injuries again, which is hilarious considering that arm sling, since the company's real problem is the scene, not his bruised pride, so Choi Jinwoo apologizes, while Baron's recent visit suddenly becomes suspicious, and Jinho leans in, already smelling a bigger mess than anyone once admitted. Baryun brushes off the police cop drama, blaming prosecutors' paperwork instead, while Jang lets the warning slide, ordering him to recover quietly, then needles him about recklessness and that psychiatric treatment. Classic office-level concern trolling. Baryun answers with practiced calm, and even Jinho's casual approval can't hide tension. Outside, the city looks innocent, which is adorable considering the mess underneath. Back in the office, Baryun admits Prosecutor An's pressure and Jang's weird shift, so he leans into the screen, already building a plan in silence. Then the nervous trainee Choi Jinwoo arrives with the completed report. Baryun thanks him, takes the file, and finally gets the evidence he wanted. Staring it down, he decides to see exactly how deep this rabbit hole goes. The recycling center suspect finally surfaces, clutching stolen appliances and staying silent, while Baryun cuts through the nonsense with that usual prosecutor stare, calling him a habitual thief. Then the legal math gets explained. Employees can't steal what they never possessed, and the room suddenly remembers ownership rights exist, shocking absolutely no one but themselves. So Baryun says hell, rewrite the report, because apparently this whole mess needed a grown-up. Jinho watches from behind him, politely urging him to spell it out slower, and the case gets reduced to kindergarten law. Who held possession, and who didn't, because if the owner delegated buying power, this stops being theft and starts smelling like embezzlement. Baryun locks onto that loophole, realizing the truth changes depending on who got entrusted first, and just like that, the whole case clicks, with the smug answers finally collapsing. Baryun gets the division moving, ordering cleaner reports in every active case now. Then the whole office calendar freezes, because his brain is clearly doing overtime. Inside the paperwork jungle, he stares at the files like they finally started speaking, and suddenly the headache makes sense, as if genius came with free whiplash. He realizes the law's little trap, where possession decides who gets blamed. So the smug theft theory crumbles, and embezzlement starts looking painfully obvious. Jinho quietly backs him up, letting the nearby lawyer get dragged into focus, while the neighboring district's Han Kyung-wook becomes the next convenient monster, because apparently this man is supposed to handle the mess with a smile. And that's the punchline. Taeson's ally is a drunk gambler lawyer. Ju Bion's nickname comes from booze, and Taeson's house still kept him around, even as private loans and ugly debts spread across the table like cheap gossip, because his men kept dragging him into messes, so usefulness beat dignity again. and the fancy apartment view only made that arrangement look more ridiculous, since his call seemed like debt collection, but it was actually tutoring bait, with the young man's real concern being his link to Kim Byomjin. Naturally, then the question turns to law school prep, and suddenly personal details matter, but confidentiality gets weaponized, so the pressure to confess looks pointless. The poor guy sweats, realizes he's cornered, and starts folding fast, and that's when Han Kyung-wook grins, ready to teach crime from zero. So the rookie skips murder and robbery, demanding the real syllabus, and Kyung-wook actually respects the speed, even if the kid knows almost nothing, because this whole lesson starts with crime basics stacked like homework bricks, yet that familiar stare gives him instant déjà vu and suspicious respect. Then Bae-ryun keeps digging, and the man starts sweating over Kim Byomjin, until the lawyer folds hard, realizing that cocky mouth just got lawyered. Outside, the office view screams success while the legal nonsense gets uglier. Inside Criminal Division 3, An So-young is already calling Bae-ryun back in, and she hands over the report, quietly noticing the injured hand excuse, which means Bae-ryun's rewrite worked, and now everyone else is behind him. Even with the cast, Bae-ryun keeps cool, fingers still screaming trouble. Then the office phone interrupts everything, because his little act needs cover. An So-young checks the report, suspiciously polite, and finds nothing rotten. Bae-ryun apologizes like a saint, promising to handle prosecutor duties himself. Her face says one thing clearly: this guy is acting weirdly smooth. Outside, the city views his return as suspicious, which is fair enough. Then the beanie guy drops in, handing over the rewritten report. An So-young approves it, and Bae-ryun gets that priceless, haunted compliance. He insists the puzzle is unfinished, while the beanie guy relaxes. Still, Bae-ryun takes over the basics, and the whole office feels it. Bae-ryun starts casually baiting the room, pretending teamwork still means anything, then smacks the awkward silence with a fake high five, because professionalism is apparently a joke, and the beanie man freezes up like he just met a walking warrant, while Bae-ryun's casted hand gets checked with awkward concern, which he dismisses like a champ, because apparently his pain matters less than everyone else's bruised ego, and he doubles down, saying the team leader got hit worse, so stop babying him. The beanie man laughs off the tension, weirdly impressed by this prosecutor relationship. Then Bae-ryun plays the open-hearted genius, making everyone realize he's not the cold robot they expected, before he asks for the case record and starts handling the criminal division work himself, and when told the case is still on trial, he barely blinks, because of course it is. The records are locked down, and even asking screams interference now. Bae-ryun just absorbs it, coolly pretending the bureaucracy never scares him, while the beanie man admits loopholes exist for insiders, not outsiders, so Bae-ryun pivots to the department behind the case, refusing to waste time. Then he drops the charge like a guillotine, turning the accident into manslaughter, and the city sprawls under the same ugly system, pretending nothing's rotten. 10 days later, the doctor is sweating over how fast recovery happened. Bae-ryun brushes off the concern, while the staffer keeps acting uneasy, because the x-rays show the break vanished, and that alone smells impossible. So the doctor starts babbling about errors, desperately denying the bone healed. The doctor sounds relieved, but that healed bone detail feels suspicious. Outside, Kang Bae-ryun is already chasing the traffic case no one wants. The investigating department keeps it, and Bae-ryun immediately demands the chief prosecutor. Seo Dong-wook gets named, because of course the smug colleague appears. Bae-ryun pretends he is distant, which somehow sounds even more dangerous. SEO volunteers to sweet-talk him, acting like corruption is just networking. Bae-ryun's stare says even prosecutors can be negotiated with, apparently, so he decides to meet Seo Dong-wook and stop wasting time. By night, the city glows, while the man keeps his flattering act going. That is how a close conversation exposes what strangers never would. At the dinner table, Seo starts fishing for Bae-ryun's money, and Prada taste. Bae-ryun answers with smug generosity, promising a suit like it's nothing. He even drops Kang's name, acting friendly, while quietly sizing him up. Then Bae-ryun cuts through the flirting and asks what case matters now. The answer is Shin Hung-dong's traffic death, a truck driver's sleepy disaster. Bae-ryun immediately presses harder, and Seo starts sweating through his cool act. The sudden suspicion rattles him, because records can ruin a career fast, so he tries to dodge, but Bae-ryun shuts down the cheap hospitality. Bae-ryun realizes the record request flipped everything, exposing Seo's fake charm, and now that fishy smile looks a lot less harmless. In that cramped room, the suspect mocks Bae-ryun as just another kid, but the prosecutor snaps back with Lee Kyung-mook's timeline, pinning him down, and suddenly the easy story becomes a 3-hour beating nobody can laugh off. The old brute keeps insulting Bae-ryun's age, schooling, and trainee status, yet the second that pressure lands, Seo Dongwook starts sweating through his polished act. Baroon keeps tightening the screws, demanding a proper answer instead of theater, and even that smug confidence gets kicked sideways by his own panicked reaction. Then the whole room shifts as Baroon closes in, turning casual intimidation into an arrest vibe. Lee Kyung-muk freezes when Baroon seizes his collar, finally realizing the joke's over, and the last punch lands hard, leaving him gasping while the case turns deadly serious. Baroon's grip turns brutal now, and the suspect starts whining about prosecutor conduct. But the smug act cracks fast, because Baroon only tightens the collar harder, then he flat out says self-defense, claiming the suspect forced this ugly mess. And when the trash talks legal power, Baroon makes him flinch for once. The suspect's grin finally dies, replaced by that priceless little panic spiral. Hours later, the case jumps to a hospital, where damage control gets hilarious. The report claims a wife heard 3 hours of beating, but that story's already wobbling. The suspect rewrites it into 2 slaps, as if that makes him charming. Baroon stares at the keyboard and coolly reduces it to palm strikes. Then he lands the punchline, because 2 slaps somehow became a 4-week injury. Baroon slams the room with pressure, and the thug starts sweating immediately, then admits he barely remembers how many times he hit her. Charming monster. While Baroon coolly asks what exactly he grabbed, because nuance matters now, and the answer is a beer mug, which somehow makes this uglier instantly. Baroon nails it as aggravated assault, then promises a heavy sentence, naturally, so the guy abruptly switches to politeness, suddenly grateful for everyone's hard work, even begging about his wife, as if remorse becomes a legal cheat code. But Baroon crushes that fantasy, saying this still smells like aggravated assault. Then his partner moves to lock down evidence while the office watches quietly, and even An So-young appears, leaving the coward trapped in full panic mode. Today marks Prosecutor Chua first interrogation, and the rookie's nerves are showing. While the cap-wearing witness tries to call it help, which is adorable nonsense, Baroon shuts that excuse down, reminding everyone force still poisons an investigation, and from the building outside, colleagues hear Choi still hasn't mastered pressure, so he gets told to step back, observe, and let the team leader handle it, which sends the suspect's confidence straight into the floor with one slammed door. Then the office instantly swings into praise, admiring Baroon like he just performed magic, except the girl in brown stays stone-faced, because that little circus still looks messy. Baroon keeps pressing, pinning the theft excuse against confirmed store ownership, and suddenly, the laptop side stare makes it clear, denial is over, and confession is next. Inside the interrogation room, a smug suspect reaches for cheap magic mirror nonsense and gets snapped at. Then the stolen appliances list lands hard, with Kim Sundong's embezzlement looking painfully specific. The young prosecutor's age gets mocked, but Baroon fires back, colder than the room. That brother talk hits a nerve, because separation and lost contact suddenly explain the obsession. The suspect tries changing the subject, and the chair nearly flies from all that panic. Baroon shuts the excuses down, reminding him this is crime, not some vacation. So the question turns brutal, and the suspect's denial starts collapsing in real time. Outside, another prosecutor steps in, claiming the agitated guy needs replacing. Then Baroon corners Kim Sundong over that brother, demanding the story behind him. The suspect finally cracks, asking why, and Baroon answers, "Just curious." The room opens on a stubborn silence, and Baroon lets it hang there, while the administrative officer gets a polite lunch order and the clock starts judging everyone. Then the older man digs in like hunger is a science lesson, chewing slowly, and Baroon turns that awkward patience into a smug lecture about long-starved appetites, which only makes the other side snap back harder, proving confidence can still be cheap. But Baroon just laughs it off, claiming he's lived through worse anyway. As 1730 drains into the kind of waiting that makes paperwork feel holy, then 1830 arrives, and somehow the same silence keeps winning, with Baroon standing there arms folded, looking annoyingly unbothered, until the office finally panics over an hour of nobody speaking, and tries to drag Choi Jinwoo off for dinner. In Prosecutor On's office, Baroon stays put, refusing to leave the mess yet, while dusk settles over the building like the day itself is giving up. Back inside, the mood turns clinical and awkward, as the wait finally starts, with the worn suspect sitting across from Baroon, hands folded like fake innocence. Then the man cracks open his sob story, acting like hunger explains everything, claiming childhood got shredded early, so he bolted from home and kept surviving, because his brother was taken, his mother left, and nobody bothered listening. Even when he confessed stealing just to live, the world stayed conveniently deaf, so now he whines that no one would believe him anyway, pathetic as ever, and Baroon's silence says it all. "Keep quiet," Since trust is apparently extinct, Baryun finally drops the courtroom frost, promising to hear the man out, and the suspect sits there like a busted saint, then starts his tragic performance, praising the boss as generous, while admitting he took things with permission. How noble, until the whole mess curdles into that classic question of why he got sued anyway, because the real trigger was a tiny accounting mismatch, and the boss chose paranoia. Then came the petty escalation, with purchase prices, complaints, and a report filed, all while the police ignored him for his past, which is just shockingly convenient. So when the beanie-clad visitor barges in, Baryun doesn't flinch for a second. Instead, he sends him to verify the store permission, because the meeting just ended, and if it checked out, the whole accusation could blow up in their faces. Inside Criminal Division 3, the welcome ceremony already smells like corporate humiliation, as Jinho flatters the pair, and the younger prosecutor bows like embarrassment pays rent, but Baryun just lounges there, looking far too awake for a man everyone expected to break. Then the scene cuts to the courthouse tower, where his return keeps echoing through the system. At the office doorway, the beanie-clad visitor asks for Mr. Kim Seondong, carrying evidence, and the staff says he's inside, so Baryun waves him through with zero drama, where Kim Seondong apologizes like a man expecting punishment, only to get mercy, because Baryun even accepts the apology, while teasing him over the bags he brought, and when the gift gets opened, it's just supermarket food. Not bribery, not genius, so Kim finally admits he was cleared, thanks to Baryun, then smugly adds a false charge threat. Baryun shrugs off the chaos, acting annoyingly fine after lunch. Then Dongwook arrives, polished as ever, pretending this visit is friendly. The smug act barely lands, because Baryun's face says he already knows better. Inside the package, the grand bribery attempt collapses into boring supermarket snacks. Kim Seondong thanks the prosecutor, finally admitting Baryun's words hit hard. Even the handwriting joke stings, because everyone knows this case was a mess. Then the office pivots into celebration mode, planning dinner for the rookie's return, and suddenly the quiet little restaurant looks like a victory lap for the whole team. Over hot meat and awkward silence, the suspect starts confessing like a cornered rat, while Baryun sits there, proving suspects fold fastest when he barely raises a hand. Baryun's calm stare turns the whole bribery stunt into a joke, because even veteran eyes like theirs still can't read him, and the so-called truth serum payment collapses into ridiculous snack food, making the room admit suspects crack the second he arrives. Then the beanie guy starts treating Baryun like a legend over drinks, which only makes the prosecutor's deadpan questions feel even colder, until office etiquette gets dragged into a goofy first-name lesson, and the table somehow becomes a celebratory feast for the rookie's return, while Baryun keeps accepting the respect without losing that smug control, leaving everyone convinced this guy could interrogate a wall and win. The rookie slips away for the restroom, already planning to dodge Choi's glare. Then the dinner table starts worshipping Baryun like Hez prosecutor royalty. One veteran gushes that juniors usually get puppeted, but Baryun teaches instead. Even the beanie guy swears Baryun treats him like a real prosecutor, and suddenly the room is drowning in praise over his terrifying competence. They admit he was cold before, yet somehow still the good one. After the accident, his softer edge only made him more respected. The whole table now treats his investigation like a holy mission, so when gossip turns to him, everyone instantly panics and deflects, because apparently Prosecutor Kang can roast suspects and charm allies alike. At lunch, someone asks what makes a real prosecutor, and the whole table starts worshipping Baryun's confession magnet reputation, while Baryun coolly files away that praise for later use, because even the apron-clad witness calls him a believer in justice. Soon everyone crowds around him, treating him like office royalty. Then the compliments turn into absurd textbook prosecutor nonsense, so Baryun casually asks their opinion, all ice and control, and they answer that criminals should fear him, naturally, even while clowning him for being stubbornly, painfully proper. Before the drinks and laughter prove Kang Baryun owns this room, the toast starts sloppy, and suddenly everyone's acting like royalty, because Criminal Division 3 is apparently a drinking cult with badges. Under the moonlight, Baryun's car waits while shadows gather around it. Then he smirks and refuses their absurd second-round nonsense. Naturally, back at the office, his sigh alone derails the room's bravado, and the crew ends up praising him like some terrifying moral monument. Then the big names surface, with Incheon's prosecutor general looming over deals, while whispers paint Woo Hyunjung as the big boss pet target. Baryun laughs at the chaos, already zeroing in on Seo Dongwook, because that suspicious accident thread finally points straight at him. Under moonlit towers, the prosecutor general rumor starts swirling, and the stakes climb. Baryun hears the question, linking that case to Incheon's top authority. The answer lands cold, suggesting someone high up fed the escape plan. And maybe Prosecutor Seo knows the dirty backstory, which is hilarious, really. Baryun then checks whether the whole thing deserves an investigation from him. The others panic, warning that touching a Prosecutor General level player gets messy, yet Seo gets singled out as a different beast, and Baryun smirks. Outside, the hidden disaster at the scaffolding site starts groaning into life. Then the crash aftermath appears, with one man barely hanging on, and another is left upside down, because confidence never survives physics. The scaffolding site turns into a mid-air disaster, and somebody's pride gets launched, while Baryun keeps pressing the kidnapped prosecutor angle like he already smells the rot, and the masked messenger practically begs secrecy, warning that remembering his face is a death sentence, yet the poor guy on the floor is already folding under the pressure, looking wrecked, because the whole stunt was never random, just another ugly chain tied to that hidden face, and then the car aftermath slams in, with one passenger barely conscious and the driver looking ridiculous, as the masked intruder corners Prosecutor Seo, casually treating him like office gossip, while Baryun keeps prodding for the latest case request, refusing to miss the bigger pattern, until the scene widens and everyone realizes this mess was moved from somewhere higher up, and that smug little answer lands like a confession, because of course it was never a lone job. Seo Dongwook's already sweating, because this simple talk smells like trouble, and the masked fixer dares him to remember the request. Right now, while Baryun refuses the bluff, pressing for who ordered the paperwork, since this wasn't random, just a chain from somebody higher up, Dongwook panics and denies everything, which is adorable for a man cornered. Then the masked enforcer proves manners are overrated and starts cutting deeper, leaving Dongwook rattled, whining like he forgot how consequences work, but Baryun keeps drilling him, exposing the case as a staged handoff, as the grabbed wrist and flashing blade make the room feel microscopic, and Dongwook finally cracks, screaming he knows nothing at all. That masked enforcer just stared back, like your bluff was amateur hour. Then the knife hit flesh, and Dongwook immediately folded, suddenly eager to cooperate, because this accident was never random, just a weirdly obedient chain from above, and Baryun kept pressing the smug office clown, who was now sweating through his suit, while the masked man waved off the flimsy excuse, proving panic wasn't strategy. Then the blade dropped to the floor as the real order finally surfaced, with Baryun dragging the truth out first, then demanding who gave instructions, leaving Dongwook bent under the pressure, because hiding a face was clearly part of the plan, and the warning got uglier fast. They'd kill him, Prosecutor, whenever they felt like it, so Dongwook could only stammer agreement, which is exactly the confidence we expected. The case looms over a grim government tower, and Baryun is back, in the hallway, where someone needles him about court, and he keeps moving, with that tired look of a man who already knows the trial's a trap, because Dongwook can barely hide his nerves, sweating under Baron's stare, while the masked intermediary casually ties the Shinhyung Dong mess to Taezan, and Baryun, of course, is the only one here still asking real questions. So when he presses Dongwook about the case, the coward folds immediately, admitting the suspect died in the accident, which conveniently sounds suspicious, and Baryun wants the files next, because obviously the accident was never random. Outside room 801, the Prosecutor General's floor already feels sealed shut, and inside the office, Dongwook gets a courtesy check-in he clearly hates, because Baryun brings up the traffic case, the verdict, and no appeal, while that masked shadow keeps baiting him toward a bigger conspiracy. So Baryun asks why the boss cares, and the answer screams importance. Then comes the awkward confession that curiosity was just careful networking, and Dongwook panics when Baryun jokes about politicians and future office dreams, because the real guess lands harder. A former prosecutor with connections, meaning this case is rotten at the top, exactly where cowards panic most. Back in the prosecution office, Baryun gets that quiet, suspicious call, and suddenly Taeson's shadow feels less dead, because the whole case starts pointing upward, past Park Jung-sung, into the kind of mess cowards call business. Then the scene snaps to the prison interview room, where even the air looks expensive and hopeless, and the unidentified inmate tries playing mystery man, as if that costume somehow makes him less doomed. Baryun drops his title with that prosecutor chill, then opens the traffic case like a scalpel, forcing the other side to fidget when the verdict, the facts, and the no-appeal reality start closing in, so the prisoner's tough act cracks. Just enough to admit he already knows far more than he should, and when Baryun leans in about death, the room turns icy, because arrogance looks pathetic under pressure, while the masked handler finally unveils the real leash, proving this rotten game reaches way beyond prison. Baryun sits across the prisoner and casually threatens to reopen everything, then shrugs off the offer with that prosecutor smile, because of course he does, while the inmate pretends confusion, but the panic is already leaking through, Baryun keeps pressing for the name behind it, offering protection with a knife edge, and the prisoner snaps back about promises, age, and how ugly freedom gets, so Baryun buys him time, just 1 week. Like a man scheduling misery. 7 days later, Yeoju prison drops a death notice that changes everything. The case gets kicked to their department, and autopsy duty comes with a warning. Baryun immediately asks who died, because the real mess is finally surfacing. They've already pinned it on Lee Daewon, but Baryun smells a setup. The official story screams suicide, so naturally the autopsy suddenly matters. At the prison body room, the neckcloth match looks almost too convenient. The bruising says asphyxiation, yet the system rushes past murder again. Baryun refuses to swallow that nonsense, keeping homicide squarely on the table. The doctor hedges, calling it troublesome, because truth always annoys bureaucracy. Baryun wants the body held, not released, and that makes everyone uneasy. Then the grieving mother appears, demanding what happened to her son, painfully late. And Baryun realizes this case just got a whole lot uglier. In the prison body room, the suicide story already sounds suspicious, and the doctor admits the details feel off, which is bureaucratic code for trouble, while Baryun keeps pressing the prisoner, refusing to let murder get dressed up as paperwork. Then the survivor hesitates over what changed after yesterday's accident, sounding terrified of the answer, so Baryun zeroes in on that conversation and realizes someone important was involved, because Daewon kept worrying about his health, and the doctor had been checking in for years, meaning this Dr. Koo is no random hospital guy, but the trusted Major Koo Juntae, and that name lands hard, since Baryun instantly realizes the doctor was hiding a bigger title before the polished mayor grins on stage, proving this case just got politically filthy. Incheon's golden prosecutor turned mayor is paraded as a spotless public hero because Koo Juntae somehow sold authority, charm, and votes like a premium brand, while Daewon's old family connection drags his name into the same filthy mess, and the child's rebellious past suddenly ties to a prosecutor everyone trusted, except the so-called Dr. Koo was guiding Daewon through brutal hardship all along, funding support, scholarships, and rescue like some saint with suspiciously deep pockets. So Daewon started clinging to him like a father, which sounds sweet until it doesn't, because even Baryun can feel this good person story hiding something rotten, and now he's ordering every detail on Daewon's life, assets, and Koo Juntae. Since this case just stopped being personal and became politically radioactive, everyone's suddenly side-eyeing Mayor Koo Juntae, and the denial sounds painfully forced, while Baryun grins like a shark, deciding this name deserves full excavation, because the only visitors were Baryun's motherly leads, and nobody else showed up, so the suicide theory starts cracking, with motive hiding somewhere in that silence. Then the old benefactor story surfaces, Dr. Koo checking in non-stop on Daewon, and Baryun wonders whether that care was kindness, or just a polished leash, since the mother clearly never understood those visits, or the twisted promise behind them, and Daewon's assets suddenly matter, because a commercial property appeared before arrest, meaning savings, bank loans, and that hard-working truck driver image all smell staged, until the real punchline lands. His mother never even knew about the property. Baryun immediately zeroes in on Daewon's mother, and asks why Koo matters, while the beanie guy finally reveals her renal failure and transplant weight, meaning she's getting subsidized treatment at the city medical center, which sounds generous until Daewon's family clearly misses that program. So the nice little support story starts smelling like a leash with Mayor Koo attached, and Baryun, unsurprisingly, refuses to let that flimsy thread stay flimsy, so he drafts another autopsy warrant, fully expecting rejection number 3, because even his phone gets dragged into the circus before the paperwork lands. Then the call screams for Prosecutor Kang in room 801, as interference closes in, and the investigation keeps grinding toward that room, where the truth is boxed in. Prosecutor Kang corners the room, and the old man folds under pressure. Baryun mocks the delays, but he keeps dragging the inquiry forward. He admits suspicion drives him, not patience or office politics. Even after Baron's return, Kang thinks he's gotten dangerously weird. Baryun warns reckless cases ruin lives, yet he won't back off. Then the psychiatry jab lands, and Baryun demands medical proof. He accepts the warning coldly, because he understands the trap. Incheon's future gets paraded like a glossy campaign brochure, with City Hall framed as proof of ambition, not answers. And while officials babble development dreams, the real case stays buried. Under the glittering podium lights, Koo Juntae opens like a campaign hero, while Baryun notes the inauguration buzz around Incheon's suddenly beloved mayor, and the transport policy bragging starts sounding like glossy City Hall propaganda, before Koo smooths it over with that irritating, practiced smile. Then Baron raises a hand and casually takes control of the room. identifying himself as Prosecutor Kang Baryun from Incheon District and admitting he came because Koo's mayoral shine looks suspiciously overhyped as Koo's face tightens, realizing charm alone won't save him here, while the audience mutters at the sheer audacity of a prosecutor crashing this spectacle, and Baryun finally lays out the allegation that the city's selection smelled rigged. Koo keeps smiling through the questions, but his polished act starts cracking. Baryun strips away the charity tale, exposing the hospital support routine. Then he mocks the mayor's clean explanation, calling the selection suspiciously convenient. Koo tries to end the press conference, pretending he still owns the room. Baryun steps closer and casually drops his name, killing the smug momentum. Then he ties Koo to Lee Dae-won's case, and the mood turns sharp. The mayor hears that name again, and suddenly the tea feels poisoned. Baryun leans in, targeting the death investigation, not the publicity game. He reminds Koo that his name surfaced during the case, which is awkward, and with one final sip, the mayor realizes this prosecutor came prepared. Inside the mayor's polished office, Baryun questions that cozy private meeting, then slices through the cleanup story, calling the whole rush suspicious. Frankly, Koo keeps pretending innocence, but that confidence is already sweating through. When Baryun links him to Lee Dae-won, the room's charm dies instantly, and that simple accident excuse suddenly smells like a high-end cover-up, so the mayor reaches for composure, while Baryun keeps twisting the knife by mocking the rushed case, as if truth ever needed this much panic. Koo finally shrugs it off as a traffic accident, annoyingly polished as ever. But Baryun fires back, because the victim was his investigation target. That's the part that lands hardest, proving this prosecutor came armed. Under the sunshine, Baryun smells a cover-up hiding behind the incident, so he coolly asks who the dead suspect actually was, and gets Taeson's name, plus the ugly reconstruction fraud connection, which leaves the mayor pretending ignorance like that ever fooled anyone, while Baryun calmly points at murder motive and drags in Koo Juntae, and the mayor answers with that polished, useless confidence. Of course, but Baryun reminds him motive is just background, not the excuse, because people kill for messy reasons, then label them afterward. Then he keeps his eyes on Koo, warning him to stay careful, and the mayor smirks back, already deciding Baryun is worth watching. Baryun catches the door handle, and the room already feels cornered. Then a masked senior acts familiar, trying cheap intimidation again. Baryun's face says it all. He knows this is a test. The man stays composed while the door slams. What theatrical nonsense. Baryun calls out the fake memory game, and the mayor grins. Outside, the hospital tower gleams, all clean walls hiding rotten deals. Then the headlines explode, pinning Koo Juntae to favoritism scandals. Reporters keep circling, because that kind of slime never sits still. Even the online crowd starts mocking, then fawning, then panicking. Predictably, Baryun realizes there's no substance, just polished panic and empty chatter. Baryun's phone lights up with Section Chief Lee, and the trap starts humming, because the office wants him back, as if chaos takes sick leave. And Dongwook answers first. Baryun coolly agrees to return tomorrow, sounding way too relaxed for someone walking into an ambush, while the towering prosecutor's building looms ahead, all polished glass hiding the rot inside. Then Dongwook storms in, flailing about Baryun ending the case, and honestly, what a performance. Baryun plays dumb, forcing him to panic harder over which case is really collapsing, and that chaos lands squarely on the Yeonsudong Gambling Center scandal. A goldmine of corruption, since digging deeper could smash Park Jung-sung's empire and boost his rival Byamjin instead. But the office line gets worse, because half investigating now would be pathetic, and they still want the mastermind, yet Baryun insists there's nothing left, if the captured rats won't crack, so the real beast stays hidden. Baryun brushes off the ambush, and the room feels instantly colder. Blonde backup gets singled out, because panic loves company. Dongwook starts flailing, while Baryun calmly redirects the blame elsewhere. That elsewhere is murder, and now everyone's pretending not to hear it. The desk stays spotless, but the evidence trail looks deliciously ugly. Dongwook gets warned his old record makes him prime prison material. Baryun twists the knife, saying cooperation might soften the sentence, yet the blonde guy rats first, claiming he already told another prosecutor. Now Dongwook looks properly cooked, with nowhere left to perform. Even the bystanders can see it. This clown never understood the trap. Baryun pins the first lie down cold, and the room tightens. Then he mocks the crook's clean hands, since online thugs love distance, while dragging murder into the spotlight, where every excuse starts sweating, and he warns the gambling den clown that cooperation could save him, but the blonde witness blurts out a worse problem, attempted murder, so the protest collapses instantly. Because everybody remembers that arrest, leaving Dongwook cornered, while Baryun calmly replays the whole disaster, and even the investigators know he never grabbed anyone. Unlike claimed, since the beanie informant admits the struggle happened, not some miracle, and the final punch lands hard. No jump, just a fatal lie. Baryun corners the blonde witness, and his panic starts leaking everywhere, while the prosecutor's calm makes the whole frame-up look pathetic, because the terrified man realizes talking now could get him killed, and the gambling ring boss suddenly looks way less smug, surrounded by gangster silhouettes, since Baryun keeps tightening the net, promising the others won't escape, questioning. Then the murder charge lands like a hammer, and the cowardly gamble turns ugly. Outside, the Gangden's neighborhood suddenly feels one raid away from chaos. Inside, the muscle man orders a block, but gets dropped mid-panic. Baryun drives the officers forward, turning the room into a takeover, and the whole crew gets flattened, because that lie was dead on arrival. Baryun walks in like he owns the room, and the thugs instantly fold. Then the door slams shut behind him, sealing their little disaster in, because that cold stare says he already has their number, seriously, and the evidence lands next, dragging Jung Tae's name straight into it, so even the CEO's polished desk looks pathetic under that spotlight, while Baryun keeps smiling, like this case is already finished for him, and Taesu panics on the phone. Suddenly not so tough anymore, as rain pours over the road, a lone figure approaches the mess, clutching an umbrella and dreading the night, because bad news loves weather, and that worried face says this conspiracy just got a whole lot uglier. Rain hammers the street as a lone woman senses trouble, and plenty, because the masked stranger behind her makes that pitiful unease look generous, and then the whole scene turns into a nightmare spotlight, with Danger standing motionless, while she faces him across the road, finally realizing this isn't some random passers-by, just a too clean smile, a nervous excuse, and fear leaking through her umbrella grip as she pretends he is harmless, which is adorable, honestly, and completely wrong, because his darkness alone has her glancing back, wondering why he feels wrong, until a blinding flash leaves her staring at the masked menace like prey, and from above, the office building waits while rumors crawl through its windows, before Jung Tae-soo gets the call, sweating at Park Jung-sung's name like a rookie. The crackdown begins in a cramped office, and one man is already sweating, badly, while Baryun walks in like the verdict itself, calmly announcing the arrest. With the room sealed off and no cute escape route left for him, the target starts begging for distance, suddenly very allergic to consequences, and Baryun answers by drawing a knife, then exposing fake confidence as a joke, when a cap-wearing witness blurts out the obvious danger. Panicking like a side character, Baryun still keeps his cool, reassuring everyone while the hostage situation gets uglier. Then the blade flashes, and the smug clown finally starts screaming for real, but Baryun's movement is absurdly clean, like he's reading tomorrow's panel, and the terrified stare says it all, because this prosecutor is not bluffing. In the cramped office, Baryun's already reading the attack angle, and the fool's timing screams desperation, because this prosecutor is the same man who died, came back, and learned embarrassment is optional. Then the blade answers the threat, and Lee Kyung-muk's swagger collapses into full-on panic, while the cap-wearing witness blames the obvious danger, proving fear spreads faster than good judgment. Baryun stays unnervingly calm, claiming he only wanted the knife dropped, like that excuses everything, and the room floods with concern as everyone rushes toward the bleeding mess and the fallen weapon. Yet his shirt looks shredded, his posture spotless, and the whole scene screams controlled violence, which leaves the beanie guy stunned, because even he can see this wasn't normal resistance. Now Baryun is left staring at the weird lack of a wound, silently wondering how to explain magic. And outside, the city keeps glowing, completely unaware this case just got a lot uglier. The crackdown hits hard, and the ringleader's centers get raided, so Lee Woongbei calmly assumes prosecutors warned him first. Like that fixes anything, but Park Jung-sung realizes Criminal Division 3 went rogue, then instantly asks who's steering this mess, and the answer lands with a thud. Prosecutor Kang Barayan. Fresh from the dead, serious files. Even the ashtray scene turns awkward as no one knows that name, which is priceless, so Jung-sung apologizes for exposing the operation, promising to reshuffle everything before business bleeds out, but Woongbei shuts him down, ordering that side paused while the scandal breathes. Then he pivots to the new distribution plan, because criminals do love calling collapse a strategy. Jung-sung obediently says he understands, boss, and the room suddenly sounds smaller, while the door outside creaks like someone's already entering to ruin their confidence. Baryun steps into the chairman's office, and the smug air instantly thins. Park Jung-sung catches the eavesdropper, then pretends he wasn't panicking at all. Baryun coolly reminds him he's no stray nuisance, just another chairman-linked problem. Then he twists the knife about Waryong's gambling mess, and the grin dies fast. Jung-sung tries posturing about Taesun's place, but that name lands like poison. Baryun snaps back that Taesun's name isn't casual trivia, and neither is death. Even behind those glasses, his stare turns the whole hallway into a courtroom. Jung-sung's confidence cracks, because this newbie prosecutor is not buying the act. Baryun walks off like a newborn puppy with tiger teeth, utterly unbothered, and Jung-sung is left staring after him, suddenly very aware he's losing. The cleanup story was already rotting, with that blood-soaked lie as the cover, and the ones absent from the scene still bought it, because convenience loves a fake alibi. Even the witness, Chief Lee Hungryol, swore he saw everything, though doubt clung to him. Then the wrangling over Dognose's wrist turned ugly, while higher-ups got nervous about excessive force. But digging out the ringleader and hidden centers hit a dead end, which hurt Park Jung-sung plenty, so he strolled into Jang Jinho's office with a case folder, acting like this was ordinary. "On, So-young," greeted Prosecutor Kang, and the room instantly turned polite and suspicious. Baryun answered with a murder case no one could crack, asking for advice without any dramatics. He laid out the dead-end evidence problem and admitted the culprit was still slipping through. Then he handed over the file, basically daring Jang Jinho to stop pretending this was simple. Late-night rain framed the victim, a woman in her 20s, and the assault. Her body ended up dumped in an irrigation canal, because villains love theatrics. The rain washed away traces, leaving no usable hair, semen, or DNA behind. Her house sat isolated in the countryside, and CCTV help was basically non-existent. The only lead was a taxi near the subway station, then a drop-off by road. Baryun stayed calm, letting the doctor prod his silence for whatever bothered him. So he named the taxi driver the likeliest suspect. Despite that squeaky clean record, back then, DNA tech was too weak, and the statute had already expired. Baryun mulled it over, because that kind of loophole is criminal comedy gold. Then he stood up and moved on, dragging the whole case forward anyway. The records are useless now, so Baryun wants the suspect himself, not paperwork, and the only trace left is a taxi fleet packed with dead-end leads, because rain erased the evidence, leaving the case room looking painfully clean. So the prosecutor calmly corners the driver and starts peeling back the story. Then the man finally gets named, Seong Chun-mo, the supposedly spotless taxi driver, but his excuse collapses fast, sounding like panic dressed up as innocence. Baryun barely reacts, reading him like a cheap liar in an expensive suit, and he concludes the driver committed at least one crime, maybe more, while the shaken witness tries to buy time, begging for patience and mercy, but the taxi's route already gives him away, and that's where the lie dies. Seong Chunmo swears the route was empty, so he slept off duty, but CCTV pins the taxi near his house, wrecking that tidy excuse. Baryun then asks to inspect the car, already smelling something rotten. The driver, smug for 1 second, lets him check it anyway. In the taxi lot, Baryun closes in, while the whole fleet watches. Inside, the prosecutor studies the spotless cabin and raises an eyebrow. A business taxi this clean? Yeah, that already sounds suspicious. No hair, no fingerprints, nothing. Like evidence got professionally erased. Baryun calls the cleanliness absurd, since cabs collect people and grime. Then he asks about washing it that day, and the driver cracks. Baryun's patience snaps, and the driver's smug grin starts to crack, because the prosecutor drags up an old rape murder case like a loaded blade, but the driver hides behind paperwork, insisting that mess was already cleared away, and Baryun just stares him down, calling the whole act insultingly obvious. Then the driver panics, hiding behind statutes and legal loopholes like a coward, only for Baryun's glare to turn icy, with pure murder in it, and the driver, suddenly brave, boasts that he's dying to brag anyway, so Baryun cuts through the nonsense, saying that kind of admission would bury him, but the driver keeps sneering at prosecutors, accusing them of dirty quotas, while Baryun answers with cold contempt, caring about nothing except the truth. Baryun stands in the taxi lot, already sick of pretending, and singles out the real target, while the smug suspect keeps offering lazy legal excuses, as if paper can save him. Then the back and forth turns uglier, because Baryun says the man clearly scrubbed everything clean, and the driver, getting scared, hides behind loopholes like a cheap little coward, but that bravado cracks fast, with the case collapsing into empty sky and office silence, because no matter how hard he looks, the files give him absolutely nothing useful. Back at the office, the evidence sits spread out like a bad joke nobody laughs at, and Baryun's frustration leaks out through a tired face, proving the trail is rotten. Even the papers read like dead ends, so the whole investigation feels cursed now. Still, Baryun keeps thinking, because quitting would be the one truly impossible move. One missing sock already screams this case hid something uglier, and the shoes found with the body only deepen that stain, while the rain likely dragged the last clue down the waterway. Baryun studies the photo, refusing to let this dead end look innocent, then pushes straight toward the victim's home, hunting for one usable thread. At the house, cooperation comes easy, which is suspiciously convenient, and the anxious old woman already looks like truth is bruising her. Baryun's glare sharpens, because this family keeps flinching at every mention, so he asks where Kim Na-yoon's room is, cutting through the nonsense, and the answer finally points to the place everyone wanted buried there. Baryun and the polished woman enter the room, and the silence already feels staged, because the desk is absurdly neat, like someone scrubbed away panic on purpose. Then the bedroom opens into a frozen little shrine, all soft colors and denial, as she asks what he is hunting for, and he digs anyway, insisting they need another suspect if Seong Chunmo somehow escapes the blame, so he orders An So-young to chase diaries and photo albums across the room, but the drawers keep coughing up nothing, which is almost insulting at this point, and the woman's patience thins as she calls the search a waste of time. Baryun finally stands there like a verdict, acting ready to leave. Yet even after the rummaging, the room still hides its real secret. Inside the victim's home, the atmosphere already smells like denial and stale secrets, and Baryun keeps digging while the shaken woman clutches one useless photo, because He's still convinced Seong Chunmo can't be the whole answer, so he calmly orders the records hunt. While the room offers nothing but embarrassment, then he shifts gears and pushes for a separate charge, forcing the family to panic, and even detention starts sounding useful, which is prosecutor speak for desperate but efficient. Outside, the sky cuts in like a clean reset, as the logic finally hardens. Meanwhile, another witness gets cornered, because meter tampering is the new pathetic excuse, but Baryun won't buy the act, and the excuses collapse across the table, until the cowardly performance ends with him refusing to pretend this is an interrogation. Baryun corners the homeowner, smirking like evidence is already under his shoes, but the woman's panic flickers hard enough to betray a hidden concern. Then he studies her up close, and suddenly the mystery looks rather pretty, which only makes him bark harder, demanding answers instead of awkward flirting. The door swings open, and another prosecutor strolls in with suspiciously good timing, because someone finally found the victim's belongings tucked in the taxi. The image of that hidden sock says everything, and nothing at all, while the whole room erupts, as if discovery alone deserves a parade. Baryun immediately asks where they were found, and the taxi gap becomes the clue, and he admits he would have missed it without Kang Baryun's painfully lucky nudge. Baryun's quiet stare lands like a warning, and the room instantly stiffens, because one lonely sock in that taxi just exposed a whole sloppy conspiracy. Dongwook starts flailing, pretending the impossible made sense somehow, but the roadside tantrum only proves someone planted the evidence to frame things. Then the smug blame gets kicked upward, straight at that prosecutor bastard, and suddenly the driver is the one screaming, wrecked by Baryun's pressure, while the car's passenger twists in panic. Realizing his escape plan died, Baryun follows the trail deeper, and even the witness wants backup now. Seong Chunmo gets addressed by name, which is never a good sign, because the real culprit is already sweating, demanding to know where that bastard hid. Baryun steps in like a verdict, and everyone instantly knows trouble, while the baffled office man starts scrambling, trying to explain nonsense, but the frame job snaps back, and blame rockets straight upward, because the driver's smug face caves in once the pressure lands, and the passenger finally realizes the escape plan died on impact. Baryun keeps reading the room, making the next witness sweat harder, until So-young freezes, hearing the whole mess turn into a crisis, and she blurts for Prosecutor Kang to stop this madness now. Baryun only pauses, cool as ever, already smelling the culprit. Then Seong Chunmo gets formally arrested for Kim Na-yoon's murder. Baryun slams the room shut with charges, and the smug suspect stops smiling. The confidence drains instantly, because cocky criminals always fold first. Then Baryun keeps grinning like a predator, promising mercy only by comparison. Outside, the office crowd acts civilized, while the case's ugly truth surfaces. Back at the records corner, the clue finally clicks, and So-young goes rigid. She sits frozen under the weight of it, realizing the victim's sock mattered. Baryun pushes harder, and everyone else suddenly remembers how scary silence is. The investigation turns grotesque, revealing the victim's last desperate move. Even strangled, she hid the truth, and Baryun can almost feel that terror. So he dismisses the obvious lie, because that sock was never the whole answer. Baryun plants himself at the desk, looking way too calm for this mess, while the office scrambles and An So-young quietly slips out. Then even her face tightens, because the old clue finally bites, and the mansion waits under sunset, all rich and smug as ever, before Baryun rings the doorbell like he owns the whole nightmare. and names himself with that prosecutor swagger that ruins everybody's afternoon, so the housekeeper opens up, trying to stay icy, but he's already inside their nerves. Then he asks the real reason for coming, and the room instantly sours. Baryun keeps that predator grin, because mercy is just his crueler mood, and the so-called culprit finally collapses, as the taxi driver confession seals it. She tries to swallow the news, but grief keeps winning, because the killer's capture should feel good, yet it only hurts more. In that messy living room, even politeness sounds exhausted and fake as her face freezes, sensing the clue finally turning cruel. Then the bedroom door opens, and the house starts whispering trouble, so she steps in like she already knows what's waiting. Baryun stands there, calm as a blade, owning the whole search, and the household servant stiffens, realizing this prosecutor came prepared. Inside the drawer, one odd item appears, mocking everyone's confidence, and the woman stares harder, because now, the truth finally bites. Baryun grins like a shark, and the housekeeper feels the search turn ugly, because even her stiff politeness can't hide the panic under that doorway glow. Then he slips deeper inside, acting like the place already belongs to him, while the woman freezes, realizing this prosecutor came with way more than manners, and there it is. One tiny clue in the drawer, exposing the setup. Since a prosecutor at the center of criminal cases can apparently become a monster, the witness admits she's too scared to accuse Baryun, even with the evidence, because if Kang's fabrication gets exposed, the whole case starts collapsing. Then Kim Na-yoon finally answers, politely calling his concern over her body, and her gratitude lands sharp, because this suspicion suddenly feels painfully personal. The case reaches a quiet hillside home, looking harmless from outside. Inside, the search turns tense fast, because someone already feels cornered. A single sock becomes the tiny, humiliating clue that changes everything. Kim Na-yoon freezes in that pink room, eyes finally catching up. Then she grabs the sock, realizing the evidence was hiding in plain sight. The bathroom search gets nastier, and her nerves practically start shaking. Now, Prosecutor Kang's fabrication is exposed, and the cover-up starts rotting. Even Na-yoon admits Baryun feels unfamiliar now, and that's saying plenty. The whole thing leaves her sprawled there, asking when he changed. And honestly, nobody watching can blame her for feeling completely wrecked. Baryun coldly ties the question straight to the Soknam Dong murder case, while the office briefing stamps it as a brutal, public headache, and the real snag is worse, because two suspects are still tangled, with one already sent over, though court could still flip blame, meaning the chief prosecutor wants airtight evidence and zero loose ends. So Baryun ends up treated like the department's convenient scapegoat, and he answers with that smug, razor-calmed confidence nobody enjoys. Then the file shifts to Lee Jong-go, a 28-year-old industrial worker, whose after-work drinking with a coworker spiraled into following Yujin Pill, until that bathroom ambush gave prosecutors their next ugly thread. Lee Jong-go denies the killing outright, like Panic wearing a cheap suit. Bae Tae-sung flips the story, blaming the owner of the cutter instead. Then he admits the cutter was only lent, and the timeline gets uglier. The autopsy says the knife came from above, which sounds suspiciously convenient. Yet the height gap between victim and Jong-go makes that theory wobble badly. So the police hesitate, because the culprit call is still not airtight. Baryun coolly points out the angle only works under very specific posture, meaning the victim could have leaned forward, letting the downward stab fit. Everyone wants a forensic expert now, because guesswork is embarrassingly weak. Even the blood evidence looks thin, so Jong-go is far from nailed. The autopsy's blood work is already laughing at Lee Jong-go, and Bae Tae-sung too. Baryun then traps them in the victim's stumble, where Tae-sung's excuse sounds flimsy, because a real killer would've cleaned up better, not left this amateur hour mess. So the room starts panicking over indicting Jong-go, then maybe Tae-sung, because wow, evidence still isn't enough to confidently pin either man, which is prosecutor nightmare fuel, and that uncertainty dumps Jong-go back into suspicion while Tae-sung keeps sweating. Since double jeopardy means they can't just freestyle another charge later, Baryun pushes for a confrontation, because contradictions only need one witness to crack, and Tae-sung finally gets branded a complete hyena, smiling like he owns the chaos, but Baryun cuts through it cleanly, naming him the culprit without blinking. Like a hyena hiding its tail, the suspect suddenly plays submissive here, but given one opening, he turns vicious and keeps biting the lion. Baryun corners Lee Jong-go over a bathroom killing, and the panic starts leaking. Jong-go swears he's being framed, then flails harder when the knife is brought up. Baryun cuts the theater short, calling in Bae Tae-sung to face the mess. The witness arrives through the doorway, and the room instantly gets heavier. One look at Jong-go's excuses makes the whole alibi wobble like cheap furniture. Even Baryun admits this hyena could muddy the truth for everyone, so the real killer stays hidden in plain sight. smirking behind the noise, while Django keeps spiraling, accused of murder and too shameless to shut up. Baryun snaps the room quiet, and the suspect's swagger instantly evaporates. Then he offers both sides a chance to talk, before threatening suspicion, because Lee Django's knife story is already smelling like fresh nonsense, and the moment that excuse lands, the alibi starts wobbling hard, since the blood test spits out guilt all over Django's clothes, while he insists he only followed a baited trail and got framed. Baryun still calls that a deliberate setup, not some innocent mistake. Then Django panics harder, claiming he returned the knife and fled, but CCTV timing exposes the lie, making his escape look suspiciously late, and now the whole room knows this clown is buried in contradiction. In the interrogation room, Baryun starts carving holes through the first aid excuse, then flips the stabbing logic, mocking how no one stopped 10 desperate blows. While the suspects squirm, he needles their cowardice for never reporting it, and his first read is brutal. These guys are hyenas, plain and simple, because once both men get blamed anyway, the victim's death stops being debatable. Back in Jung Jinho's office, he casually asks how Seoknam-dong is going, and Baryun's answer barely leaves room for hope, since the stabbing is still unconfirmed. Jinho tries to sound superior, acting like choosing a suspect should be enough, but Baryun crushes that pose, asking why the truth suddenly became optional, then leaves him staring stupidly, because this case is far messier than his comfort can handle. Baryun tears apart the logic trap, because prosecutors love the wrong mystery, and he refuses the cheap shortcut of blaming one stabber over the truth, since both orange-suited cowards fed each other's violence, then called it a joke, which means Baryun's charging them together, and that smug little fantasy is dead. When Jinho asks for proof of conspiracy, Baryun answers with cold arithmetic, because confession still needs backup, but accomplice testimony already hits hard. Then the whole timeline gets uglier, with one man restraining and the other stabbing, while neither lifted a finger to help, and both bolted like geniuses. So Jinho hears the painful truth. Splitting charges could sink everything, and Baryun just keeps going, forcing the chief to swallow that approach. In this lounge, an old familiar face immediately spots how changed he feels, and the prosecutor hears that old legal purism get dragged out like a relic, because now even he admits public sentiment matters, just not recklessly. As the case shifts into a smoky bar meeting with dangerous company, where the red-dressed woman turns up late, coolly baiting their attention, and her little delay joke lands harder than the men's fake confidence, while the barmaid stiffens, sensing the predator behind that polished smile. Then the suited man plays charming host, pretending he owns the night, but she answers with effortless poise, making his bravado look pathetic. And just like that, the room belongs to Jo Hyunyoung. She says she missed him, and the whole bar suddenly feels too small. Then the scene cuts wide to the apartment block, clean and innocent. Room 307 waits there, pretending none of this is about to explode. The door finally gives, and the quiet gets kicked apart, Inside, Beren arrives looking like work itself, just walked in. The office girl asks how to help, while nobody notices the storm. Then Choi Jinwoo drops the files, asking for prosecutor Jeon Yoon-ji. Naturally, the sleeping colleague contributes nothing, except premium embarrassment, Baryun's sudden handoff nearly startles her awake, because subtlety is dead. And that is how Kang Baryun calmly announces Criminal Division 3. Baryun casually arrives, and the office tension folds under his collar, while the old Seoknam-dong case lands like a headache with paperwork. He says he tied co-principals and fortified evidence, then demands severity. After that, he shrugs off the outrage and promises to revisit questions. The red-haired colleague nearly melts as Prosecutor Kang gets recognized. Then he checks whether the taxi driver murder case caused trouble. Baryun answers it was just a review, and the confidence is insulting, because the case was messy. Even with clear evidence and a confession, the defendant still screamed fabrication, forcing the trial into unnecessary chaos. Yet Baryun's stare says he's already seen sharper nonsense than this. Baryun walks in coolly, and the red-haired clerk practically short-circuits, while he dismisses fabrication claims like they're amateur hour excuses, then brushes off the verdict talk, promising to revisit everything anyway, as the cityscape and courthouse glare frame how serious this got, because the Incheon court already slammed Lee Jong-do and Bae Tae-sung after prosecutors demanded death, calling them remorseless and beyond saving. Yet Baryun looks comfortable. Sipping beer like this is routine cleanup, and even admits the sentence was only 30 years, not enough, which somehow still counts as brutal justice in his smug little world, especially since the taxi driver evidence fabrication mess is next on his list. The suspicion starts with her, and the smug grin barely hides trouble, while office men sift papers, pretending this mess looks professional, but the file already screams cunning. not some innocent misunderstanding, because Kim Young-suk built a beauty company through trust, then muscle, and once suppliers relaxed, she hit them with fake demand, bringing in a polished front two-man to calm everyone. What a scam. Then she bought on credit, dumped stock, dirt cheap, and vanished, insisting it was failure, not fraud, as if that's clever, but that excuse collapses fast when trust was the real weapon. Even after betrayal, people still wanted to believe her charm. The first clue is just footsteps, but the room already feels like trouble. Then Bae-ryun cuts in with that polite prosecutor voice, and everyone stiffens, because he's not here for small talk, he's here to corner someone, and the woman entering for questioning looks far too composed for innocence, until the mystery finally gets a name. Han Seon. Hwa. Naturally, the moment that identity lands, the whole scam queen aura starts clicking together, because this is exactly the kind of woman who smiles while burying traps, and Bae-ryun immediately snaps to Kim Young-suk, the real jackpot, which leaves the beanie-wearing witness staring at the folder like it bites, and suddenly, Miss Kim Young-suk sounds less like a question, more like a verdict. Bae-ryun walks in acting untouchable, already convinced he can crack this alone. Outside, he corners Kim Young-suk, dragging her into the building like a verdict. Inside the cramped office, the mood is all business and zero innocence. Then he casually confirms her age, like that somehow softens fraud charges. Kim Young-suk answers with that polished calm, the kind scammers practice daily. Bae-ryun drops the fraud report, and her confidence starts looking embarrassingly fragile. He keeps pressing, letting her play the wounded businesswoman card for a moment. Then he slams the real question, why the fake CEO was ever needed. Her excuse is pure corporate theater, all hardship, optics, and public-facing nonsense. By the end, even the witness can tell this contract was rotten from birth. Bae-ryun snaps straight to Han Seon-hwa, and the room goes cold, because he's already calling out fraud like it's basic paperwork, while she keeps that polished smile, pretending pressure is adorable. Then she gets asked how he knew, and suddenly the swagger thins. As her favorite alias gets exposed, she starts acting weirdly flattered, and Bae-ryun answers by mocking the flirtation. Dead and unsentimental, she falls back on sincerity games, but he's already past that, so he offers immunity only if victims are properly compensated, which makes her admit the whole scheme was profitable and rotten. Then he twists the knife, asking what else she thinks he wants. Bae-ryun plays it cool, already knowing she's seasoned and impossible to rattle, then hands over the summon, all business, while she gets the threat and smiles anyway. The office goes cold as Kim Young-suk is politely promised leniency, with strings, and the door shuts behind that little performance, because nobody's buying innocence here. But Bae-ryun keeps staring her down, while a colleague foolishly calls her cultured, as if criminals never come polished, which is adorable, honestly, and painfully naive. The witness starts defending her image, insisting con artists usually look louder, yet Bae-ryun crushes that fantasy, pointing out pretty faces are his specialty now. Then he leans harder, grilling whether she's truly that beautiful, or just theatrical, and she answers by flaunting every advantage, which only makes her guilt shinier. Even her records scream 40-something, yet that face sells youth effortlessly. Bae-ryun catches the bait instantly, admitting he bought the illusion too. Then he ends the office game, and heads back to work. Soon the scene shifts into a classy bar, where everyone pretends innocence. The woman arrives looking far too comfortable, while the suited men hover, and Bae-ryun's presence alone turns the room from flirtation into interrogation. She teases him with that smug auntie routine, acting dangerously entertained, but he stays sharp, because charm is still just camouflage to him. When she asks if seduction would work, he treats it like evidence, and she coolly refuses, proving this pretty little trap has manners. A velvet bar spreads out like a rich man's lie, and the prosecutor's salary joke lands first, before the brunette invites him into a private room, because subtlety clearly died on the way in. Then the suit-clad man gets told to finish his drink, like refusing wasn't even a real option, while the woman flashes that smug little smile, acting wounded because he won't play along. Bae-ryun keeps his face empty as she stands there, all wineglass and dangerous confidence, and her heels clicking closer only makes the whole flirtation look more like a setup, because now the blonde shows up, dripping compliments and fake sisterly warmth. Naturally, then she circles the brunette style, admiring the dress like gossip with expensive perfume, before she starts fishing for the man behind her, pretending curiosity isn't interrogation, and the blonde's final question makes it obvious this friendly chat was never friendly at all. The bar is already dripping with danger, and this mysterious brunette just smirks, while the suit-clad man gets dragged into her little trap, because apparently escape was never on the menu. Then the blonde one barges in asking who he knows, like this is casual and not a fishing expedition, and the brunette answers with that sly confidence, pretending ignorance is some sacred house rule, before finally dropping her name, Hyunyoung, as if that suddenly makes the whole lounge safer. But the guy keeps circling back, testing whether she's actually his friend, or just another pretty ambush, and she calls it a night, strolling off with the same smug grace, leaving him to stew, while the blonde still watches, because nothing says subtlety like discussing a handsome stranger in public. Then he glances back with that polished half-smile, acting like he owns the room, and the brunette seals the whole joke by comparing him to an actor, because of course she does. In a warm bar trap, the blonde casually sizes up the stranger's identity, while the brunette mocks his manners, calling his curiosity embarrassingly crude and familiar. Then the deal gets absurdly polished, with fraud immunity sold like premium hospitality, because apparently city support is just another luxury package for desperate businessmen. The drink lands on the table, and the brunette takes control with effortless theatrics, asking how to approach him, then joking that charm is obviously her secret weapon. Next comes the real sales pitch, turning him into an investment machine for the city, and she smirks through the warning, because easy support is apparently for amateurs. She doubles down, dangling lobby power and prison threats like casual party favors, then finally exposes the obsession, asking why he keeps digging into Mayor Koo Juntae. Baryun sits stone still, already smelling fraud beneath the polished silence, because the suspect he chased for reconstruction schemes then vanished in tragedy, yet the accident feels staged, and that suspicion refuses to die. His investigation into the truck driver now points toward prison murder, so he upgrades the theory, dragging Mayor Koo Juntae into frame. That name lands hard, and even the elegant brunette starts sweating. Her tiny pause screams enough, confirming Taesin's shadow is the real problem. Baryun presses harder, turning accident talk into a murder accusation, and suddenly, the whole room feels like a trap, with every truth standing barefoot at the window, while the bar queen sips calmly, acting innocent, which is adorable. At the table, Jo Hyunyoung swears to dig into Mayor Koo, and Baryun answers by asking if she was actually close to him, staying ice cold. She admits they were, while pouring drinks like this is normal and not a trap. Then he twists the knife, mocking her timing around Taeson's funeral. Brilliantly, she freezes, because being close suddenly sounds expensive in this crimson room. Baryun leans in, and her confidence starts leaking all over the table. Outside, the city glows calmly, pretending this investigation isn't about to explode. She finally cracks, asking how he figured it out, and he just keeps smiling, because he was there, watching the funeral hall where Taesin's subordinate stood vigil, so now the whole rumor collapses, and the dead man's shadow turns real. Baryun needles the woman, dragging Taesin's death into the plush lounge. She lowers the drink, and that smug little act suddenly looks fragile. He twists the blade further, implying she visited the funeral hall too. Then he corners her with the ICU question, and her face drains. The lonely hospital room memory hits hard, with Taeson lying ruined. She snaps, protesting his ignorance, but the panic is already leaking, because she ran from that horror, and even skipped the funeral. Now Taesin's portrait feels impossible, and her excuses sound pathetic. Baryun watches her sweat, then wonders if her tears were ever sincere. Still composed, he pockets the proof, and apologizes for being careless. Inside the cafe, the atmosphere turns sugary, but the tension stays ugly. She clutches her napkin like a shield, begging them catch Taesin's killer. Then her confidence cracks, because his questions expose how shaky she is. Even fixing her makeup becomes a disaster, and the panic shows. Still, she leans into familiarity, acting like they've known each other forever. Baryun smugly swats away the politeness, dragging her back into formal mode. She fires back with old man jabs, as if age somehow wins arguments. So he pivots hard, demanding more about Taeson for the investigation. She claims they were close, yet somehow knows almost nothing useful. That adorable contradiction exposes everything, and the fake bond collapses. She smugly plays coy, insisting this is knowledge he definitely lacks, then pivots into that ridiculous bear metaphor, trying to soften Taeson's image, and even doubles down with the gummy bear joke, proving she's not subtle at all. But Baryun's reaction says the nickname hit harder than she expected, embarrassingly so, because he flatly rejects the embarrassment angle, refusing her tidy little narrative, and when she asks how he knows, he calmly explains the nickname would wound his image, especially around his men. Since Taeson was never some fragile little pushover, she laughs it off as unrelated to his work, still pretending this is harmless chatter, but Baryun cuts through the flirtation, saying he only wants Taeson in morning time, and her playful rooftop act turns into a warning to stop seducing the investigation. Sunlight spills through the penthouse windows, turning the room into a polished trap, and the bed already looks less like rest, more like staged temptation, because the brown-haired beauty is locked in close, still trying her charms. But the prosecutor's focus snaps when Taesun's name gets tossed into the mix, which is adorable, since she suddenly realizes the usual bait is failing hard. So she drags him around like a smug trophy, pushing for round 2, only for him to bail on the whole performance, leaving her selling confusion. And her tearful follow-up lands with the elegance of a dead battery, because his reaction makes it painfully clear he is not impressed at all. Just the bottle on the table, proof even his gift got immediately questioned. The city skyline looks spotless, like it's hiding yesterday's mess with a grin. Then a smug broadcaster pops in, treating this as breaking news for clout, because Incheon's beauty empire is being dragged into a glamorous little sales pitch, and the self-appointed creator acts like failure is some charming local tradition, before the scene tightens around the woman who supposedly joined forces with Incheon. As the agreement exchange begins and the room turns obediently silent, with a pen scratching the paperwork, because nothing says power like signing trouble, then the suited newcomer arrives, promising cooperation while everybody pretends this is normal. That is when Mayor Koo gets the polished welcome, cameras and compliments included, and the flattery gets so thick it nearly chokes the room, which is disgusting. Lee Woongbei watches the ceremony like a man pricing everybody in the room. Han Seonhwa leans in, selling secrets and leverage like luxury perfume. His smile finally cracks, because her pitch clearly landed too well. Barin answers with that same cool stare, already labeling her the suspect. The Incheon City and Beauty Tech ceremony looks polished, which is usually code for trouble. The agreement gets recorded on a phone, because optics always come before honesty. Baryun's return lands cleanly, and the smug office clown gets professionally unraveled. Jang Jinho sends the beanie witness forward, acting like this is routine business. Baryun accepts the move without blinking, ready to keep digging anyway. Then he drops the theft record, and the whole act starts collapsing. The inmate leans into confession mode, acting remorseful while basically admitting repeat offense. Then Baryun drills the case file hard, pinning the burglary to Hajeong apartments. And that's where his polite nods turn lethal, because the timeline suddenly fits too neatly, making this look like the last case in a very dirty pattern, except the building photos already whisper the fraud, with every entrance shadowed, while only one entry burns bright in daylight, which is suspiciously convenient. So he asks the office assistant for floor plans, and she offers aerials instead, then hands them over, like this entire mess was begging for a smarter viewer. And Baryun spots the key difference immediately, because the aerials don't lie, since the other buildings face away from the road, leaving daylight nowhere to go. He starts by profiling the usual hit pattern, where afternoon sunlight does the dirty work, then narrows it to cramped homes, because easy targets are apparently his specialty, and this last one sticks out hard. Since the timing and location scream set up, Baryun studies the house and realizes burglary here feels weirdly overqualified, so he demands the paperwork, only to get that smug little correction spiral, because the suspect's own logic collapses immediately under one inconvenient question, as the prosecutor coolly checks the file and catches the fatal typo. And there it is, the whole excuse crumbling, because it was 3 a.m., not 3 p.m., which means the guy's cute little daytime alibi was never going to survive sunlight, and now even the signed statement looks ridiculous, like police already knew the answer. Baryun catches the time slip, and that cute 3 o'clock excuse already smells rotten, because this simple crime was secretly planted in the wrong hour for cover, so the office settles into that awkward silence when a clean alibi starts dying, while the suspect explains this lazy trick as standard police win-win procedure, meaning criminals barely sweat when charges get stacked, and prosecution looks sleepy until the cap-wearing witness wonders if calling police could fix the mistake, and Baryun cuts in, refusing the handoff and digging through the victim trail himself, since the robbery happened during vacation, with the door open and theft already decided. Then the prosecutor confirms the thief is caught, but the stolen goods are gone, and now the real prize is that wedding jewelry, not that pathetic cash. Baryun catches the missing jewelry detail, and the alibi starts cracking already, because the stolen set is oddly specific, platinum, sapphire, and expensive enough to matter, so he silently decides to let Byung-jin investigate instead. With zero patience for sloppy answers, then he studies the city trail, treating this like a petty crime mess dressed as routine, and the field report comes back. The seller was identified, but the culprit is elsewhere, meaning the police already caught somebody. Yet somehow the jewelry itself vanished. Wow, brilliant work. Baryun's expression hardens as the cash angle collapses, because that theory makes no sense, so he heads straight for the jewelry store, refusing to waste time on second-hand excuses. Inside, he presents himself as Incheon's prosecutor, tracking stolen goods off a tip, and the owner confirms it's the platinum wedding set with sapphires, exactly the prize. The jeweler panics, whining that he bought stolen goods unknowingly, and Baryun barely blinks. Then he coolly explains police and prosecutors split work, so this mess was inevitable. Next comes the owner's lame little defense, claiming he already named the seller and cooperated, but Baryun spots the gap instantly, because that story still leaves the real thief untouched. So the photo gets shoved forward, and the shopkeeper is asked if this is the suspect. The old man stares in. Shocked, the culprit looks nothing like the smug face on record. Baryun mocks the police for catching the thief, taking testimony, and still letting blame drift. Then he wraps the interview with formal politeness, promising the prosecutor's office may drag him back. And right on cue, the nervous man starts dialing, because the pressure finally landed. Baryun gets the call that the target's location is nailed down, and the hunt tilts, so he wastes no time pushing straight toward the building, all cool confidence, because the suspect's ugly little identity is already circulating, complete with that racetrack debt mess. And when the apartment number and name finally land, the case stops pretending to be vague. Then the knock hits Unit 102, sharp and smug, like the law just arrived uninvited, but the door sits there mute for a beat, making the whole setup feel deliciously tense, until Baryun keeps the perimeter tight and tells his men to wait, because patience now means control. Then the old man finally opens up, looking like he has no idea why he is this exposed, and that stunned face says it all. The thief was never the polished guy they expected. A careless hand drags at the bag, and the whole hunt snaps tight, because Baryun has already locked on to Mr. Kim Jin-nam, smug as ever, while the driver's sweat-slick face finally learns panic has a mileage limit, and the stairwell gets blocked as Baryun cuts off every escape route, shouting Kim Jin-nam's name like the law just kicked down reality itself. But the bastard is absurdly fast, which only makes him look more guilty, until Baryun surges after him and the man's confidence turns to confusion. Then one brutal strike sends him flying, hard enough to wreck his dignity, and with that, the fleeing idiot gets floored before he can finish insulting anyone. Under that bright office skyline, Baryun keeps closing in on a messy burglary lead. He drags a bald suspect inside, and the man instantly starts acting expensive, predictably pathetic. The office freezes as the suspect hits the floor. While everyone else pretends this is normal, Baryun's stare does all the talking, because apparently the suspect is answer enough. The bald man panics at being hauled in, then whines like this was somehow unfair. Old photos and a burglary file surface, proving this case was always the real target. A cap-wearing witness stammers that Baryun simply grabbed the man from nowhere, but Baryun explains the suspect was already released once, which makes the whole escape stunt uglier. He then corners the man with one brutal question, and the confidence evaporates instantly. The trembling culprit finally blurts out the black-suited watchers outside his house. Baryun finally leans in, warning that denial only deepens the contempt charge, and wow, the bald suspect's hands lock up, because confidence dies fast under legal pressure. He tries to minimize everything, insisting the stabbing confession was just spiteful noise. Baryun clocks the real problem immediately. This wasn't a stabbing case at all. New evidence changes everything, so the prosecutor had already reopened the buried burglary trail. Then he calmly reminds them the charges could get uglier, depending on his judgment. The suspect's face drains, because that threat lands harder than any fist ever could. And suddenly the man starts talking, exposing the knife threat, the tied-up woman, and the search. Then he admits the room was being ransacked when somebody came in and fought him. By the end, his story collapses completely, because the accident was never an accident. The room hums coldly, and the suspect's lie starts cracking first, as he claims stabbing shock, while Baryun stares at the body, unimpressed. Then comes the cash excuse, a pathetic little confession dressed as necessity, and Baryun cuts straight through it, asking why murder came with follow-up theft. The coward backpedals, insisting it was only an accident and no knife, then admits he waited for emptiness, just to steal without witnesses around. Under harsher questioning, he folds, inventing a stabbing rumor to survive, but the detectives react too strangely, making him realize something is off. They keep asking if he really did it, like evidence is missing, so he denies everything again, and the whole story starts looking staged. Baryun sits on the case again, and the suspect starts sweating already, suddenly begging for mercy, pretending this was never meant to become murder, but Baryun casually widens the charge, because robbery with death still stinks, and the suspect scrambles, clinging to the no-intent excuse like duct tape, while the detectives order him booked for robbery, keeping the victim off stage. The guy mutters agreement, then looks around like everyone forgot their script, because that yellow note and Baryun's address demand scream bigger problems. Baryun says the victim's contact matters, and the woman hears the real twist. The stabbing story gets uglier, hinting the police buried more than theft, and now the whole thing smells like a death case with a cleanup crew. An apartment block glows at dusk, framing a robbery case nobody can clean up. Inside, the victim's room sits silent, already holding the stink of trouble. A phone rests there like evidence, waiting to ruin somebody's alibi. Then a hand slides in, stealing that little detail with shaky confidence. Baryun's call lands hard. As Prosecutor Kang starts the May robbery inquiry, the woman on the line freezes, hearing this isn't casual paperwork anymore. She stammers, only to learn the culprit was caught and tried already. Baryun then snaps the timeline together, exposing the wrong arrest and cover-up. The office crowd looks painfully ordinary for people hiding that kind of mess. And now the real question cuts through it all: who paid for the mistake? Kang Baryun corners the mess, insisting the prosecution isn't blameless either. He coolly pushes the robbery death case, and nobody gets to dodge it. Then he widens the disaster, saying the wrong arrest demands a retrial. The office freezes under that truth, while everyone pretends this is routine paperwork. Baryun's assistant gets ordered to find the lawyer fast, because delays are fatal. Meanwhile, he sends Captain Lee hunting the real culprit through old connections. Another prosecutor gets dragged in immediately, because this circus needs witnesses. Time is running out, so Baryun orders the team to move now. Back at his cluttered office, he studies the files like a man loading bullets. And when the door stays shut, that silence feels way more dangerous. The assistant finally gets the lawyer on the line, and the cavalry arrives fast, which means the office can stop pretending this mess is routine, because it definitely isn't. Baryun immediately clocks the newcomer, already smelling trouble behind that polished face, and the room stiffens when the attorney is named, like somebody just opened a trap door. The old acquaintance recognition hits hard, with the lawyer looking about as pleased as a defendant. Then Baryun welcomes him in that dry, terrifying way that says this conversation is already a problem, and when Han Kyungwook gives his own name, the whole setup turns wonderfully awkward, because Baryun leans back like he's seen this type before, and probably hated every second. The warning lands when he says that face feels familiar, which is never a compliment in his line of work, and that smug confidence around Baryun starts collapsing, right before the real pressure begins. In the grim detention center aftermath, Baryun gets dragged into another legal mess, and the prisoner smugly jokes he picked the wrong face, which ages terribly, because Baryun cuts straight to the real point, calmly asking about the culprit, while the exhausted lawyer confirms the confession exists, but the evidence is embarrassingly thin. Then Baryun leans on the appeal deadline, forcing the lawyer to move fast, and the prisoner starts whining that appealing only keeps him locked up longer, which is adorable, considering the whole law says defendant appeals cannot worsen sentencing. Baryun knows that trick, but the lawyer suspects the detention center changed everything inside, because if the prosecution joins the appeal, the sentence can still get nastier. So now the case hangs there, with everyone suddenly terrified of the next move. Still, the case reeks of an unjust killing, and Baryun refuses the easy story, asking whether the investigation was squeezed into something uglier, because the confession looks embarrassingly convenient, while the lawyer admits the pressure felt real, yet swears the actual mistreatment never crossed the line. So Baryun cuts straight to the heart of it, demanding why the whole thing feels so suspicious, and the answer is tomorrow's paperwork. Since He's heading to meet Cho Taeseon for the appeal, with that move supposedly clearing the real culprit and helping the prosecution lock the story down, then the summoned lawyer gets told to sit down, because now it's personal and messy, and Baryun insists the real criminal is already exposed, so the name can be washed clean. But the prisoner starts panicking, whining that appealing means staying locked up even longer, which is hilarious, until the fear turns real, and he decides to dodge the appeal altogether. The lawyer swears appeal means faster freedom, while the prisoner clings to home. Then the prosecution's version gets uglier, with Taeseon supposedly arrested nearby, conveniently enough, but that excuse reeks, because they still missed the obvious contradiction during investigation. So the whole thing looks like a rushed setup, pinning blame on someone helpless. And yes, even the so-called evaluation was blocked, because the judge refused it. Naturally, that left the lawyer pleading innocence, while nobody bought his clean act. Baryun's fist slams down, and suddenly the room loses its fake confidence. The prisoner explodes into panic, cursing everyone like a man finally cornered. Then the truth lands harder, and he starts begging through the fear. One last hand movement seals it, as the whole excuse falls apart. Baryun cuts straight through the fear, and Taeseon knows this isn't a bluff, because the prosecutor hammers the obvious trap, pushing him to admit the setup. So Taeseon folds in the corner, looking every bit like a man already condemned, while Baryun coolly exposes the lie that the police forced him into guilt, and that smug certainty finally cracks. Right as the prisoner's eyes go wide, then the whole room sharpens around him, all pressure and no mercy, with Taeseon squeezing his own clothes like denial could save him, but Baryun just sits there, arms crossed, already knowing the truth, leaving the poor guy trembling about how terrifying the police looked and how the prosecutor, and even the judge, made him feel hunted. Taeseon's nightmare keeps closing in, and Baryun pins him with that cold stare. Then the lawyer's crew swoops in, promising protection and a miracle reunion with Mom, but the poor guy just stares blankly, already sounding like a broken alibi, while Baryun sits there like a tax audit with a pulse, completely unconcerned, until the room shifts and the trap springs shut. Because someone wants a pause, then Baryun leans in as a prosecutor too, daring them to compare muscle and authority, and Taeseon finally picks the weakest possible answer, choosing Baryun over everyone else, which sends the whole appeal fantasy straight into the dumpster, because confidence is cheap. Outside, the office facade looks calm, but the pressure keeps building anyway. Even now, Baryun knows Taeseon is lying, and that fear is doing the talking. In court, Taeseon's shadow hangs over Barun, and the judge's glare cracks the suspect first. Baryun coolly promises a guilty verdict, because apparently panic works better than evidence here. Outside, the city keeps posing like innocents, while the real rot keeps breathing underneath. Then Park Jung-sung barges up, barking at Kang Baryun like manners ever saved a crook. Barun barely blinks, and swats back that the case should have been prosecuted properly first. The smug act instantly deflates, because confidence is useless when your loopholes are exposed. The suspect starts sputtering about confession details matching the victim, which is just tragic. Baryun answers with the obvious. He came back from detention, not a vacation. Then comes the real jab, questioning whether that fool could even plan a robbery. Park Jung-sung just grins through the humiliation, while Baryun treats him like a joke with paperwork. Baryun turns the handcuffs into a lesson, because crooks love lying like it's talent. Dongwook laughs it off, then immediately starts sweating under that stare. Baryun turns the whole misunderstanding on him, and the room gets colder. The smug prosecutor hears the obvious truth. Street rats aren't masterminds, just liabilities. Taeseon starts rattling, while Baryun yanks his collar with surgical contempt. Baryun mocks the fantasy that this suspect could ever plan a real crime. Even the city outside feels fake, as duty and cover-ups get dragged into daylight. Then Baryun demands accountability, and Dongwook's face folds. Like cheap paper, the plea comes next, asking for an apology if Taeseon is proven innocent. By the end, it looks less like a cover-up, and more like Dongwook panicking. Baryun drops the legal hammer, and Seo's smug confidence starts leaking fast, because skimming the police work only made him look more guilty, not clever. Then Baryun twists the whole false accusation back onto him, and Seo panics, as if this mess was ever a master plan instead of one spectacularly stupid cover-up. Now the prosecutor storms off, screaming that Kang Baryun will pay for this, while Baryun just stands there, cool as ice, wearing that infuriating silence, and the whole city skyline looks exhausted, like even the buildings know better, because the fallout spreads into those cold apartments where nobody feels safe anymore, leaving one lonely room swallowed in darkness, with a figure curled up inside. By the end, the case feels less solved than emotionally wrecked, and that's worse. So the robbery suspect gets arrested, and the woman hears it like bad comedy, because the real culprit supposedly surfaced now, which is hilarious timing for everyone involved, except her eyes immediately widen, like this news just hit something personal, and the whole room sinks into that horrible blue silence, where panic starts cooking. Then some poor honey gets called to in the dark, already sounding doomed, while the bald creep leans in with a knife, acting tough for a crime he still botched. The door stays shut for one brutal second, like the house is holding its breath, until a new guy slips inside. And the tension spikes instantly, because the woman spots him and basically forgets how language works. Then the screaming starts. And yep, this household is officially cooked. Kang Baryun walks in with that prosecutor's stare, cool as a guillotine. The secretary freezes, then barely manages a tiny, terrified hello. Baryun orders Choi Jinwoo to prepare the interrogation video, and the room obeys. He skips the face-to-face meeting too, because pressure works better on paper. The record pins Kim Jin-nam to a July 19 knife break-in, and Baryun confirms it. The suspect starts sweating once the question lands. Realizing this is no casual chat, he admits blood hit everywhere. Then he bolted like a coward in panic. Back home, the genius discovers his clothes soaked in blood, which is inconvenient. Then the stolen loot memory hits, and his pockets become the next crime scene, just jewelry and a 50,000 won bill. Pathetic loot for a disaster. Hez sickened now, regretting that stab like it meant anything. Then the red-haired clerk nails the match, voice and missing cash. Baryun stays icy, while the coward admits fear ruined everything. If only he had checked properly. What a masterpiece of failure. But Baryun cuts in, soothing the guilt with brutal confidence. "This isn't your burden," he says, "and that's the real knife." The police and prosecutors botched it, then shaped the story. Even Taesion's confession got squeezed to fit their lazy script. So Baroun sends the witness to court, promising the true culprit, and the wounded man just folds again, quietly struck dumb. Under the courthouse glass, Baroun thanks the system, while Trouble starts smiling back. A few days later, the whole building feels like a rerun of bad decisions. Then the chief prosecutor summons Baroun, as if this office actually enjoys tension, and orders the robbery-homicide case shoved over to Seo Dongwook, because why not? Except Seo immediately points out that this mess began with Baroun's mistake, so the chief calmly explains the original prosecutor knows the case best. Convenient nonsense, but Baroun snaps back that Dongwook won't fix errors. He'll probably bury them, and he flatly admits he doesn't buy that weird investigator psychology act, nor the sympathy for anyone who let an innocent person suffer through incompetence. Because until guilt is proven, innocence still owns the room. Baroun hits the room with cold logic, mocking rookie prosecutors who miss basics. Jang Jinho flares up, demanding Baren understand this case's importance. The office frame darkens as overturning indictments exposes prosecutorial failure, and the fallout would shake their organization's discipline, obviously. Jinho then sells the reassigning as harmless correction, but it reeks. Baroun refuses that nonsense, saying Seo should not inherit his own mistake. Seo's smug face finally cracks. Because Baroun is not buying the cleanup act, Baroun presses harder, warning that real accountability beats office image games. He doubles down, saying another prosecutor discovering the error proves healthy checks, and then he finishes by refusing their media spin fantasy, pure courtroom steel. Baroun twists the knife, suggesting press trouble beats, replacing the chief prosecutor, and Jinho's throat clears like a man watching his cover story collapse, while the smug middleman sweats, suddenly aware Baroun knows every weakness, because this room has never been a debate club, just a pressure trap. Baroun then demands a guilty verdict, making courtroom standards sound frighteningly easy, and the reassignment excuse gets dressed up as cooperation, not incompetence, but the trial room itself says otherwise, empty chairs mocking their confidence, with the judge's bench looming like the punishment they cannot dodge. As the whole case slams shut behind them, one sharp impact after another, leaving the trial prosecutor exposed, defenses gone, and panic wearing a suit. The judge drops the not guilty verdict, and the room finally exhales, while every suited onlooker sits there, stunned by how badly control slipped. Because one smug face still thinks this trial was just theater, then the shaken witness babbles for his mother, which is adorable and tragic. Outside, Baroun owns the pavement, surrounded by shadows that suddenly feel small, as a stranger realizes his standing before prosecutor Kang Baroun, then praises him for cracking the case, and casually demands an interview. Handing over a card like that somehow makes him powerful. Cute trick, but Baroun reminds him the prosecutor's office has official channels, not favors, and makes it clear the target is him, not some deputy chief. Incheon's glass towers glint politely, while Jinho offers Baroun a fake olive branch. Hansong Town looms next, all luxury polish hiding the rot underneath. Chairman Zhou Jae-yong's name hangs there like a coffin plate, already half buried, and the old boardroom cynic keeps reading the fallout, acting shocked for sport, because Baroun isn't buying any of it, so the room gets direct and ugly, with the proposal slapped back, the focus snapping to the real target instead, as Jinho admits the higher-ups love this little public nuisance, conveniently, of course. The office chorus insists Baroun's image is too clean to bury easily, and that smug prosecutor poster boy nonsense starts sounding like a survival strategy. Baroun cuts through it all, seated above the city, refusing the nonsense. They're calling him a soul failure, as if exile hides corruption, but that reckless upstart nonsense only makes the fall look priceless, because Baroun's already in the room, calm enough to embarrass the smug, and the polished prosecutor image suddenly sounds like election bait, which has the chairman pretending that might actually be possible, while the office shark just grins, waving off delayed wages like business. Baroun answers with that cold little huh, and the whole act sours, then orders discreet help, so the return to central office looks engineered, because the criminal record screams 12 wage crimes, and the excuse is laughable, and now prison time feels way more likely than another corporate shrug. Baroun pins the delayed wages confession down, then moves to prosecute immediately. The defendant chokes on the idea. Suddenly begging for a tiny sentence, Baroun laughs at that fantasy, and calls him a habitual offender. 12 prior offenses later, the judge's mercy sounds like a joke, because remorse is missing, and reoffending looks practically guaranteed already, so Baroun tells him to wait for court, then watch helplessly, while the lawyer's phone flashes and the office tension spikes, He finally gets waved out, all dignity leaking into the hallway. But Baryun isn't done, and the next call already lands, because the noose tightens, and somebody just found him. Park Dae-young, the dirty detective, vanished before the warrant could land, and now the investigation explains why the coward bolted so fast. He juiced his career by framing habitual offenders and selling crackdowns, then drifted between cops and criminals. Basically corruption with a badge. Baryun pinpoints the rental car in Hwasong, and the panic deepens, because the trail keeps crawling towards Songsan. Ugly and unavoidable, with the suspect apparently alone, every road now becomes a manhunt, while Baryun's ally asks the big question, and the chase keeps moving. Then the informant wants to know the source. But Baryun stays evasive, because whoever tipped them off is protected, hidden, or already buried. Out in the open field, the black car sits suspiciously still beside its white twin, and that silence already screams trouble louder than any siren ever could. Baryun clocks the setup and instantly knows the situation smells rotten, because one car is abandoned, while the other is positioned like bait. Inside, the old enforcer's body is already turning gray, while smoke lingers, and Baryun calls it carbon monoxide poisoning before anyone can fake innocence. Then the driver's hand grabs a hidden blade, desperate to play hero, but Baryun reads the move and smashes the window first. Beautifully rude, the impact sends panic everywhere, and suddenly the smug little chase becomes disaster, as the bystander begs him to stop ruining his hand on that car. Baryun closes in, and the first shove already screams bad intentions, because the blade gets pinned uselessly, all that swagger turned to scrap. Then the beanie-wearing onlooker realizes this is not a cute parking dispute. As the driver's weapon gets ripped away, and his plan unravels, Baryun hauls the older man over the door like it's effortless cleanup, dumping him beside the smoking car, where the ground finally wins. The poor witness is left staring at the aftermath, which is honestly deserved. While the bloodied target coughs up the last of his dignity, Baryun checks the pulse, and that smug little corpse tour is over, so the ambulance gets called, and even the prosecutor gets hospital advice. Baryun stands over the wreck, and the witness is already flinching, while his hand drops from the car like the cleanest shutdown imaginable, because the driver's big accusation just got exposed as desperate theater, with a rock, not some superhero fist, powering that window tantrum. And at the hospital, the doctor's verdict turns uglier than the crash. The gas exposure was brief, sure, but the concentration was catastrophic, leaving the victim alive only in the saddest technical sense possible. So Baryun coldly rejects hope, because fantasy won't fix brain death, and the chairman can only rage that the bastard choked on himself, while the cap-wearing witness begs for mercy, as Baryun stays ice-cold. Baryun stares down the wreckage, calling the whole chain rotten and useless. Then the cold logic lands. If the victim's brain dead, the case dies, so he refuses sentimental nonsense, pushing to investigate before the paperwork buries everything, and even the dead partner Taeson hangs over it like a smug ghost. While back at the towering WB Holdings office, the next money circus opens, where executives brag about nurturing 30 beauty creators in Incheon, then escalate into global greed, because apparently domestic profit is for amateurs, and the chairman nods through the sales pitch like corruption is just dinner, as the director pitches China expansion to grow the beauty machine, and the poster girl promise turns the whole scheme into polished, export-ready fraud. She leans in, already baiting them with the selection question, while he pretends he's clueless about beauty. Yeah, right. Then she unveils Tencent's beauty creator program like it's genius, and the chairman's little I see lands politely, suspiciously flat, because now it's a creator survival show, dressed up as opportunity, where viewer reactions crown the top 100 and lock in contracts, and the chairman calls it amazing, as if that's not obvious greed, since Taobao, China's population, and beauty tech together spell money addiction, so the sales pitch rockets toward Vietnam, Europe, and global expansion, and he just stares while she drinks, both of them knowing the game. She dangles a seize this opportunity pitch. All polished temptation. He coolly explains too many investors kill profits, not ambition. Then he vanishes on a call, because the richest room still runs on panic. She watches him go, realizing the deal just slipped through her fingers. Her face twists at the insult, since some chairman really just walked out. The call sounds urgent, and suddenly Baryun's name turns the mood colder. In the hallway, he keeps talking business while she stalks behind. Irritated, she downplays the loss as a temporary relief. Classic corporate cope. He warns their colleague to stay quiet, because loose lips ruin beautiful disasters. Then she stares ahead, already plotting the next move, annoyingly unbothered. Sion Hua needles the mayor, jokingly weighing police versus tax service, and he plays startled, like this circus was totally unexpected. Then she nearly collides with Ku Juntae, asking why he's there, while he fumbles a restroom excuse, barely selling the lie, then brings up his earlier public official talk. And, wow. Because city-backed profits always become later problems when scandals bloom, except she clearly wants that problem, not stupidity, on purpose, so she keeps steering the room, suggesting plenty of methods. With that smug smile, she postpones everything into gradual discussion, before ending by apologizing to Choi Taeseon and the drag detective. My opinions got tossed aside instantly, because subtlety died here, and the suspect starts admitting Kim Jin-nam's arrest wasn't clean. Then the evidence looks even uglier, with the story flipping twice, while Baryun corners the cover-up, asking why another offender got used, and the bald coward caves, blaming Detective Park like a convenient shield, which somehow protects Park Dae-young, that conveniently untouchable ghost, except Baryun refuses the fairy tale, saying Dae-young's recovery is impossible, so he turns to the paperwork trail, asking how long they worked together. Then he hears Park's reputation as a spender, which is adorable, and finally asks whether illegal favors hid inside the investigation. Had been cruising entertainment spots, acting like the streets owed him privacy, and that smug routine only looked weirder the more Baryun watched, because the excuses about trust were so flimsy, they practically waved a flag, while the man kept trying to distance himself from Park Dae-young. Then came the locker evidence. And wow. Expensive taste suddenly looked suspicious, with that luxury watch screaming privilege, louder than any confession ever could. When Baryun finally pressed him, the door opened and the lawyer walked in, and the room's temperature dropped as the evidence hit like a cheap ambush. "Prosecutor Kang Baryun?" the visitor asked, already looking cornered by the setup, and Baryun answered with icy calm. Because yes, that was absolutely him. Internal Affairs just slid in, waving Song Hyung-gyu's badge like a courtroom ambush, and the police, who played mute for ages, are suddenly grabbing Park Dae-young's case. Classic timing, right as the luxury watch clue starts screaming dirty money. The room snaps when they mention going quietly, because nobody loves surprise audits. Then the real setup lands. Yoon-chan, Yol gets planted as a corporal. Baryun hears that and instantly clocks the operation, because of course it's an undercover play. The secrecy excuse sounds hilarious now, since protecting the agent was the actual headache. Internal Affairs admits they've tracked Park Dae-young for ages. Not exactly subtle, were they? Still, Yoon-chan Yol earned Park Dae-young's trust, which is practically a death wish. And just when progress seemed real, the whole thing curdled into this mess. Still, something stinks, and Baryun pinpoints the frame-up, while Yoon-chan Yol admits intervention would wreck the whole sting, so the cops swallow their pride and blame Park Dae-young's suicide. Then Baryun coolly notes their precious operation already went up in smoke, meaning the whole case gets handed over. For safety, how noble. As the undercover setup sits in a sterile room, pretending it wasn't obvious, Baryun corners the suspect with surgical patience, demanding the real story, and the old man keeps sweating, because excuses stop working this fast, so Baryun drags up the wife and murder angle, stripping the mask away, then the table slams, and the last bit of confidence finally cracks. The old man gets caught in the crossfire, and the room turns vicious, while the whole setup coughs smoke like a cheap miracle gone wrong. Then the prosecutor leans in, choking the last excuse out of him, and that smug grin finally melts into a very expensive-looking panic. Elsewhere, the city glows like nothing happened, because scandals love pretty backdrops, and now the conversation shifts to a lounge where manners are just camouflage, as Han Seon-hwa toys with the former mayor's weakness, smiling like she owns it, while Baryun cuts through the noise, calling the grand speech useless. Then she twists the business report into a private meeting trap. Very subtle, because the closer they get, the easier the leaks become. The commissioner question lands, and Baryun's eyes sharpen at the nonsense, while she shrugs off every agency name, acting adorably clueless and smug. Then the table turns toward a hidden tip, the night before yesterday, meaning Park Dae-young's suicide attempt, plus the former mayor's hush request. Baryun nails the date, and suddenly coincidence starts looking embarrassingly fake. Next comes Yoon-chan Yol, dragged into Internal Affairs custody, courtesy of Song Hyung-gyu. Hess ordered watched, because if the commissioner connects, the rot spreads fast. Then the handler tells him to approach the company, build rapport, quietly. The city glows outside, but inside, everybody's playing nice with poison. Baryun just asks who it was, and she smirks, refusing names. Burner phones flash the first crack in this polished little conspiracy, and the red-dressed woman smugly assumes she's the only one hiding one, until the white-shirted man gets exposed as an informant too. Congratulations. Now, curiosity turns strategic, because business people treat secrets like currency. While she keeps smiling, clearly thrilled this room is finally getting messy. and he stays composed, which is adorable when everyone's pretending innocence. Outside, the city glows like everything's normal, because corruption loves good lighting. Then the door slides open, and the next suspect gets dragged into view, with Baryun standing there like a verdict in a suit, zero patience left. As the old man realizes, way too late, this is the guy. In the hospital, they pin suspicion on the elderly patient, and Baryun is already mercilessly cornering him, while that sharp-eyed prosecutor narrows in, looking way too calm for a room this awkward. Because the whole point is simple: squeeze the truth until the poor guy starts shaking, and the doctor blandly blames alcohol withdrawal, which is a fancy excuse for a wreck. Then Baryun pivots harder, tying the attack to a female prosecutor's interrogation voice, and he dismisses the whole story as ridiculous noise. Because yes, it does sound fake, but the doctor insists the man needs psychiatric evaluation, which only deepens the mess. So Baryun presses again, asking if the hallucination claim actually explains the violence. Then he shrugs off any hesitation, acting polite while still applying the knife, and suddenly the not a babysitter excuse lands flat, because this case is bigger than comfort. In the spotlight, the old man finally admits that answer, and Baryun immediately corners him on the wife's voice, turning that pathetic hallucination excuse into pure embarrassment. The prosecutor keeps pushing, mocking the imagined disrespect, because wow, even a female interrogator becomes his flimsy scapegoat now, while the recording setup quietly proves this mess was documented. Then the doctor swoops in with clinical cruelty, labeling it schizophrenia, but Baryun isn't buying the neat little paperwork miracle. He drags the story back to the killing, and the man folds, claiming he drank so much, everything turned into fog. He gave the same police report statement, neatly packaging confusion as guilt. Then Baryun tears into the convenient memory, mocking selective recall like a hobby, while the smug witness gets a warning to stop answering everything, and just vanish, because the suspect isn't some helpless baby bird, no matter how overprotected they act. So when questions become irrelevant, the prosecutor decides silence is the only smart response. With the room refusing real interrogation, the trio's exit starts looking embarrassingly inevitable. Outside, Baryun coolly summons Mr. Oh Seon-young, turning retreat into a public loss, and the old man shuffles out while the prosecutor's stare says the game is already over. But even that exit can't save him, because Baryun keeps smiling at the pressure brake, and the chairman's expression finally twists, proving the trap snaps shut at last. That smug grin is dying fast, and Baryun's already locking the bars. The city tower looms like a polished lie, begging for a verdict. Baron pivots from the crime to Oh Seon-young's state of mind. The room caves, admitting mental incapacity might matter, annoying everyone. Baryun cuts through the nonsense, pointing at punishment and responsibility. Then he declares the bastard wrong from the start, no mercy. The old man mock laughs along, but agrees with the prosecutor anyway. Baryun slams the daughter's statement down, exposing the alcohol defense. Baryun pauses, calculating the damage, while the trap keeps tightening. Then he demands Oh Seon-young's daughter, because the truth needs backup. Baryun's stare cuts the room open, turning mercy into a luxury item. And outside, the police report puts Oh Seon-young's daughter dead center, because Seon already admitted she hid upstairs, listening like a terrified ghost, which means she never actually saw the crime, just the aftermath circus. So Baryun pivots straight to her father's drunken spiral, and suddenly, the bottles tell the whole humiliating story. While everyone pretends alcohol explains murder, he keeps pressing, now asking how much Seon-young could even hold, then admits the girl looks like a chronic victim, yet protects her killer, and that little contradiction hits hard enough to leave her sweating silence, because Seon's statement ends up favoring Oh Seon-young, whether anyone likes it or not. Baryun corners the drunken old man, and the room smells like failure already, because that half-empty soju bottle should not have been enough to knock him out. And Baryun instantly knows the math is rotten, so he keeps slicing deeper, exposing how nobody even knew the man's real tolerance, or how much he drank, until the old fool finally admits the guy kept muttering about hearing voices, and those whispers turned into one ugly word, the kind that makes every hallway go cold, while the woman at the scene shrinks back, insisting the whole thing scared her into her room, and Baryun deadpans that this was dangerously volatile, with a domestic violence history on the record. Then he rips through the excuses, pointing out a decent father means nothing sober, because if she had left sooner, she might have stopped the murder before it happened. She folds under the pressure, whining she was simply too scared to act. Meanwhile, the prosecutor sits there reading the room like it owes him money. The tension spikes as footsteps or movement cut through the silent office. Then the old man barges in, calling for Seon like that fixes anything. He tries selling the family tragedy, begging leniency and promising her father's release. But Seon's face says everything, because that comforting lie lands like a slap. Now all three are boxed into one awkward little interrogation circus. The old man even flashes that smug, fragile confidence, as if despair were winning. Seon collapses inward, shaking while the paperwork keeps staring back at her. And Baryun knows she never testified freely to Oseon-yong, so confrontation starts. The old man strolls in, bragging about his alcohol tolerance like it matters, but Baryun corners him fast, exposing a crime report nobody can dodge now. Then comes the drinking alibi, and the guy admits starting at home, which makes the barely one bottle excuse look embarrassingly flimsy. Honestly, he still insists age makes small amounts hit harder. Wow, tragic performance. Yet Baryun shuts that down, noting Seon's claim barely differs at all. So the leniency plea dies on impact, and the papers get accepted back, while the old man clutches his dignity like it's not already ruined. Baryun then catches the real slip, because she never said father aloud, and that's when fear finally cracks open the whole family lie. The daughter sits frozen in green, already breaking under Baryun's pressure, and his cold logic turns pity into a brutal family sentence. Wow, because her weak protest only feeds the trap, not a rescue, while he keeps twisting the knife, demanding she choose daddy's fate. Then the old man tries the classic please be reasonable routine, and Baryun casually guts it, reminding him judges, not wishes, decide. So the daughter folds harder, realizing mental weakness won't save anybody, and the generous 10-year fantasy gets crushed by a much uglier reality. Her face says it all, one last blink before the lie collapses, while Baryun finishes with the cruel truth. Forever was never promised. Baryun coolly promises responsibility, like sentencing chaos is just paperwork, while the daughter starts wobbling, already begging not to break, and the citywide backdrop turns into his courtroom-sized vow to expose everything. Inside the office, the old room fills with witnesses, files, and tension, as Han Seon-hwa casually drags Oh Se-yoon's guilt into the open, and Baryun answers with that nasty little grin, already smelling weakness. He mocks the weak as blame-shy prey, then explains why they get devoured, which hits like a truck, because the brave mouth finally owns the trap. The room freezes, the warning lands, and the door swings the whole mess forward, because once Baryun moves in, nobody in here gets to hide. Prosecutor files stack up like coffins, and Baryun keeps that cold distance, while the old perfect model now reeks of corruption, and his colleagues start sweating, because Baryun's reputation has changed from goody two-shoes to something uglier. The witness tries to dress murder logic up as victim-blaming, and fails beautifully. Baryun cuts through the excuse, making self-blame sound like a coward's bargain. Then he turns the knife on Dongwook, exposing how much that praise really costs. And the room practically laughs at the man who thought smugness was armor, because Baryun doesn't deny the accusation, he weaponizes the silence instead. By the next day, the office still sits there, but the mood is completely dead, and Baryun walks in ready to bury every lie under a cleaner verdict. In the prosecutor's office, Baryun corners the room with quiet menace, and the old man starts blurting out evidence like panic counts as defense. Then the psychiatric report lands on the table, neatly wrecking the excuse, because temporary alcohol-related impairment is not the getaway he hoped for. So Baryun smirks through the logic, making the case look painfully ugly, since withdrawal symptoms could mean the crime happened while fully aware. But Dongwook's hesitation gives him away, and that smug face evaporates, while Baryun calmly notes insanity won't save Oh Se-yoon anyway, and the evaluation becomes just another paper tantrum nobody respects. With the office settling into dead silence, he keeps working the files. Baryun exhales over the file, already smelling how ugly this gets, because the expert verdict slaps down diminished capacity, neat and useless, but only if the court buys it. And that's the trick. The doctor's report says the defendant likely knew exactly what happened, which means the mental state excuse is collapsing in real time. Embarrassingly, Dongwook freezes at the phrase full responsibility, and wow, shocker, Beren keeps pressing, asking whether difficulty matters when guilt is already boxed, so the room pivots, strategy changing fast, like cowards finally reading weather, with the courthouse waiting for the last trial date, bloodless and patient, and the final verdict lands. Oh Se-yoon is still legally diminished, unfortunately. They're already spinning diminished capacity, hoping the verdict bends. Then Baryun opens witness examination, and the room instantly stiffens. Oh Se-yoon gets called up, and the floor creaks like bad alibis. She swears nothing's hidden, nothing's added, because panic loves legal cosplay, but every answer lands wrong. While Baryun tightens the noose anyway, the old man still smiles through it, until suspicion fogs that grin. Dongwook nearly folds at the sight of Baryun's calm, surgical pressure. Baryun coolly reassures the witness, like fear is just another rookie mistake, Then he pins her beside him, and the room knows this is personal, because the real question is what Seon-young did after work. The interrogation opens with a drunk story check, and the alibi already smells thin, because the police note the defendant seemed sober. Then the father starts sweating. Barun cuts straight in, demanding why Fear once rewrote the statement, and the witness freezes, because pretending to be brave is awful cosplay. Then the truth drops. Dad used to beat her whenever he drank, classy legacy. So childhood taught her survival, not honesty, which is really tragic. Barun calls out the contradiction, and the old man's smugness finally caves, because only 2 attacks were logged, yet he swears there were plenty more. When asked why nobody reported them, he points to neighbors hearing the chaos, and suddenly the whole family's secret excuse collapses under public shame. Father's release meant worse beatings, and reporting became impossible survival. While Baryun's calm pressure warned this story could sink them, then he probed the man's usual behavior, and the old cover cracked, because sobriety never lasted long, just enough for fake apologies. So Baryun twisted the contradiction, asking why punishment was always refused, and the answer was fear, a home ruled by drunken retaliation, meaning sobriety never erased violence, only reset the next disaster. The witness finally folded, admitting there was never any safe version. Baryun closed the trap cleanly, like the paperwork had already won, and the judge-like silence followed, daring the prosecution to object. No, Seoji-sang keeps the room frozen, already smelling weakness, and he needles the witness about dodging re-examination like a coward. The man tries to hide behind leniency, but the contradiction keeps bleeding out, as Baryun points straight at the bigger trap, where diminished capacity is just convenient theater. Then Seoji-sang names the psychiatrist, dragging Seoji-sang into daylight, and the doctor confirms the old diagnosis, calm as a mortician with paperwork. That condition had been severe, treatment lasted only 2 months, and stopping early did not mean recovery. Just a prettier kind of danger. Long-term neglect and alcohol abuse turned the whole excuse into a disaster, so he ends it by asking if hallucinations are next, because apparently the collapse needs subtitles. Seoji-sang keeps the pressure polite, and the doctor starts sweating anyway, because that earlier collapse clearly mattered more than anyone wanted admitted, so he needles the dangerous diagnosis, then asks why treatment ever stopped, and the doctor, trapped in his own paperwork, finally concedes it was serious, meaning the excuse just turned from temporary into nice try, liar. Before the hearing shifts and the next witness gets theatrically called forward, where Jeon Ye-suk confirms the neighbor angle and casually opens the floodgate, since she had reported Oh Seon-young before, but mistook it for violence, until the crashing sounds, the panic, and the burglary logic all clicked, and suddenly the gentleman excuse sounds exactly as stupid as it is. So Hez claiming drunk him was a whole different monster. And even after a report, the old man says it kept happening, because apparently the lawyer's favorite hobby is dressing abuse in excuses. While Baryun calmly asks whether the blackout erases the ugly pattern, and the witness stalls, trapped between pity and the house's bad reputation, until the story mutates into repeated drunken violence, loud enough for neighbors, which makes the chairman's noble honor look hilariously paper-thin. Then Baryun shuts it down, saying that's everything, no theatrics needed. The judge presses for whether the evidence review can finally wrap up, and Baryun sits there, smugly ready for the next liar. In court, the sharp-eyed prosecutor quietly sets the trap, already bored of excuses, then steps up with additional evidence, because subtlety clearly died years ago, and the defense instantly whines about timing, waving procedure like a holy shield, while medical records land on the table, exposing 1 year of ugly neglect, because the victim wasn't just assaulted once, she was being slowly erased, and the doctor admits she kept hiding from hospitals, terrified of being found, which explains why the records were such a mess, and why the delay mattered. Yet the prosecutor smirks that he can still pull medical info without a warrant, making the opposition look dramatic, helpless, and embarrassingly outclassed, and the final record says she was basically doomed long before this hearing. The defense throws an objection, but Baryun's pressure already owns this courtroom, and the judge coolly tells him to behave, like that ever works on prosecutors. Next comes the defendant, dragged to center stage while everyone pretends this is civilized. The old man stands there looking harmless, which is adorable considering the mess behind him. Baryun then asks for direct testimony, and the witness starts recounting that awful day, saying the police first reported his wife dead, and he kept doubting it, until the autopsy turned savage, with 6 stab wounds and 0 room for lies. Then the lawyer shrugs off his own guilt with a tragic little apology routine, but Baryun instantly snaps back, calling out the whole accident story as a cover, and the autopsy evidence proves this was murder, wearing a very cheap disguise. In this shabby hearing room, the old man starts playing dumb, which is adorable. Barone immediately skins that act alive, pointing out the stabbing math is impossible. The witness folds harder, pretending memory vanished with the whole crime scene. Baryun leans in coldly, dragging up the psychiatric treatment he abandoned. Then he exposes the ugly part, that stopping treatment was a chosen gamble. The defendant's violence history gets dragged into daylight, no matter how polished he looks. Baryun keeps pressing, treating neighbors' testimony like the noose it is. And when the old man finally agrees, the room gets even uglier and quieter. Baryun then pivots to the medical records, because surprise, the lies were sloppy. Living with an injured wife makes his denial collapse into pure, embarrassing fraud. The prosecutor starts dismantling the story, dragging alcoholism into the record, and the old man sits there sweating, because treatment suddenly sounds like a convenient joke. Then Baryun twists the knife further, saying drunken violence was never some accident, only a polished excuse for a man who kept choosing damage control over decency. And that smug lawyer face nearby? Yeah, it starts cracking once honor gets weaponized, because the courtroom hears the word objection, and Baryun just keeps coming. Now the real guilt lands hard, as drunk and dangerous becomes calculated. Not tragic, the defense tries to rescue him with procedure, but the room already smells blood. Then the judge cuts in, suspending the grilling while the prosecutor stays ice cold, and Baryun lowers his hand like a finished execution, because the lie is already dead. The judge finally ends the defendant's grilling, and Baryun gets his turn. While the courtroom floor suddenly feels like it's holding its breath, Dongwook looks over, already realizing this isn't going to stay polite, because Baryun pins the whole case as habitual violence, not a mistake, and even the doctor's warning gets dragged back into this ugly record. Since the drinking, the temper, and the danger were all fully known, now the defense starts sweating. Because that excuse is rotting on contact, Baryun keeps going, calling it eventual intent, not some tragic accident, and the smug glasses guy snaps as the legal trap finally closes, while the defendant just stands there, exposed, with nowhere left to hide. As expected, Baryun's trap snaps shut, and the room starts sweating, because act free from its cause means drunken crime, not excuses, and prison bars don't magically shrink responsibility, no matter the fairy tale, so the defense gavel comes down hard, making the loophole fantasy collapse. But even then, the pretty little theory barely survives practice, while Dongwook freezes, realizing Baryun dragged up insanity too. Then Baryun hammers the point. Full responsibility still lands on him, because years of family violence only make the record uglier, not cleaner, and the smug escape artist loses his smile, exposed and blaming nothing. So yeah, a heavy sentence is coming, and he earned every second. Thus, the prosecution lands hard, and the defendant's future starts evaporating, with life imprisonment on the table, because subtlety clearly died here, while the courthouse stands cold and spotless, pretending justice is ever gentle. Outside, the polished crowd performs shock, mocking the act-free from cause defense, and the woman with the starry smile keeps it all sounding elegantly poisonous, because even the judge's reality check makes that theory sound embarrassingly academic, like something a first-week law student would toss out before getting laughed off. Yet Lee Woongbei still plays brave, insisting punishment is the noble answer, while Jo Hyun-young barely flinches, dragging the truth into a prettier trap. And back in the office, Baryun lounges through the discomfort like he owns it. The whole skyline looks clean and innocent, which is adorable, because inside that office, Baryun is already reading the room like evidence, and the old excuse about a 30-year sentence gets treated like bargain bin morality, while the chairman and his cronies smugly call destruction justice, as usual. But Baryun's eyes lock onto Incheon Detention Center, meaning somebody's getting revisited, and the boss gets the call, acting calm while ordering the next monster prepared, because one of their guys is already inside detention, and that's convenient, though the poor inmate is curled up like a broken secret, sweating through panic, and the smug caller finishes it off by sending a toy, because subtlety died first. The office door gives way, and Baron's case just got louder, when a shaken coworker drags in another suspect like bad timing is her hobby. Then Jang Jinho hears the emergency, nods once, and reroutes Baryun to his office, because 8 suspects just barged in, turning interrogation into a circus, and Baryun clocks the chaos instantly, while the room panics over the numbers, since too many bodies mean the staff can't keep control. How tragic. So Jinho shoves over the records and dumps half the mess onto Kang Baron, apologizing like that fixes anything, while Baryun accepts the file without blinking, as the whole office swarms the doorway, proving this case is spiraling fast. The room already knows this is a complete mess, and Baryun is done pretending, because 8 women stand there like a tribunal, blaming the same pathetic cheat, while Yu Hua-young calmly confirms Kim Yoon-hyo simply followed the plan, and Baryun nails the obvious truth, that this boyfriend treated loyalty like a hobby, with Hwa Young smirking that 8 was probably generous, which is embarrassingly bad, since Seo Yoon-seop apparently lived a double life, bouncing between women like a clown, and Hwa Young even checked his phone, then started contacting every betrayed ex, so the women cleared his place out and built a revenge coalition, naturally. Turns out he stole her phone and car keys too, then fled like trash. Contacts start exposing Seo Yoon-seop's mess, and Bae-ryun treats it like open and shut rot. One betrayed woman says he vanished, then had the audacity to sue them. The money trail is uglier, with stolen fortunes leaking from every excuse. Bae-ryun dismantles the ownership lie, and the gifts belong to Seo Yoon-seop. Then he flips theft into burglary, because taking back what's yours was never the defense. Ownership means nothing when the actual resident gets violated, obviously. So the room erupts, and the landlord logic collapses under pure nonsense. One woman barely holds herself together, staring at the wreckage in silence. Bae-ryun stays cold, saying this was planned, serious, and not dropping anytime soon. Yu Hwa-young kicks off the summary, opening Miss Yu's door and resetting the password, while Bae-ryun quietly tracks the car back to Prosecutor On's office, already smelling trouble. Then the first witness admits Miss Song Ji-hyun took the home appliances, and another points to Miss Eom Seon-young taking clothes, bags, and accessories too, which Bae-ryun slices into a neat little masterpiece, exposing Seo Yoon-seop's lies, proving the gifts never overlapped, and the whole setup reeks of premeditation. Then Kim Yoon-hyo gets pressed about what she handed the plaintiff, and suddenly the tears come out with the cheapest excuse in history, because she only fed him cash, stocked his fridge, and got played. In this cramped office, a woman tries to dress up delusion as marriage, but Bae-ryun instantly turns that confession into a legal trap, because the whole hell repay me later story sounds romantic until it collapses, and the next witness proves Seo Yoon-seop never even offered a real proposal, which is hilarious, since she thought age gap loyalty counted as commitment. Then she admits the big grand promise was just payment after the exam, meaning marriage was never said, not even as bait, and wow, Bae-ryun clocks the whole thing as a polished con artist routine, coldly. So Kim Yoon-hyo's case finally starts looking like fraud, not heartbreak. If this gets framed right, fraud charges suddenly start breathing, and the whole story is dragged into daylight under city office windows, where Bae-ryun thanks the staff politely, like he is not already winning, then asks the witness what she thinks, because he sees the setup, and her answer is basically heartbreak with a side of bad judgment, since she calls the mess unnecessary trouble, as if that fixes anything. Bae-ryun keeps that cold stare, quietly admitting the suspects are pitiful, yet the plaintiff still wants punishment, minimum sentencing, and a lenient judge. So the real question becomes whether this was romance, or just a scam. Bae-ryun politely claims the plaintiff, and the room instantly tenses up. The witness worries about pressure, but he reminds everyone she's the victim here. He plans a victim interview, promising the suspicion won't reach him. She folds under the spotlight, agreeing because resistance now would look ridiculous. In the cramped office, two strangers trade tense words over the case. Another door swings open, and the whole mood turns predator-level cold. A newcomer calls the office, and the bastard's reputation starts shaking. Bae-ryun turns, exposing the cheat, and the polished smugness evaporates fast. The so-called tough guy collapses into begging, proving the scam all along. Inside this upscale room, the desperate one drops to his knees, begging mercy, while the smug man answers with that cruel little grin, acting untouchable. Then comes the accusation. Not about love, but another woman. And wow, because apparently just talking was the whole masterpiece. What a disaster. And the wounded partner finally spells it out, abandoned, ignored, and humiliated, which sends the cocky bastard blinking like he just got hit by truth. Then the pressure turns savage, as the price for cheating gets named, and his flimsy denial gets swatted aside, folding faster than cheap paper, leaving him doubled over in panic, red background and all, deliciously pathetic, while the final shock lands hard, because betrayal just shattered his face. Inside this classy room, the smug businessman starts flexing his fake authority, then his own momentum drops him flat, courtesy of one merciless shutdown, because a new visitor arrives calmly, already carrying the whole accusation, and the trap snaps shut on Seo Yoon-seop, handsome disaster and all, with fresh criminal allegations surfacing, turning his polished desk into evidence, while the women claim marriage fraud, exposing his little commitment theater, and even the gifts trail back through that embarrassingly convenient promise. He swears he never mentioned marriage, but panic says otherwise. Denying threats and coercion only makes the fraud look even uglier, until his confidence fractures completely, and the whole scam implodes. A slick braggart starts promising repayment, dressed like sincerities, expensive costume, but Beren twists the line instantly, exposing a loan hiding as romance. The ceiling suddenly feels colder as gifts become receipts and leverage, and that smug little smile freezes when Seo Yoon-seop gets called out, because the prosecutor's stare says pardon won't save this disaster. With one eye on the women, he keeps mocking the fake commitment theater. Then the witness panics, realizing Baroon somehow knew the cheating trail, while Taeson's name hangs over everything like a dead man's curse. And the cornered fraud finally starts sweating over who knows him, because Baroon could expose him now, since fate already handed the knife. A secret gets passed in a stairwell, and the next blast suddenly feels inevitable, because this pretty boy prosecutor keeps smiling like he already owns the wreckage. Then he drops the ultimatum: withdraw the lawsuit, apologize, and pay up. While outside, the building glare makes the whole scandal look painfully public. Inside that room, the woman freezes under pressure, trying to keep her story intact, but Baroon's stare says he already sees through every ridiculous excuse, and when she admits she knows nobody by that name, the bluff starts cracking, because the calm woman on the phone turns the whole thing into a joke, casually claiming she meets countless people and still can't place Seo Yoon-seop, which is exactly the kind of confidence that makes liars start collapsing. In a sleek room, he brags about connections. Then Taeson's beating story lands. The woman on the phone lights up, acting like this mess is hilarious. Baroon hears the name Justin and immediately smells another childish lie. She mocks his office visits, because apparently his success came with humiliation. Then she shrugs off his whole identity, as if 8 women weren't enough already. Baroon's confusion is priceless, because this wasn't some romance, it was fleecing. The cheating manual gets uglier too, all begging, hinting, never asking outright. Even the word marriage becomes radioactive, and his face finally drops. He realizes the student's story was just another polished excuse, not innocence. And the woman admits he never said it cleanly, which is somehow worse. In this spotless apartment, the rumor lands hard, dragging Taeson into another ugly lie, and the brown-haired woman snaps back that she only talked, not some grand affair. Then Justin gets roasted as a gifted fool whose talent still couldn't save him, because the smug little businessman line sounds paper-thin when a con artist is this obvious, and she laughs at the comparison. Like he really thinks that makes him special, while a silver sedan glides onto the road, carrying trouble with way too much confidence. Inside, the driver clocks the mirror and realizes he is being tailed, which is embarrassing, honestly, because subtlety died before the chase even started. The dark car closes in fast, making this whole setup look painfully deliberate, so the driver calls for a vehicle check, and now everybody knows the scam is real. A Taeson construction company car cruises out, looking innocent, which is adorable, because somebody inside is already mocking the Waryong Gangster label, and that confidence ages poorly. The real target is Kim Byung-jin, Taeson's new face, while Baroon keeps the trap tight. Behind them, the silver sedan closes in, turning this road into a very public tale. Then the rear door clicks, and the driver's smugness starts bleeding out fast, because the watchful face outside the window proves this isn't random, just humiliating. The passenger freezes when the pursuer is identified as a prosecutor, not a civilian, and Baroon confirms the name with that calm that makes guilty men sweat harder. So Kim Byung-jin finally introduces himself as Taeson Construction's CEO, smug little legend, but the blonde driver still wants to know what Baroon actually came here for. Business always needs connections, and tonight, she came hunting one. Baroon already knows the game, so his calm feels almost insulting, while the target sits alone online, boxed into a dead-end room. Every click and taunt lands like a cheap ambush on her nerves, and the trolls keep circling her reputation like vultures with Wi-Fi. Then the name Yoon Hyun-seo finally drops, and the mask slips. The comments get uglier, mocking her face and acting like parasites, until even her silence turns into a weaponized humiliation spectacle. One shattered phone later, the smug cruelty looks a lot less brave, because now she is crying, and they finally look ridiculous. Under bright city glass, Baroon gets dragged into another celebrity nightmare, when the office door bursts open and someone demands the Yoon Hyun-seo assignment, because her innocent image is already being sold like some tragic fanfiction, and the tabloids keep calling her a million-selling star, then a nostalgia trophy. So the moment her name drops, Baroon is suddenly staring at a human headline, while his boss shrugs off the case like it's pocket change and useless gossip, except the real mess is cyber defamation, where anonymous cowards feel brave online, until Baroon calmly points out they're just insults with a keyboard costume, and the smug prosecutor insists he can handle it himself, like that's impressive. But the office only gets quieter as Baroon locks in on the real hunt. Baroon sits stone-faced, already looking like bad news for somebody, while the Taeson movie tease hangs there, exposing a painfully obvious setup. because the repeated Yoon Hyun-seo chatter is just social bait dressed as romance, and the smug push to date her sounds less subtle than a wrecking ball, but Bae-ryun takes the cyber defamation nuisance personally, not emotionally, which is worse. Then the office finally delivers Choi Jin-woo, a trainee with polished nerves, and the doorway opens on a purple tracksuit visitor, coolly announcing herself, only for the introduction to hit like a rubber stamp. Prosecutor Choi Jin-woo, with Bae-ryun now standing beside the lead prosecutor like this was inevitable, and the apology lands soft, because the facts are already doing the stabbing. The purple tracksuit girl arrives sweetly, acting like this mess is routine. Then the complaint turns vicious, dragging Yoon Hyun-seo's comment nightmare into daylight. Bae-ryun hears the suspect only knew her online, not personally, convenient, and pathetic. The room keeps pressing for a motive, as if fandom always comes with venom. Bae-ryun, naturally, already has the answer, because he's allergic to vague nonsense. The comment trail widens into messages, and the harassment starts getting uglier. He stares at the file like the internet itself just confessed and panicked. The warning comes next. Check it yourself, or let your lawyer babysit. She accepts the folder without a flinch, which is somehow more disturbing. Even Bae-ryun notices the silence, because that kind of calm never means innocence. A complaint file lands on the table, and the ugly comment trail is finally exposed. Bae-ryun explains she endured 3 years of filthy harassment, like the internet paid rent here. She shrugs it off as attention, but the company wants a sacrificial example. Then Bae-ryun presses harder, asking if she plans to settle, and the room goes cold. She answers no, because apparently dignity still exists in this circus. Bae-ryun nearly bristles, then corrects himself and weighs the hidden danger. He notes that prison time is rare for malicious comments, which is cute until now. This case's cruelty lasted long enough to justify real punishment, and maybe jail. She thanks him with that terrifying calm people wear right before trouble vanishes. Then Bae-ryun leaves, already satisfied the next move will hit harder. He opens with psychiatric treatment questions, trying to sound calm and clinical, and she answers with that awkward little pause, already feeling the room tilt, because even mild malicious comments can carve scars deep enough to wreck someone. She admits the damage was real, just not dramatic enough for the gossip crowd. Then Bae-ryun warns celebrity status does not make that pain disappear, hospital included, and the other man stiffens there, because the prosecutor is clearly not buying the act. When Bae-ryun claims he is a fan of Yoon Hyun-seo, the guy totally short-circuits, so now he is visibly sweating, like fame finally punched through his smug little shell. Bae-ryun asks for a photo, and the question lands like a legal trap in silk. Then he agrees to take one secretly, dragging everyone outside for the sweetest humiliation. In the cramped office, Bae-ryun corners the smug fanboy, and the air turns surgical. Then the man gushes over Eun-jong, treating admiration like a personality. Adorable disaster, while Prosecutor Choi gets branded a total fanboy, and he hates how true it sounds. Bae-ryun cuts deeper, calling out how a prosecutor's power can pressure victims, which leaves the other man blinking in panic, suddenly aware of the legal gravity, and Bae-ryun doubles down, warning even affection can become coercion if someone feels trapped. So the man finally realizes the joke was never cute, just potentially violent. His confidence collapses into full embarrassment, because bravado looks pathetic under scrutiny. Then he admits he never considered it that way, promising to be careful now. And later, alone in his living room, Bae-ryun sits like a predator reviewing receipts. Bae-ryun studies that family photo, and the smiles already smell fake. His instincts twitch hard, because this whole setup feels rotten. Then the breaking news drops, and the actress is suddenly dead. Yoon Hyun-seo becomes a headline, while Bae-ryun's stare turns razor sharp. That's when he realizes this death is no neat little accident. Back home, he starts digging, with the confidence of a man hunting liars. The shady caller talks big, pretending the lawyer's advice makes this harmless. Bae-ryun rejects that nonsense, since public pressure can still crush victims, and now he's smiling like the executioner, promising the guilty will pay. Even the lawyer's excuse feels pathetic, because the stink still lingers. Another celebrity headline lands like a slap, and Yoon Hyun-seo is suddenly dead, while Bae-ryun reads the comments and sees pure cowardice masquerading as concern, because the last thing he said about her was that prison time was unlikely, and now that smug little prediction looks embarrassingly cheap, almost criminally stupid, since even a jail term would barely touch the real damage anyway. Then the truth hits like a hammer. One woman actually died here, so he vows to crush the suspect himself, which is adorable until it isn't. And when someone warns him to act like a prosecutor, his expression goes lethal, because biased emotions can hand the defense a gift-wrapped escape route, and even the innocent-looking girl in purple just reinforces that ugly, favorable mess. Yoon Hyun-seo flips the blame back, roasting the prosecutor's shaky diagnosis, while the other man protests that the bastard can't suddenly dodge responsibility. But Baryun shuts that nonsense down, preaching evidence over gut-feel theatrics. Then the room detonates as someone blurts out his title like it's a curse, and Dongwook gets instantly muzzled, because emotional amateurs love sabotaging cases, only to have the suited witness stiffen under that chilling, paperwork-perfect stare, as Baryun sits there like a bored king, arms crossed, judging everyone. Then he exhales, amused, because the suspect's finally been dragged in, and the beanie-wearing arrival keeps the whole interrogation smelling worse by the second, with the message clear: prosecution has begun, and somebody's about to crumble. At the table, the prosecutor drags Mr. Young Yun-ho into the spotlight, while he shrugs off the comments, hiding behind paperwork like a champion coward. Then the older man gets pinned by that icy stare, and the evidence, forcing a grudging admission, because records always bully liars harder. Now Baryun pokes at the obvious fan-turned-hater routine, and the suit stiffens, blaming medical school stress, as if that excuse deserves a gold medal, but the prosecutor cuts through it, calling the weakness exactly what it is: a pathetic dodge, which makes the whole room smell like cheap desperation. And when the insults get called filthy, the target caves even harder, admitting he once liked Yoon Hyun-seo, then twisted into obsession and hate. In a bleak room, Seo Yoon-seop finally exposes his ugly obsession, and Baron's cold stare turns every flimsy excuse into a joke, because the poor sap thought online hate was harmless background noise, until Yoon Hyun-seo's death made his just comments defense look disgusting. Then the prosecutor crushes his grand moral act routine without blinking, reminding him that indirect cruelty still counts as murder. Nice try, while the suit-faced coward whines that the word choice is too harsh, and the room mercifully cuts the circus short for today, as Baryun keeps that razor profile, already sensing the next lie. Then his phone lights up with the next corporate nuisance: Byomjin. The boss is on the line, ordering Byomjin to make trouble fast, and Byomjin answers like a loyal shark, heading to grab one target, while Baryun is already tracing the trail to that hidden construction site, where a body lies crumpled like the world's worst kidnapping receipt, and the first thug learns that Baryun's stare kills confidence better than fists. As the warehouse entrance starts feeling less like cover and more like a trap, then the kidnappers hear the word kidnapping, and suddenly grow ironic, because their tough guy routine melts into whining about media exposure, until even one finger sounds like a ridiculous price for survival, and the answer comes back viciously: all 10 fingers if necessary. Inside the hidden site, the hooded target reaches for scissors, because subtlety died here. Then the poor bastard bolts and starts begging for mercy, which is adorable. But the warehouse stays empty, and his voice only makes the fear louder. A masked enforcer drops in, bragging that survival suddenly costs body parts. The target freezes and asks who he even is. Like that helps. The answer is pure menace, a messenger from Yoon Hyun-seo, straight from hell. Then the story turns cinematic, dragging up that movie about traitors and snitches. The warning lands harder when the boss punishment gets remembered in full. Now the suit-clad backup steps in, and the target remembers everything, instantly. So the killer smile says it all. Yeah, he's about to lose all fear. His tongue is gone now, and the message started getting surgical, because typing threats with your fingers still counts as cruelty. And the real punchline is the essence stays identical anyway, so half denials about Yoon Hyun-seo collapse under that spotless little blade, while the masked messenger insists murder still works without a knife, and the victim's panic finally spikes, realizing this joke has teeth. Then the shushing enforcer leans in like he owns the funeral, as the whole construction site screams and the night swallows confidence. Inside the room, the woman in red corners Yoonho over the body, and suddenly that smug silence turns into the ugliest confession imaginable. Kang Baryun is already in their nightmare, and he looks terrifyingly calm, while some trembling excuse starts begging for mercy from his mother instead. But the prosecutor label lands like a verdict, not a rescue, and the suspects, "What are you talking about?" face instantly collapses, because Yoon Hyun-seo's name gets tossed out as the sender. How subtle. Then the masked thug explains murder can happen without a clean knife, so the red blazer prosecutor keeps digging, and the kid finally folds, denying everything 1 second, then panicking over the covered body the next, as Baryun yanks the blanket away, proving the trap was never fake, and the real target turns out to be the prosecutor who questioned him. The red blazer woman snaps at the prosecutor in charge, already losing control, while the young man beside her stiffens, begging his mother to keep quiet. She doubles down with fake calm, acting like secrecy somehow equals safety, then swears she'll handle everything, which is adorable right up to disaster, as the moonlit building cuts to the parking lot, and the hunt tightens, where a suited figure stands watch, while the car game turns ugly, and a hooded enforcer lingers nearby, because subtlety clearly died earlier. The executive tries looking untouchable, but the prosecutor's stare says otherwise, with the masked man sliding in behind him, hiding menace like a professional, until he finally names Kang Baren, and the whole setup instantly feels doomed. Barun turns his head, cool as ever, and starts the humiliation, while the masked attacker lunges in, only to eat a brutal counter. Those narrowed eyes say it all. This fool picked the wrong prosecutor, and the hooded coward gets launched hard, spiraling through the garage, then freezes, knife shaking. Because surprise, the prey was never prey. Baryun's stare cuts, sharper than steel, making the whole stunt look pathetic. As the attacker collapses, the polished shoe confirms who just got owned. Another masked creep realizes too late. The chase already went sideways, with Baryun standing dead center, untouched, while the ambush crumbles around him, and the garage empties into silence, because Kang Barun is still coming. Under the moonlit construction shell, the whole setup already smells like trouble, and this so-called tough guy sits, tied up like a bargain bin confession, because Baryun's calm stare says the game's over before it even starts. That blank glare ruins the attacker's confidence, turning swagger into panic. Then the prosecutor leans in, all polite menace and surgical confidence, making the bound man sweat through the bravado, which is honestly adorable. When the blade flashes, Barun still looks bored, like this is routine, and he casually keeps the weapon in play, as if babysitting criminals, because now the real question is who hired this clown, and why, while the false tough guy folds under the pressure, completely exposed. The bald suspect finally feels the room close in, and panics. Baryun's stare stays cold, making the idiot think twice about talking, because every excuse now sounds weaker than cheap office wallpaper, and the prosecutor keeps pressing, politely cornering him like a joke with paperwork, while the man admits his clients would erase him if exposed, so now has begging for mercy, claiming this job already signed his death warrant. Baryun barely reacts, just watching the knife come up like routine. Then the masked attacker lunges, and instantly learns consequences have teeth. The blade catches the bald man's face, and fear finally leaks out, because one blink later, that smug confidence is shattered wide open. Baryun's stare says the old man's guts are about to become his own problem, and the prosecutor's calm walk makes that threat feel insultingly professional, while the bound bald suspect blinks at him, suddenly outclassed and out of excuses. Then Baryun sweetens the nightmare, offering mercy only if he sells out the client. The target scoffs about payment, pretending money still matters when his life's already leaking, but Baryun immediately flips it, turning the deal into a choice between cash and survival. The old man's bravado collapses next, because even he knows betrayal beats a grave. Then the masked enforcer lunges anyway, proving panic really does make people stupid. Baryun shuts that nonsense down instantly, warning that a murder plot against a prosecutor will drag the media in, so the terrified man finally accepts the job. A blade hits the floor, branding the job before the kill. The bound old man stares back, already regretting every bargain. Rain hammers the house, making this little nightmare feel official. Inside, the lone watcher sits frozen, blanket and dread in tow. Then the silence cracks, and somebody outside loses all composure. The startled guy twists away, as if panic might save him, but the window says otherwise, because smugness hates harsh weather. Down below, a body lies still while the cloak keeps prowling. The masked enforcer returns, looking expensive, secretive, and deeply criminal, and the once confident target finally starts breaking under the pressure. His scream tears through the rain, because getting stabbed was never in the plan, and the masked creep stays ice cold while the poor guy folds under that pressure, now has convinced this lunatic means murder. Which, wow, great detective work there. So he peeks through the window like a scared rat hoping weather solves violence. But downstairs, the red-suited body just sits there, splattered, finished, and tragically unsentimental. Then that hooded enforcer reappears, all menace and mystery, like a budget horror sequel, and the terrified witness finally screams for his mother, because bravery has officially expired. Outside, the barefoot escapee stumbles out the door, thinking fresh air counts as victory, only to keep gasping and sprinting like the whole yard is closing in on him. Behind him, the dead-eyed woman in red waits in the rain, and things get uglier. The mother is already cracked open, drenched in panic and blood-red shame, and her son is shaking her awake, dragging hope back by force. Then he clings to her like denial might somehow stitch this disaster shut, but the door groans open, because apparently privacy died first tonight, and his face drops when the missing body situation gets even uglier, while the outside world answers with rain, an exit, and zero mercy. Then the knife turns up near the gore, because subtlety clearly quit, and the kid grabs it, swearing this nightmare will not own him. which is adorable. Since the killer mood is already picking a first victim, even the housekeeper has to step in, asking if the young master is breaking. A single tear gives the whole disaster away, and Jung Yoon-ho is already drowning because the rain-soaked standoff has turned his panic into a knife-brandishing nightmare, while the next scream basically confirms somebody's life just got wrecked, and suddenly the case is stamped for prosecution. Like that fixes the blood, with murder charges piling on top. Because apparently the universe enjoys overkill, then the old man coughs up the ugly version, trying to sell mercy, but Bae-ryun stays cool, smug, and annoyingly surgical while the story tightens, making Yoon-ho look less like a mastermind and more like the chosen scapegoat, as the hospital records and housekeeper statements start spelling out the collapse, until the psychiatric report lands the final blow: self-harm, psychosis, and no escape. Rain turned the garden into a crime scene, and Jung Yoon-ho stood there drenched, knife in hand, while the housekeeper stumbled onto Taeson's blood-soaked body. The evidence looked laughably one-sided, with Yoon-ho's fingerprints on the weapon, because apparently murder likes a neat little scapegoat. Then came the weird part. The body had a deliberate mark, and Bae-ryun immediately knew this wasn't some sloppy panic kill. In the archive room, the clue hit harder, a simple "why" that screamed planned staging instead of random violence. Taeson's prison record made it uglier, because had already been bound and abandoned, like someone wanted his death pre-written. Bae-ryun smirked through the chaos, deciding the best defense was to slap an A on the corpse, because chaos apparently deserved a signature. The old man tried to soften the blow with excuses, but Bae-ryun stayed merciless, calling the guy insane and not even bothering to pretend otherwise. Even with probable parricide hanging over Yoon-ho, Bae-ryun still pushed for indictment, since a guilty verdict would at least lock in custody. And when everyone started whining about the odds, he cut through it with chilling logic, saying prosecution still mattered even if conviction didn't. That's when the housekeeper realized justice had finally cornered the bastard, and somehow felt grateful for a world this cruel. Bae-ryun grins in the office, already pretending justice is his personal toy, while the courthouse and its statues dress up human law as divine wisdom. Then the whole system gets called out as a fragile invention, not miracle, so he steps in anyway. Since polite morality clearly missed the memo, not from noble ideals, but from ugly vengeance wearing a prosecutor's face, and that conviction spreads across the city like a verdict nobody can stop, until a locked hallway and waiting elevator make the next ambush obvious. Bae-ryun's silence says everything, because the trap is already closing in. After entering Kang Bae-ryun's body, Taeson's old swagger turns intoxicatingly reckless, but that interference leaves Bae-ryun unsettled, and the real game finally twists. Outside the elevator, a tired officewoman catches Bae-ryun before he slips away, and immediately recognizes the prosecutor, like the hallway itself is gossiping already, while his smug little stare says he expected this interruption and planned for it, so she awkwardly suggests a drink. As if danger ever needed an invitation, Bae-ryun answers with effortless politeness, then offers dinner or drinks, whatever works, and she melts into agreement, because apparently his calm is legally weaponized. He even volunteers to pay, turning the whole thing into a suspiciously smooth ambush, as the scene cuts to a shabby restaurant packed with exhausted strangers, where a glass lands on the table, and the conversation gets even colder, because Bae-ryun drops the real point. Most cases circle back to women. Bae-ryun casually snacks in the office, looking way too relaxed for trouble, then drops the obvious truth that Office 504 is basically all women, so the room clocks the usual higher-up efficiency joke, and nobody laughs, because his point lands harder. Victims here are rarely the pitiful ones, while the food tray becomes a grim example of how ugly these cases get, and he frames that pity as a prosecutor's duty, not some noble fantasy. Then he shrugs off the fake courtroom hero act, saying pity clouds judgment, and reminds everyone prosecutors should serve public interest, not ego and bias, which leaves the coworker visibly boxed in, insisting on objectivity instead, before Bae-ryun corners her with the real question, what kind of case this is. In this dingy corner, the quiet witness sets up a horror story, and Bae-ryun coolly labels it a murder case, because subtlety is dead. Then he twists the room by calling the killer wife the usual story, before explaining she'd been abused for years, with scars doing the testifying, so when self-defense gets floated, he doesn't flinch and demands the victim's details, because once the beating stopped, the whole argument collapsed right there, and he shuts down the fantasy of self-defense, lasting after the attack ends. Then he sizes up the suspect like shopping for excuses, age and build first, before the autopsy clears drugs, and leaves the defense looking painfully convenient, which is why Bae-ryun smugly lands the obvious answer. Then isn't it simple? Sorry? Lands awkwardly, but the room already smells like a trap, because the masked killer story was never about the first stab, and that's hilarious, Baryun keeps the pressure casual, then casually points out the real killer probably had help, and the woman's face says everything. Because surprise, lies hate daylight. Then he cooks the defense with one ugly fact. A clean heart. Stab is rare, especially against a small woman, which makes the macho murder fantasy look stupid. So he pivots to accomplices and the possibility the actual culprit is elsewhere, and the suspect's expression turns brittle, like confidence bought on clearance, because the confession was already boxed in. And self-inflicted drama won't save anyone. With no forced entry and no intruder, the police sent her over without doubt. Baryun spots the case files, ugly weak spots, and the room tightens, so he pushes harder, dragging the suspect into a far uglier questioning, where her memory stays sharp on aftermath, just not the murder itself, and her changing stabbing details make the whole story wobble embarrassingly. Then the bloodless pajamas basically scream that the killer theory is cosplay, because that's when Baryun decides she is absolutely not the culprit, and he coolly tests for the real perpetrator, making her panic, until she finally leaks the son who fled home after family chaos, which explains why she keeps dodging him like a cursed topic, and now the accomplice-shaped silence around him is doing all the confessing. The son stands frozen in the doorway, sick of watching his mother suffer, and Baryun's expression says the blame game is already getting dissected, because the easy answer is always to indict somebody and call it justice. But the white-aproned skeptic knows that kind of shortcut is embarrassingly lazy, while the prosecutor's stare turns colder, forcing the real question to surface, since this mother already chose danger just to protect her own boy, and now the whole room treats that sacrifice like a legal inconvenience, as the leniency speech starts sounding ridiculous next to a possible murder charge. One glance at the domestic table makes the killer theory look absurdly flimsy, and Baryun keeps smiling, because silence is starting to confess for them. At the table, Baryun calmly crushes the lazy parent first excuse, and it hurts, because the housekeeper is sitting there like a witness to a family disaster, while the son's whole future gets reduced to prison talk, as if that's neat, and the old story about the tormentor dying starts sounding way too convenient, since the mother's face says sacrifice, not joy, and definitely not victory, so Baryun stops the room from romanticizing misery and targets the real culprit, reminding everyone life is messy, not a cheap morality poster, and the work remains. While the woman's forced smile admits she never got to choose this outcome, outside, the city keeps glowing like nothing happened, which is just rude, and the investigation marches on, because the truth is not done embarrassing people. In the cramped office, Baryun and Taesin's ghost sit opposite each other, and the New Year reshuffle talk lands like a polite threat in a knife fight. Baryun keeps the smile, then suggests the old post is getting crowded, because Incheon's drug market is growing messy, with fresh gangs muscling in, and the intel says the cheap stuff is flooding outward from the city, while the government suddenly remembers crime exists, promising a brutal crackdown, plus a special narcotics task force under the prosecutor's office. How convenient, except it answers upward to Justice Ministry suits, not the chief prosecutor, meaning the independent speech is mostly decorative wallpaper. And Baryun knows it, because on paper it sounds clean, but reality is already laughing. At the top, reform arrives, smugly pretending it can tame prosecutors, but Baryun knows the president, the chief, and everyone else hate orders, so this new narcotics unit gets branded an outsider squad, unsupported, and naturally, the only man built to handle that mess is Jang Jinho, who gets pitched the task force like it's some noble promotion. How adorable. While Baryun instantly clocks the setup as a political exile with paperwork, because Jinho's the kind of chief who charges the division head first, and Baryun's grin says he already sees the rank being conveniently downplayed. So yes, they're bundling troublemakers into one shiny cleanup unit, huh? And if his boss really joined drugs, Baryun's the one who'll stop him. Baryun almost pretends to weigh it, mug in hand, then smiles instead. Nope. Jang Jinho shuts that down instantly, which is hilariously suspicious. Baryun stays relaxed, deciding there's nothing left to debate here. So the whole department starts looking like a tidy political exile package. Then the outsider prosecutor gets announced, and the room instantly stiffens. Baryun's unwelcome arrival sends the staff scrambling over the transfer papers. The old man even admits Jinho knew days ago. Classic damage control garbage. Baryun needles him for silence, while the paperwork quietly confirms the setup. Everyone complains the announcement was too fast, yet nobody looks surprised. Still, if they work together, Baryun knows this unit might actually function. Baryun's sharp stare cuts through the office, already bored of their excuses, because Jinho is posing like this transfer circus is totally under control. Then the nervous old man asks to tag along, which is adorable, and the department building drama gets dressed up as too much for a rookie, while another staffer casually drops that An already volunteered for narcotics, so Bareun immediately calls out the obvious backroom arrangement. Nice try. Seo Dongwook stammers that he never even heard An's name before, and when questioned about the transfer, he acts offended by the suggestion. Bareun keeps pressing, calling the job rough for a young woman, then calmly nails the real point. No transfer talk was ever discussed at all. So the old man swears he's just old-fashioned, not sexist. How noble. And Bareun just stares like he's hearing basement-tier excuses for the first time, because apparently Prosecutor An already made a huge decision, according to him, which somehow means violent crimes transfer talk is suddenly too much for rookies. And then comes the real gem. Narcotics is under violent crimes, naturally, so the department's just a glamorous sinkhole nobody escapes once assigned there, meaning experience locks you in, like some bureaucratic prison with worse coffee, and narcotics-only duty means drowning in drugs, gangs, and crime forever. In short, this promotion path is basically a trapdoor, not a ladder, and for Prosecutor Kang, that may not matter, but An's different, right? Her file screams humble beginnings, yet she's clawed into recognition, and now some rookie questions whether promoting An would be a mistake, because violent crimes transfer politics apparently count as character flaws, with narcotics lurking underneath. The whole department looks like a career swamp, so Bareun's choice to speak up lands like an expensive headache, while the old guard sits there pretending sacrifice is somehow helpful, and outside, the city backdrop reminds us ambition always has receipts, as Bareun coolly handles a bathroom interrogation, reading guilt off the mirror, then he texts An, tossing dinner plans aside like they mean nothing, before that tiny HM says he already sees the next trap. To be fair, Bareun knows this good-looking stranger is already under his control, because the classy restaurant setting screams money, polish, and quiet manipulation, with chandeliers dripping luxury above a table built for awkward truths, and Bareun sits there like the world's calmest prosecutor, dining on leverage, while Hyunyoung stares back, tense and unreadable, hiding behind that polished face, but he needles her with the obvious, acting like fancy food is the real test, so she tries dismissing the whole setup as too extravagant for comfort, and Bareun casually offers to cover everything, because of course he does, which only makes her feel weird about accepting the free meal, but he keeps grinning, insisting wealth makes guilt optional, and that's embarrassing. Everyone assumes she grew up rich, and she can feel it. Bareun catches the sharpness in that tone, because subtlety is dead. He waves off the money like it's irrelevant, which is adorable, then corners her with the obvious question, leaving her stiff, and now even her polished calm starts looking painfully fake, because his little joke about bribes lands like a courtroom knife, while she tries acting morally superior over a dinner she didn't pay for, only to accept the meal anyway. Since pride apparently has limits, Bareun notices the plates disappearing and keeps needling that discomfort. And she finally smirks, deciding rare luxury should at least taste good. Bareun smiles like dinner's already his courtroom, and keeps pressing on, then slides in the narcotics question. Neat as a blade, ridiculously polite, she wipes her mouth. But that composure is already cracking on contact, and admits she volunteered, like this whole mess was her brilliant idea. So he leans back and wonders why anyone would pick such a nasty department. She fires back that he volunteered too, trying to sound untouchable, cute, but Bareun laughs it off, saying he chose it because it fit him. Then he adds that he thought about plenty before deciding, especially her. Her glass taps the table, and the confidence starts leaking out fast, and now she's sweating, asking what he's even talking about. Uh-oh. Bareun corners her at dinner, twisting romance into a professional warning, and her fake confidence cracks as she lunges for a timeout, sweating already. Then he mocks the whole crush theory, because apparently this ambush had receipts, not feelings. His smirk lands, and she realizes this was never about flirting. Cute. She caves under the pressure, admitting the choice was his because of her, which is hilarious, since now even the apology sounds like evidence. Bareun calmly explains he went along for one reason, the prosecutor, and just like that, she's drafted into accomplice status. No overtime needed. His eyes stay cold as the trap tightens, and the paper trail finally speaks, because those socks in the taxi were the real giveaway, not her excuses. In this restaurant, Prosecutor Kang sits like dinner is already a verdict, while An So-young admits she knew everything and still looked away. Then the pressure hits her hard, because this was never romance, just leverage, and Kang leans in, acting like the old him is dead and buried, so when she calls him worse than before, he basically wears that insult like a badge, because Hayes heard the two stiff complaints forever, and respected them anyway. Now he reminds everyone the accident rewired him, not softened him, and the new prosecutor Kang is apparently a whole different problem, as he flips the mirror back on An, saying she looks more like the real Kang now, leaving her stunned, asking what that even means, which is adorable, honestly. Over dinner, she needles Kang Baryun, calling him the old stubborn prosecutor. Baryun fires back, like she's describing somebody else entirely. He toys with the wine glass, proving the trap already closed. Then he shrugs off her warning, refusing to be steered tonight. She answers with a calm smile, claiming she's ready for anything. Outside the window, the office sits frozen, while the case keeps simmering. Inside, Criminal Division 3. Boxes stack up as Baryun returns again, and with the new year looming, the reshuffle is basically locked in. Even the paperwork feels smug, because the truth is finally moving. So yeah, time flies, and so does everybody's comfortable little alibi. Baryun lands at Narcotics Task Force, and the promotion already feels surgical, with Jinwoo trapped in Criminal Division 3, wearing panic like a new suit. Then the trainee label gets quietly dumped, because office politics love a makeover, and just like that, Office 506 gets cleared out, neat as a cover-up. Baryun now has to finish old cases before the transfer, because paperwork never sleeps. While that last cabinet becomes the final loose end everybody pretends not to fear, Jinwoo winces, realizing the temporary arrangement was never temporary at all, and the chief starts prying, asking which cabinet Baryun forgot to mention. Baryun only pauses, thinking it over like a man already 3 moves ahead, because of course the mystery circles back to Kang Baryun's death, and now has digging. Inside the cramped office, the paperwork graveyard finally starts hiding something, and Baryun looks wrecked enough to make the whole mess feel personal, while the black-clad clerk acts smooth, even as the room judges him. Then he drops to the cabinet, sorting files like a man hunting receipts, until his hands catch a buried USB, tucked in deeper than common sense, and that smug little pause says he already knows this accident stinks, because one glance later, the evidence stops being subtle and starts screaming. The document box confirms the storage hideout. So the joke is officially over. Baryun snatches the drive, muttering over why anyone would bury this, and the elevator launch sends it flying, like the truth refusing to sit still. In the cramped office, the black-clad clerk keeps combing files, and the empty USB drive lands like a joke nobody's laughing at. Baryun stares it down, instantly smelling rot beneath the paperwork, because that empty drive is suspicious enough to make geniuses sweat. Then the polished man at the door drops in on Byung-jin, carrying the kind of casual confidence that usually hides a disaster, while the building outside looms like a very expensive pressure cooker, and Baryun's home sits there quietly, waiting for the next ambush, until Jang Jinho strolls in, all smiles and office polish, pretending booze and friendship matter more than the truth he's clearly hiding. Baryun freezes at the empty drive, and the room's silence starts sweating. Then the confident visitor pokes the wound, mocking Byung-jin's old reputation. Baryun turns that insult into leverage, smiling like a prosecutor with teeth. Jinho plays proud company face, while Baryun's glare says nobody's buying it. The USB bag lands on the table, and everyone suddenly develops manners. Baryun toys with the evidence, acting like this little stick ruined their day. He confirms the USB, then demands a tech expert to crack it open. Naturally, he already has one in mind, because pretending otherwise would be cute, and just when they relax, he names the only option left. Unfortunately, that guy answers to Director Park Jung-sung, so the trap deepens. The gambling rat gets exposed, tied to Director Park's busted little empire. Nobody knows why has hunted, until Song Il-gwan finally gets named. The room stays calm, but Baryun's stare says trouble already moved in. That blonde hooded clown starts sweating. After mocking the wrong prosecutor, Baryun's colleague checks the target, and the trap tightens beautifully. Then the order drops. Find him, before Park Jun-seong gets there. The whole thing jumps to a PC zone, all monitors and cheap anonymity. Some hooded losers bragging in the glow, thinking he's untouchable. Yeah, that joke dies fast, because he can't even read the time. And then a suit sleeve points him out, like trash getting sorted. Taesun's shadow looms over the blonde hood rat, and Baryun owns it, because the prosecutor's dead calm pressure turns swagger into public humiliation. Even the bastard's confused. Little Sir sounds like panic on arrival, while Taesun Construction stands there like proof the trap was already built, and the Waryong-ho name finally makes the hooded clown sweat through his excuses. Baryun keeps leading, so the smug act crumbles right behind him. Then the gambling site brag lands, and the room realizes this wasn't luck. It was a confession wearing a hoodie, because Baryun cornered him perfectly. So the safe place walk becomes a funeral march, courtesy of the prosecutor, and that empty USB joke dies the second the blonde freak finally breaks. Inside this bare room, Baryun quietly turns a sleepover into an interrogation. While the blonde idiot asks what the file contains, already sweating, Barun answers with that cruel calm, claiming the encryption's too advanced, then smugly tells him to wait and keep working here. Like that's mercy. The blonde finally looks up, realizing this isn't help, it's a trap, and Barun just keeps staring from the chair, daring him to stay. Behind them, the spare bed and empty walls make the setup feel surgical. Even the dust and cobwebs look bored of how badly has boxed in. Then Barun drops the real knife, tying this place to Waryeong-ho, and suddenly the whole building smells expensive, dangerous, and very dry. Barun smirks and needles him, asking why he is so afraid, then coolly invokes witness protection. Like that pathetic safety net means anything. The blonde bristles as Barun frames this as his problem now, because nobody protected him, and he spent that time sweating bullets. Barun keeps twisting the knife, exposing the gambling manager act, and the real confession lands. He was the site programmer all along, so Barun praises his quick footing while still hunting the reason, and the poor fool freezes. Realizing Park Junseong already has his number, Barun casually lifts his phone, almost inviting disaster with one call, and the blonde explodes, whining that they want him rebuilding the gambling site. The room already smells like a dead trend, and Barun is loving it, because the blonde's dark web hustle finally gets dragged into daylight. Now the smirk cracks as drug talk hits, and oh, what a revelation, not guns, just narcotics, which somehow feels cleaner to this clown. He admits he couldn't quit, so he kept running like a guilty prize, and Barun rewards that honesty with the terrifying compliment of approval, then tosses in the real nightmare. No trafficking, no drugs, just corporate rivalries, because Lee Eung-bae and Park Junseong built this rule like a loaded gun. That makes the blonde briefly feel important, which is adorable, until reality bites, since dragging him out would be war, and he is nowhere near that valuable. Song Il-gwan sits there all smug, already looking like trouble dressed as confidence, while the company tower outside pretends this whole mess is perfectly civilized. Then the case room sign drops the punchline, because suspects never get luxury, only scrutiny, and inside that cramped office, the paperwork circus is already in motion, until Kang Barun arrives and casually introduces himself. Like the trap is his home, the local chief stalls with a lazy excuse, which is always hilarious right before panic. Then Barun turns his attention deeper into the room, and suddenly everyone feels cornered, because his expression says this isn't a greeting, it's a dissection, and when the woman steps in beside him, the mood gets even worse for the liars, since Barun just confirms he got there first, and the clock starts bleeding. Barun's entrance hits like a cold slap, box in hand, already ruining the room's comfort, and that priceless normal reaction is exactly why everyone looks so nervous, because the so-called new prosecutors arrive, and the old guards instantly start sweating, while Barun answers the greeting with surgical calm, like he owns the investigation. Then he faces the room head-on, and the confidence gets noticeably uglier, with staff and bystanders packed around him. The whole office becomes one tight pressure cooker. Barun even mocks their childish staring contest, which is adorable coming from grown adults, because the moment he says everyone's present, the trap has already snapped shut, and that smug smile by the door belongs to someone who knows the fallout is coming. As the chairman steps in, hands in pockets, ready to watch the whole mess burn. Since we're family now, the narcotics chief steps in, all polished arrogance, and Barun gets greeted like a rumor, not a threat, which is adorable, because his stare alone turns the room colder. While the task force seniority game starts, with boxes piled like office theater, he's handed authority, and expected to smile, but even that smug suit admits he's worried, which is deliciously telling, so Barun asks what exactly is bothering him, and the confidence starts leaking. Then some loudmouth dismisses him as soft, proving bad judgment is contagious, until the so-called punk snaps back with that chilling prosecutor smile, and the whole hallway freezes as he and the chairman face off, inches apart, before the chairman coolly calls him rude, while poor Guteho gets publicly roasted. So this is the new prosecutor, and the room already hates him. Barun tells everyone to sit tight, because this mess needs a proper autopsy, not ego. He lays out the narcotics map, and Incheon suddenly looks way too central, which is exactly why this whole department exists, despite the office clutter. Then he hammers home that eradicating domestic offenders is absolutely critical. Barun's stare stays ice cold, making every smug face in the room reconsider, but then the mood flips, because enough serious talk apparently wounds their fragile dignity, so the chairman starts assigning rooms. Splitting the team like this is normal, and poor Kang and An get paired up, while Gu gets his own little throne. Prosecutor Kang's office gets 6 bodies, and somehow nobody laughs, because Jinho dumps 2 violent crimes rookies there, calling them assets, while Barun instantly reads the insult and labels them glorified farm labor. Then the whole department gets crammed in like furniture nobody budgeted for, so he questions the support. And yes, this setup is pathetically cheap. With Gu looming nearby, Bareun's stare says this circus is now personal, and Jinho tries smoothing things over with food, like bribery, fixes dignity. Outside, the new PC zone and building front just sit there, smugly modern, but inside the packed room, everyone's already seated for the real war. The green bottle starts the whole setup, pouring trouble into compliance, and the smug host practically basks in his own bad timing, because daylight drinking is apparently his genius solution for day one, while the housekeeper watches, already looking like this nonsense costs extra. The invitation lands on the clerk, and the table suddenly feels theatrical, but she refuses the drink, politely shutting down the performance. Then the men double down. Acting like female discomfort is a policy suggestion, only for her glare to snap the room silent, all venom and steel, and the bottle hits down hard, because confidence just got humiliated. At this sunny table, the smug men start day drinking like geniuses, and she flatly refuses the little glass they slide over, insisting gender has nothing to do with it, just common sense, while the loudmouth mocks her caution, proving arrogance ages terribly. Then she fires back with Criminal Division 3 experience, not fear, adding that violent crime work means gangsters, junkies, and chaos, so strict office hours sound cute, but reality never clocks out. When he whines about flexibility, she snaps the room awake, and his smug little grin finally collapses under her glare. Criminal Division 3 gets mocked from the start, and Bareun answers with cold contempt, turning the pathetic excuse jab into a little hallway-sized humiliation, because arrogance ages horribly. The housekeeper won't let rank excuse bad manners, and she reminds him that status means nothing when you're running your mouth around real violence, not office-hour theater. Then another voice cuts in, saying men always invent hierarchy games, which is adorable, and Bareun escalates the joke by proposing arm wrestling at dinner, like dominance is something you can actually measure, not just pout about while standing there brooding. The smug suit finally realizes he's the target, not the audience, so he starts sweating, and the whole room snaps toward the next representative, with Bareun already picking the prosecutor. Bareun strolls in like the verdict already belongs to him, so the room tightens, then he casually promises to take on everyone. Because humility clearly died, while the old man leaps to referee, suddenly brave once the spotlight shifts, and the table turns into a dumb little courtroom with egos for evidence, where Bareun offers up the hand-to-hand start, as if dominance needs paperwork, leaving the smirking challenger blinking hard, realizing this prank has teeth. Then the first clash lands and the old man gets launched into panic, because Baren is already grinning through the chaos, like this is routine, and with the next move coming, that smug confidence is basically dead. Inside the office, Bareun casually invites another round, and the room bristles. Then the first grip snaps shut, because the prosecutor wins again, obviously, and the next challenger gets folded too. Like confidence was optional here, while the old man keeps announcing the score, trying hard not to look useless. Then Bareun points at Guteho, offering the last match with a terrifyingly polite smile, which is funny, because Teho suddenly discovers arm wrestling was never his hobby, yet he still mutters some brave excuse, pretending this isn't humiliation in progress, before Bareun locks in the grip and crushes that posture in one clean motion, leaving Teho staring back, ready only because he's already losing. Bareun's stare lands first, already warning this room the match is over. Then Jinho grins and kicks off the arm wrestling circus, naturally. The challenger comes in cocky, but Bareun's grip shuts him down fast. Even the shocked reaction can't hide the truth. This kid has grit. Jinho hates admitting it, yet he concedes Bareun's ridiculous staying power. Bareun keeps that smug little smile, because of course, has not done. Next, the hand slam lands, and the opponent folds like cheap paper. Jinho practically worships the result, blaming his own dangerous star prosecutor. So now the office rebrands Bareun as the monster you definitely follow. That gleaming office tower looks harmless, which is exactly how trouble starts, and inside, the whole room sits boxed in by paper, silence, and bad news, until Chief Prosecutor Jang gets hit with Bareun's visit, and instantly loses his smug glow, because the young prosecutor shows up like he owns the warrant, not the hallway, so Jang gives him the floor, then quietly digs for the real weapon behind this visit, and Bareun answers with the dark web gambling lead, dropping a citywide crime syndicate bomb. Jang blinks at the drug angle, then admits it's only an assumption. Sadly for his ego, when asked where that intel came from, the source turns out to be a bust informant, leaving Jang to ask which organization is really moving, while the answer hangs ugly in the air, and Bareun just stares back, because of course he is nowhere near done. Taeson hangs over the room's crimson chaos, while Baryun steps in cold, unshaken. Woongbei scoffs at the Waryong-ho rumor, acting shocked by his own obvious mess. Baryun points to shifting power and a new criminal line, and the room stiffens. Woongbei stalls the crackdown, pretending urgency is optional when profits are involved. Baryun brings up the dark web, where tracing monsters is apparently a luxury. He warns that waiting only feeds addiction, so the damage keeps piling up. Then he flips the logic, insisting the core network must be cut completely. Jang Jinho frames it as public duty, because noble speeches make corruption sound cleaner. Baryun gets assigned the hunt, accepts it without drama, and turns to leave. The doorway opens, and the whole conspiracy suddenly looks far less comfortable. Baryun stands at the doorway, arm cradled, and somehow still owns the room, while Jang Jinho coolly notices the injury. Like concern is just office theater, Baryun shrugs it off as a ligament problem, because pain barely slows him, then jokes he should have rested sooner, before turning that praise into a threat. Outside, Taeson construction looms like a polished monument to bad decisions, and inside, Kang Barun stares down the dark web hunting grounds from his desk. Days have passed, yet the pressure only deepens on the trapped suspect, who keeps whining for fresh air, as if criminals get balcony privileges. Baryun walks in asking for excuses, and the poor guy immediately runs out of them. Then Jinho asks about the work, and everyone feels the trap finally click shut. Barone keeps his cool in the cramped office, while the blonde driver starts sweating, and the files are already screaming custom encryption, which is basically criminal cosplay, so Baryun leans back and buys time, acting like pain never got a vote, while the room's wallpaper and cobwebs quietly confirm this place is nobody's proud achievement. The blonde idiot tries to sound helpful, like errands will save his dignity, but Baryun's stare cuts straight through him, catching every nervous twitch. Then he decides to write down exactly what he needs, because improvising is for amateurs, and the polished prosecutor beside him smiles like, this trap is all perfectly normal. Outside, Taeson construction looms over the city like a monument to bad decisions, while the front desk below waits, because the next lie is already walking in. The guard seals the exit, and the blonde idiot gets stuck, whining like a trapped moth, while management pretends this is normal. Outside, the convenience store glows like a harmless little lie. Inside, Hoodboy prowls the snacks aisle, acting weirdly proud. He insists the trip is safe, which is adorable coming from him. Then he showcases a drink, as if groceries can earn respect. Next comes the jackpot item, and suddenly he thinks is useful, because now he's face to face with the chairman and two silent pillars. The drink gets set down like tribute, a tiny surrender on display, and the chairman blesses the pair, crowning them the organization's backbone. Chairman Lee casually praises Director Park, already sounding bored with the man's ego. Then Baryun steps in, and the room instantly remembers who brought the real leverage. Park tries to toast the team, like a loudmouth can wash away humiliation. But the chairman only invites the so-called guest, and the smugness starts leaking. Baryun narrows the focus, wondering if this replacement has already been accepted. Park answers with wounded pride, insisting his empire outranks Baryun's modest lane. Baryun cuts past the ego, framing this as a relaxed brotherhood drinking meet. Then he arrives looking polished, polite, and dangerous. The worst kind of prosecutor. The hallway empties into silence, like the room itself is bracing for impact. Park leans back, finally drunk enough to grin, which is never a good sign. Good liquor, good company, and Baryun already reads the room, while the chairman crowns Taeson as his only real brother, naturally, which makes this little drinking party look like a confession with expensive seats, and Park's swagger starts leaking the moment Baryun asks the wrong questions. The businessman insists it is harmless, because lying loudly always helps, sure, until Baryun's calm stare drags in the mayor and the missing truth. Then the phone drops, and suddenly nobody looks so comfortable anymore, as the chairman reaches down, lifting the evidence like it offended him personally. Baryun's eyes lock on Mayor Gu, turning the whole table into a trap, and the chairman politely excuses himself, because pressure just hit home. Inside this polished den, expensive silence hides a confession already rotting, and Barone casually lands on Mayor Gu Juntae, watchful as ever. Then the old fraud talk resurfaces, tying the car accident to politics, while Baryun's stare says, nice try, but the mask is slipping fast. In the hospital, the first case sounds trivial, almost laughably neat, until Baryun warns propofol is nobody's toy, socially speaking, obviously, because every casual convenience screams a bigger sickness underneath the surface. So when the suspect arrives, the room tightens like it expected this, and the nurse connection clicks into place, making that familiar face dangerous, because now Baryun wants the real identity, and the whole lie trembles. The hospital corridor feels calm, until the cart rolls in, and she freezes. Then the awkward recognition lands, turning her nerves into a public disaster. Baryun remembers waking inside Kang Baryun's body, and nobody here looks comforted. So he lounges like a problem, asking whether she remembers him. Period. Her panic instantly says no, which is hilarious for everyone except her. Baryun weaponizes that opening, linking her to the hospital in his coma. Her face crumples as the nurse act collapses, and his stare tightens. Now the old memory clicks, exposing she was never his assigned nurse. Because people who once tried killing Prosecutor Kang never waste a second chance, so he starts the interrogation, while she sits there folding in half. 10 years back, she entered Saron Clinic through the director's recommendation, and that cozy little favor already smells like a pipeline. Because director Lee Jongwon was under propofol scrutiny, Baryun immediately cuts through the nonsense, asking how she knew Lee Jongwon, and she clings to the bland customer-doctor excuse like it's not collapsing in public. Then the romance story comes out, proving the director never stayed professional for long, because Lee supposedly pushed propofol as a tired doctor's helper, before it was even classified, and she admits she kept using it, thinking quitting would be easy, which is adorable in the worst way, until the addiction logic hits, turning one shot into a miserable bargain she couldn't drop. Then the price tag drops, and suddenly the gift became a 500,000 won hustle, which leaves Baryun staring her down, seeing every excuse rot in real time. Baryun reads the ledger, and spots propofol abuse exploding past 100, then does the math out loud, because 50 million won doesn't magically appear, and the driver's flimsy savings excuse starts sweating harder than he is, while the 10 years addicted angle collapses. Since borrowing from nowhere is nonsense, Baryun pivots straight to desperation, framing this as pure money panic, and the woman's face cracks, because she knows the trap just closed, so he asks directly, stripping away every polished excuse left standing, then slams the real question about who ordered Kang Baryun's murder, and her expression detonates into panic, like the truth finally bit back, because Han Seon-hwa knew everything, and now the room knows it too. Baryun corners the propofol case, dangling mercy while demanding the hidden head, not the hands, and the woman panics, admitting she was paid, given an advance, and never actually did anything, so he coldly points out she woke up fine because she never got the chance to finish. Then she crumples into the director's scheme, claiming he linked her to propofol sellers, which exposes the bigger mess, because this was never hospital medicine, just dealer supply laundering, and the older story about a dying target collapses, since she insists he was already healthy. But Baryun cuts through that nonsense and names Han Seon-hwa, the anonymous tip architect, who instantly starts apologizing, promising cooperation, and begging to escape the drug shadow, even while swearing she wants a clean future and will do anything to get it, because she knew prison was possible when she filed that tip, and still did it. Baryun coolly corners the paper-thin story, demanding who hired the propofol dealer. The suspect's grand company name? Pure stagecraft, because the man was just Baek Junyoung. Even his trade empire sounds fake, a props and paper legend nobody can fully verify. Baryun presses for the face behind it, and the witness finally starts cooperating. She admits meeting him several times, which is adorable considering how nervous she looks. So Baryun orders a composite sketch, because memory beats excuses every time. Then the dealer angle widens into Saron plastic surgery, and suddenly the hospital smells rotten. He sends for the sketch artist while clerks scramble, finally feeling the trap bite. Next comes the ugly part, since another hospital may have bought from the same dealer, and just like that, one fake name starts dragging half the system into daylight. Baryun demands ministry records, then cross-checks hospital ledgers for illegal propofol. The witness admits meeting the dealer, and the case suddenly swells absurdly. Private clinics look suspicious, while general hospitals hide behind tighter systems, so the investigators narrow their search, dragging clinics into the spotlight. Now it finally feels like a proper investigation, and Baryun stays smugly composed. The office settles into a quieter grind, with paperwork piling like evidence waiting. Outside, the hospital looms in sunset silence, already smelling guilty and expensive. Inside, the pressure keeps clicking closer, as if the walls want testimony. Then the sketch arrives, and everyone straightens like the trap just bit. Baryun watches the room fill with analysts, because this mess is widening fast. The whole room freezes, because Baryun's quiet stare already smells like trouble, and the doctor's face finally gives the game away, suspiciously familiar as hell, while the purple-haired woman clocks the resemblance and starts connecting ugly dots, so she kills the warrant idea for now, knowing clinics would torch evidence, and the chairman's smug little portrait pops up, because of course he's still untouchable, but Baryun keeps that courtroom cold smile, choosing evidence over theatrics like a professional menace, as the hospital backdrop looms in daylight. looking expensive, sterile, and thoroughly guilty. Then the ledger talk lands hard, with propofol numbers making the room stiffen, because one supplier report says 30 liters, while another boasts 100, absurdly sloppy, and that contradiction hits like a slap, leaving the suspect sweating through denial. The ledger gets slapped down first, and the inflated propofol numbers already stink, while director Lee Jung-hoon immediately starts sweating, because obviously the math is snitching. Baryun then corners him on the wholesaler report, calmly exposing the tampered totals, and the director tries to dodge with a face-to-face meeting request, classic panic cosplay, but Baryun hammers in his rule for liars, demanding the maximum sentence, so the clinic side scrambles to reach the sales manager at Shindok Pharmaceuticals, except the old man finally cracks, admitting the private ledger sits on his laptop, and Baron, delightfully unimpressed, asks where that laptop is right now. Then the answer lands like a trap closing shut, right there on the table, because he has time to wait, and plenty of other dirt to roast meanwhile. Under the spotlight, the suspect caves first, promising to fetch proof, and the laptop sits there like a confession waiting to happen. Baryun keeps the pressure clean, while the man starts sweating through it. That smug little smile evaporates once the numbers get weaponized. 40 liters vanish, and Baryun immediately sniffs the obvious scam. The man stammers about handling it personally, which is adorable, because Baryun already knows the stash was sold off, not lost. So he turns, pinning the buyer to the crime like a receipt. Then the ampoule math lands, exposing a disgusting resale margin, and the hospital price gouging gets dragged out into the open. Baron's stare alone turns the room cold, like a verdict already breathing, and the old man instantly starts sweating, realizing bluffing won't save him. Then Baron drags Baek Junyong into daylight, demanding every ugly detail, because this so-called witness has been circling the truth like a coward, suddenly confessing Junyong as some legitimate traitor, with plenty of filthy side business, and yes, that includes smuggling, because of course the respectable facade was fake. He keeps nodding through the humiliation, admitting the man's overseas trips were suspicious, all those Philippines, Taiwan, Hong Kong stories sounding less like business and more cover, until Baryun lands the real hook, the propofol pipeline from a hospital source, and the old man finally spills the racket: surplus drugs, payments, and corruption. Incheon's office tower looms like a polished lie, and the next pressure round begins. Inside, a clerk keeps the records moving while Baryun closes in on the evidence. Then the phone flashes Baek Junyong's face, a smug little souvenir of crime. Baryun coolly labels him a Southeast Asia smuggler, and the room starts sweating. The black-haired contact answers without drama, promising to check the encrypted file. He claims the lockup made the target more productive, which is adorable nonsense. Baryun gives a dry reply, because the trap is already halfway shut. Elsewhere, Taesin's corporate headquarters stands there like a monument to bad decisions. Two suited figures stride through the corridor, carrying the next squeeze, and the man in back asks if the file is nearly cracked, because of course it is. Locked up? Baryun muses, already smelling a disaster they can't contain, while the blonde rat admits he panicked underground and tried slipping out at dawn, then blames Park Junseong's goons for spotting him, as if that helps his dignity, but Baryun coolly says the manhunt's dead now, and Song Il-gwan's ghost can relax. Then he flashes that infuriating little smile, because apparently crime came with homework. As the office door opens and the next round of pressure strolls in wearing suits, Baryun checks whether the file's decoded, and the blonde contact pretends he's only mostly confused. Then a USB pops out like the tiniest trophy in a very ugly war. Baryun goes quiet for a beat, clearly reading the room and the damage, and the spreadsheet finally spills the numbers that make everyone sweat. Baryun spots a ledger, and the grin says trouble just got paperwork, a bribery log naming officials, dates, and amounts, plus insurance nobody asked for. The chain leads back to WB Holdings, where one writer looks suddenly innocent, because this isn't just bribes, it's a ranking sheet for the guilty. Baryun checks the USB, and the whole thing feels less like evidence, more leverage. Most names are tiny firms, so this monster reads like a reward ledger. Then he twists the knife, calling it a contribution list instead, which stings worse. The blonde contact promises payment and freedom, like crime was a freelance gig, but Park Junseong's men still loom nearby, so he offers protection too. Even that joke collapses fast, because the blonde idiot wants out, not a prison upgrade. The gray-suited fixer coolly says his side won't come looking anymore, and that's ugly, because the blonde guy instantly folds, looking like confidence just left the building. Then Baryun keeps the leash tight, ordering the phone to stay on, no drama, and the blonde idiot nods along, already sounding owned by the whole arrangement. With the apartment looming outside, the setup shifts from threat to payoff. and suddenly the same clown is home, grinning into his phone like he won the lottery, until Baryun's message lands. And the fool realizes he's being handled like a dog because a fresh 100 million won deposit hits, loud enough to rewrite his face. His eyes get wide, sweat starts pouring, and greed starts fighting survival. Then the number sinks in fully, and 100 million won becomes his new religion. Baryun's voice lands like a leash, and the clown instantly volunteers obedience. As the skyline hangs cold, the setup starts smelling like a corporate payoff. Inside the office, he sits dead calm, already 3 moves ahead. Then a file drawer opens, and the hidden paperwork finally starts breathing. Baryun gets the same old déjà vu, because shameless guests always return. The materials hit the table, and the first smart mouth starts cracking. One drawer after another slides open, spitting out the receipts they buried. Baryun stoops over the evidence wall, calmly stitching their lies together. Suddenly, the legislature becomes marketing, and clean energy gets weaponized for optics. By the end, offshore wind exports rise, and the whole scam looks smaller. Baryun stare cuts through the room, already smelling something rotten, and the files confirm his hunch, because the USB ledger matches perfectly. From Haidong Power to Gamjin Solar, the renewable names keep piling up. Then the stock surge traces back to Mayor Gu Juntae's polished little promotion, so naturally everyone panics when Baryun asks who handed him that ledger, because the answer points to an insider, someone with shameless access to illegal funds, and the chairman's side starts posturing, pretending this mess is some business inconvenience, until Baryun spots the copied company trail and raises an eyebrow at the pattern. The old scam finally slips, and even the smug faces start looking embarrassed, because the trail ends at Samjeon Trading Company, and that name says everything. So apparently Baek Junyong's trading firm is the latest cleanup kingpin, and Baryun's materials already pin Samjeon Trading to the whole mess, with those steady payments screaming bribery louder than any excuse could, because Gus environmental firm hype and the cash trail overlap way too neatly. Flashback 3 years, and the whole scam starts smelling familiar, when CEO Go Byung-shik and the golf club bromance looked almost innocent. But Baryun keeps poking the story, because yeah, coincidence is doing heavy lifting, until the chairman admits the overlap, like hiding it was ever classy. Then the committee brag starts surfacing, all those clean industry speeches suddenly sounding purchased, and the final lie lands beautifully. Go launched innovation because the vision was handed to him. The huge clean innovation money trail suddenly lands on Mayor Gu, and Baryun smells a setup, because the chairman's camp keeps swearing there was never any collusion. Sure, buddy. While the bookkeeping defense collapses, since no money moved, allegedly, ever, and Baryun coolly drags the environmental bribery angle into the open. Zero theatrics. All pressure. Then the room cuts to the old office, where the paper trail gets boxed and sorted, because this little operation was always going to be refiled as fraud, not genius, and the chairman flat out humiliates the excuses, calling out the empty evidence, before telling Baryun he'll be reassigned soon. Like that ends the problem, leaving Baryun to smirk at Mayor Gus' name and promise another round. Eventually, while the clerk quietly keeps packing the case files, because the scam is still alive, Baryun raises an eyebrow, because someone just dropped something worth dissecting, and the first clue is that painfully neat little envelope. Naturally, inside sits a letter and USB, the kind of gift nobody orders, so he swaps the will for the note, already smelling a setup. Then his old ally's speech lands like a farewell, wrapped in loyalty and defeat, because whatever this is, it's bigger than one case, or one building. The news cuts in with a dead man at a Seoul hotel. Great timing, and the report pins Kim's 9 p.m. Death to the room, supposedly clean, except the police found no suicide note, no forced entry, and absolutely no dignity for the story, which means this simple death is looking more staged than honest. Meanwhile, Baryun is reading Gu Juntae's shadowy little courtship, and the room smells rotten already, because this aide to the mayor looks clean, while the truth keeps tripping over itself. Then the desk gift lands like a trap, with a note, USB, and zero innocence, and that loyal-sounding farewell message practically screams setup, dressed up as respect, so he checks the drive, only to find the so-called evidence playing hide-and-seek, which is hilarious, since the empty USB still gets treated like a confession, and Baryun knows there's a second layer buried under the neat little lie, until the phone buzzes with a new file, like the case just got cockier, revealing a decrypted attachment labeled for his inbox, not some random courier. So now he's asking the real nightmare question, whether Mayor Gus Aide scheduled this death. The trap lands on the desk with a USB, neat as a lie, and Baryun's glasses catch the clue before anyone can play innocent, because the ledger hits harder than a confession, and that's embarrassing. Now has staring down Mayor Gus' secret dealings, rewinding everything, From the rooftop meeting where two power players tried posturing like gods, to the chairman's cold reminder that promises only matter when leverage survives, while the chairman calmly demands the quality of information, not excuses, then the director pitches another payoff, grinning like failure isn't free, so Baryun accepts the envelope of truth and keeps the pressure climbing, leaving the whole room frozen, wondering what fresh disaster that file unlocks. So now the chairman's grinning. And poor Baryun gets the threat package. That suit gets swatted aside, because leverage is apparently free entertainment here. Baryun's face says everything, and none of it is confidence, while Tayson's memorialized shadow hangs there like a dead man's punchline. Then the prosecutor hits the floor mentally, realizing this rot is real. Back at the office, he's overworked, disgusted, and neck-deep in nightmare fuel. The paper trail finally lands on Saron plastic surgery, and things get ugly. Raids hit clinics buying propofol like amateurs playing doctor with consequences, and the leniency pitch to Jo Hyjin sounds polite only if you're delusional. By the end, she's trembling on the couch, because the trap already closed. Baryun coolly lays out treatment, suspension, and reporting, while sounding merciless, and the poor woman bows like gratitude can wash the whole mess clean. Then she nervously drags up the other charge, because apparently subtlety died today. As Baryun identifies the murder allegation and buries it without blinking, his smile says, "The law can wait," which is rich coming from a prosecutor, because sometimes he is the law, and sometimes he is the problem, too. Then the scene jumps to the airport, where the handoff looks almost routine, and the first traveler casually thanks Go Jung-suk, like this isn't shady at all, while Yoon Seonya smiles through the transfer, acting innocent with Olympic-level audacity, and the suitcase rolls by like evidence, just begging to ruin somebody's day. Even the sniffer dog is tense, because this airport mess reeks of trouble, and that cold stare says someone already knows the transfer is rotten, while Yoon Seonja plays innocent, casually asking for the gift back, like stealing, returning, and re-stealing evidence is some charming hobby. Then the suitcase opens, and the whole scam spills out smiling, which sends the room into full panic, because subtlety died ages ago. As Yoon Seonya turns to look back, already sensing the trap tightening, and the dog noses the box like it wants the truth, not crumbs. Then the bundles scatter, flashing the dirty payoff everyone hoped to bury. Now even the guards freeze, because Baryun has them cornered on sight. The airport clown thought the gift was his, but Baryun had other plans, because Go Jung-suk's story was already cracking, and not originally hers either. Then Yoon Seonya got pressed about a pillbox, playing dumb beautifully, with the kind of denial that screams guilt louder than a megaphone, but Baryun kept leaning in, turning innocence into a very expensive joke, and by the time the table froze, had proven she was calculating, so the next round hit her with cold logic, not theatrics, dragging her smug, country-saving routine into the Taiwan nightmare she dodged, where arrest would have been instant, and she'd have slipped away cleanly. Instead, she sat there sweating, every excuse collapsing into helpless panic. Baryun gets a fresh lead, and the hallway suddenly feels like a crime scene, because the mother is panicking now, with guilt leaking everywhere like cheap perfume. Then the old man starts spinning mercy talk, pretending that was ever going to save him, while Baryun quietly nails the contradiction, and the woman's excuse routine starts dying, because she only came to see him, and somehow that became her whole defense, but the prosecutor is already done entertaining it, politely ordering the drama outside, so the door shuts, and the room loses its last pathetic shield. Then the old man admits the daughter showed up by accident, not loyalty, and the shame hits so hard he can barely face her, let alone lie, while Baryun turns the knife with logic, demanding the drug runner and the real boss. The white-haired woman starts by calling this punishment for her sins, and then admits she once lived comfortably, spoiled by that madam title, but her husband's business crashed, leaving her drowning in debt, obviously, so she raised their daughter alone while the bills kept devouring her, and now she swears she never did anything wrong. How convenient. Except her hands, her exhaustion, and those useless fingerprints scream otherwise, because loan sharks squeezed her harder, while the debt barely shrank, until one offer promised a miracle, if she fetched a package from Taiwan, naturally, where illegal jobs always wear a friendly smile, and Baryun nails the obvious, calling the whole thing criminal from the start. A shady package lands on the table, and Baryun instantly smells drugs. Then the broken debtor starts confessing, blaming loan sharks for her desperation, which somehow led to threats involving her daughter, because criminals love family leverage, and Baryun's stare turns colder, while her excuses collapse into pure panic. She begs for mercy by implication, claiming cooperation will protect her child, as if that suddenly makes the whole setup classy instead of criminal. while the prosecutor calmly promises testimony in prosecution, no theatrics needed, and the poor woman folds harder. Realizing the trap already owns her, Baryun then names the protection angle, pinning the family pressure racket in place, and the final clue points to Cheon Yongshik, the man ordering everything. Baryun hears one name and instantly knows the rot runs deeper, because the cornered witness admits he dragged Jung-suk in out of cowardice, and the older man finally coughs up a rough memory, which is almost embarrassing, so Baryun calmly tells the clerk to write everything down. No mercy for vagueness. Then he orders Taiwan prosecutors contacted, and Cheon Yongshik flagged for arrest, while the panicked man blurts about an emergency arrest, as if surprise were a defense, and that smug little grin really says he thought this would stay tidy, until Baryun drops drug import and trafficking charges, making the whole room fold. Then the black sedan waits outside like the next body is already on schedule. Inside the sedan, the blonde driver hypes up Waryong's mad dog, already bragging too early, while Baryun sits there unreadable, the kind of calm that usually means somebody's doomed, because the driver claims he watched the punk get wrecked firsthand, then tries acting scholarly about fight etiquette, like street thugs ever need a rules manual, and Taesin's crew only laughs after testing the waters, until one reckless bastard swings first, gets flattened instantly, and learns manners the expensive way. Baryun stays ice-cold through the boasting, already judging the guy who thinks violence makes him smart, because he is the type to hit back at insults, which is almost cute until it gets ugly. Then the blonde suddenly backpedals, whining about concern while Baryun's grin says he's not buying it. Fine. And outside, the black sedan waits by the building, like the next disaster already parked on schedule. The black sedan idles like trouble already parked outside the building, and inside, that smug crew piles in, pretending they own the night, because Kim Byung-jin's tower is the backdrop for this lovely little ambush, while the clueless punk outside finally asks who these brats are. Then reality answers with a sudden cleanup, bodies folding fast under pressure, as the hallway turns into a panic museum and the thugs lose posture. Kim Byung-jin steps into frame, cool enough to freeze weaker men, and the close-up says these guys are minors, which makes their swagger hilarious, because the final stare from the dark-haired one says someone is already doomed. Kim Byung-jin stands there like a boardroom king, while the hallway starts tightening. Then the blonde driver panics and blurts for backup, already smelling disaster. Baryun answers with violence, and the smug suit folds in one clean hit, because cocky faces always collapse the fastest when the truth hits back. Taesin's shadow hangs over it all, making the whole stunt feel pitiful. Then Baryun keeps swinging, and the room turns into a humiliating demolition. Seo Dongwook finally loses that polished smile, realizing he is next, while the battered crew staggers around Kim Byung-jin, and someone calls out for help. Jae-ho gets named in the chaos, which means this mess just got uglier. The blonde driver starts sweating, already begging someone to handle the damage, but the white-shirted brute answers with a warning that sounds embarrassingly confident. Outside, the high-rise becomes a shutdown order, and the crew scrambles instantly, while the kneeling muscle men look tough until the room starts owning them. Then Cheon Yongshik gets named, and suddenly his whole swagger looks rented, because that hard stare only works before the pressure actually lands. Now the threat is simple. Disappear cleanly or surrender the turf, and even the suited watcher can tell the strongman is blinking first, so the building holds the silence while he finally gives it over. The investigation locks onto a glassy office block, where the pressure starts, and Baryun arrives looking like trouble in a perfectly tailored suit. Then the alley answer detonates with a trash bin blast, real subtle, while the old man panics as if noise alone makes him innocent. Baryun hears the floor impact, the plastic rustle, and smells the lie, so the driver instantly backpedals, sweating through that brave face routine, but the prosecutor barely blinks, just stares him into silence, and suddenly the whole conversation folds as the hidden truth surfaces, leaving the black-haired witness trembling, while Baryun keeps his grip tight. Baryun's stare already says the room picked the wrong prosecutor, and that grip on the arm screams, no bodies, slipping past his scan today, because the target's little escape plan is collapsing in broad daylight, while the old man begs for tailing orders like panic makes him smart. Then Baryun snaps the leash shut, ordering the arrest and seizure, and his squad marches in like the room's overdue bill collector, right up to Cheon Yongshik's door, where the knock lands like a verdict. As the suspect starts talking tough, Baryun basically ruins the performance, and the final command to come out now leaves nobody pretending anymore. Baryun slips in cold as the door cracks open, and the room tenses. That blank stare says everything, because panic is already looking expensive. The caller wants the goods dumped fast, before seizure turns them into proof, so the idiot behind the phone suddenly calculates, like bravery ever paid rent. Baryun shuts it down with one clean move, because drugs were always the punchline. Then the handle turns, and the whole setup starts opening like a trap. Inside, the car aftermath looks ugly, with one body left for the cleanup crew. Baryun spots Yongshik and calls him out, which is never a good omen. The poor fool starts sweating bullets, realizing his big talk just became evidence. Baryun corners the smug bastard, and his confidence starts evaporating. Then the whole parking garage erupts as reality finally punches back hard, because his flying strike lands clean, turning bravado into a messy collapse, and the prosecutor follows through, pinning him like a solved inconvenience. While the fool tries to recover, Baryun keeps pressing, merciless and precise. With the situation already neutralized, his cocky act becomes pure embarrassment. Then even standing up looks impossible, so he drops to one knee, and Baryun's stare alone tells him the joke is over. Permanently. By the end, the bloodied brute is shaking under that red nightmare.